He logged into the game just to make some money for tuition fees, and honestly, he wasn't even that good, until one random gamble with an old man changed everything. He walked away with a rare item which brought him luck, and from that moment on, everything started going his way. Rare drops, hidden quests, impossible wins. Now while other players grind for progress, he's out here breaking the system with pure luck, in a world where even the NPCs are starting to fight back. Circuit is a VR game that has amassed a record-breaking 50 million players online simultaneously, and 400 million total users in the first month since its release. Circuit's dizzying success can be attributed to one single reason: the creation of the perfect virtual reality. Even those who turned up their noses at the game and said it couldn't be done are now busy creating their own world in Circuit. He too was one of those former skeptics. But now he's sitting in his tiny apartment enjoying the sea breeze in Circuit. The protagonist took a deep breath. His name is Lee Kiho, and he's a Circuit player. His name here is Mose. After a while, he heard a shout. "Hey, him!" He turned around in surprise and asked, "What?" The guy behind him pointed to the side and yelled, "If he wants to stare into space, maybe he should find another place? He's just getting in the way of their work." And the MC held his hands out in front of him and apologized. The man walked on and yelled that they are all cleaners here, so he shouldn't get in the way. They are slime cleaners. As Circuit achieved unprecedented success, in-game money and items became more important than real currency. Currently, Circuit has 3 ranks for artifacts. Common ones are unremarkable and worth little, but magical artifacts of higher levels are a different story. They grant additional stat points. With each new stat point, they level up. Obtaining artifacts with +1 is equivalent to gaining +1 to the player's level. Stat points significantly increase physical abilities in the game. For example, a common person will fight like a professional boxer if they wear a ring with +3 strength. Therefore, magical artifacts, even with a single stat point, are valued at no less than 10 million won. What can be said about rare items? Only rumors, as no one has been able to find a single one since the game's release, and it is unknown whether there is a rank higher than rare. In other words, the magic rank is currently the most prestigious, and slimes are the simplest monsters from which artifacts can be obtained. But because of this, a huge number of players hunt rather harmless slimes in the hopes of hitting the jackpot. These are called slime cleaners. But of course, the chance of obtaining a magical artifact is extremely small. At that moment, the guy looked at the slime's body and said desperately, "Nothing again." The protagonist looked at it and thought that he had been hunting slimes for 2 months already, but still hadn't obtained anything magical. He sighed loudly and said, "It's time to take stock." Sometime later, in the seaside town of Lindirk, he walked down a busy street and, stopping at a shop, shouted in surprise, "What? 20 silver?" The worker replied, "Yeah, they're literally bringing in buckets of slime these days. Too many people are trying to sell it." Then the MC looked at the coins in his hand and said, "But even so, the price has halved in just 1 day." And he spread his arms wide and said that this was all he had to offer. So was he selling or not? He replied, yes, he had to take it. After that, he sat down on a bench and, sighing loudly, thought that he had hunted all day and only earned 20 silver coins. In real money terms, that's only 20,000 won. Besides, due to the huge number of hunters, slimes were becoming fewer. He looked at the sky and thought that for 2 months he had lived in hope of knocking a magic item out of them. What was the result? He had earned only 5 gold coins from selling all sorts of little things. At that moment, an iron sword was standing next to him, a beginner's weapon. Its normal durability, 4 out of 25, the durability of his weapon, low. He thought that the sword's durability was running low, it would break soon, and 5 gold coins wouldn't be enough to buy a new one. Stupid game. No, an idiotic game, where everything is decided by luck. Tears appeared in the corner of his eye. He said he'd been working hard for 2 months, trying to save up for college. If he'd known it would end like this, he would have given up on trying to get artifacts, and just enjoyed the game or spent more time working on his part-time job. Yeah, he scratched his head and said it was time to finish. But first, the inventory. He summoned the system window, then looked at the coins in his hand and thought, 2 months of hellish labor and 5 gold. That's about 500,000 won. But he felt bad about just exchanging that. He was quitting the game anyway. Maybe he should do something like that before he left. He folded his arms across his chest, and then, hearing a sound, he looked to the side and thought there was some kind of noise. People had gathered in one place. People were crowding around the guy and shouting, "Come on, he has to open it." This is already his 8th. And at that moment, he looked anxiously at the item in his hand and begged, please. He was begging to open it. The next second, everything around was covered in smoke, and a fish with a human face appeared in front of him. The system window said, "Inedible creepy face." People around started laughing loudly and shouting, "What is this? God, that's crap." And the guy, bursting into tears, ran off in the other direction. Watching what was happening, the protagonist noticed that it looked like a lottery. Then the man said, "You should play a couple more times, kid." He would have won something then, but he gave up. So gentlemen, are there any more players? For 5 gold coins, you can win real treasure here. The protagonist looked at him in surprise and thought, 5 gold coins in one try? What a scam. Then the man looked at him and said, "Hey kid." He can see that he's itching to try it. He pointed his finger at him and asked, "Will he try his luck?" And he looked surprised. "What?" He waved his hands and said, "No, because he's just..." The man said, He shouldn't be afraid. He's special. He feels it and sees it. A source of luck is hidden within him. He's been waiting for someone like this for a long time. At that moment, the guy next to the protagonist said he'd already said that. And the MC approached the man and, sighing, thought, who cares? He said he agrees, and the man said, oh my god, he's grateful. After a while, the protagonist looked out the window and thought he was glad he was able to escape the crowd. In short, he spent the rest of his money on this thing. He was both sad and happy because the end was near. Looking back, he realized he had nothing to remember. All he did was catch slimes. And then he looked at the item in his hand and said, it's decided. He'll check the contents and exit the game. Open. Then he threw the item forward. It glowed brightly, and he was surprised. What? When Circuit achieved unprecedented success, in-game money and items became more important than real-world currency. Magical artifacts are now the most prestigious, with items with even a single stat point valued at no less than 10 million won. He said this had never happened before. The item cracked, and the light grew even brighter, shining through the closed windows. Then the protagonist fell to the floor. A rift in space appeared before him, and from it, a pendant descended onto his arm. A system window also appeared, stating, Florin Star Rare Type Pendant, Strength +7, Health +4, Agility +4, Intelligence +3, Health Regeneration +17. 7 units per second, health regeneration +4 units per second, form aura, range 250 meters, story, her love, her soulmate, before parting, she blesses him. Let this pendant be his glimmer of hope in the darkest of times. From Erilyn, wife of Florin, commander of the Langer's cavalcade. Then the protagonist asked perplexed, rare? Sometime later, on Circuit TV, Jihyun said, on Circuit TV, their source of Circuit news. This is Jihyun, the second streamer from the Republic of Korea. The topic of the day is new artifacts. And the first item today, by the way, was recently bought, and it was the highest price in the entire history of the auction. Inez's ring, which went under the hammer for 72 million won. Then she showed a system window, which said, Inez's ring, magic type, ring health recovery +4 units per second. She said they say the ring dropped from the boss of the northern region. Its particularly notable effect is health recovery. Healing is considered the rarest ability of all known magical abilities. This artifact has a 4th value class, the highest today, and was sold for a record price. Ina's ring even surpassed the 63 million won speed ring, and became the most valuable artifact yet. People watching on the big screen were amazed. Health recovery +4? What's that? 72 million? That's how much a new car costs. Then Jihyun added that as for the second item, it has a top-tier effect. The Langer's Cavalcade necklace, which grants +3 strength, bought for 39 million won. It only confirmed the popularity of its effect. Then MC said in surprise, wow. He thought he'd always thought a world of such prices was far removed from him, or had been until yesterday evening. He looked at the pendant in his hand. Rare artifacts in other games are considered trash because there are better items, but in the recently released Circuit, it's the opposite. The most valuable items at auctions are still magical, so this could be the first rare artifact in the world. Then the protagonist burst out laughing. He clutched the pendant in his hand and, laughing even louder, shouted, damn it! He'd hit the jackpot. Tears streamed down his face and he said, oh shit! He knelt down and, illuminated by the light from the window, thought he was grateful the star had come to him. Wait, come to think of it, how much is this worth? The Florin star's effects are worth much more than magical ones. On top of that, the most popular effect, health recovery, is worth 17.7 units per second. The price will definitely exceed 100 million, or even 10, or even 20 billion. He won't have to worry about paying for college. He'll be able to buy not only a nice apartment, but maybe even a car. Then he called up the system window and said, okay, there's an auction somewhere. Then he went to the auction, looked at the pendant, and thought, I want to try this. They say even 3 extra strength stat points puts him on a whole new level. He couldn't even properly damage a slime, and a high-ranking player took advantage of that. Could he play like a leader? Then he looked at the pendant again and said, thinking about everything he'd been through, someone else would definitely have sold it. But couldn't he treat himself a little for the first time in 2 months? Then he looked at the system window again and thought, sure, he could. Besides, there was always time to put the star up for auction. What a disgraceful build. With these thoughts, he looked at his stats. They said, class, traveler, level 9, health 80 out of 80, mana 30, strength 6, health 5, agility, intelligence 5. He sighed, and then put the pendant on himself, and the numbers on his stats began to change. He screamed, damn it! He fell onto the bed and thought, so this is an upgrade to level 18 for 18. Why fake the pain so convincingly? It's just a game. He swears it won't be any easier when he has to remove the pendant. Then he called up his inventory and easily bent the coin with his fingers. He thought, wow, he can really do that now. So that's why everyone is going so crazy about artifacts. After that, he sat up and thought, how about testing the artifact in action? After a while, the airships flew on. From the center of the continent, you can easily reach any region. Finding allies to play with won't be difficult. There are plenty of players here. After all, the most popular city among players is located in the center, called Asparatan. At that moment, MC was walking down the street and thought, wow, as expected, everyone here is rich. Did he think too much of himself, coming here? Honestly, besides the star, all he has is an old sword. He's sure that finding a team with such equipment will be difficult. Then he went up to the notice board and asked if there were any solo quests. At that moment, Sharon approached him and asked if he was a swordsman. He turned around in surprise, looking at her, and she smiled and said that if she wasn't mistaken, he needed a team, right? He looked around in surprise and, pointing at himself, asked, him? But yes, but... Before he could finish speaking, she took his hands and, smiling, said that she had just the right spot in her party. Did he want to join them? After a while, Vincent looked at Guile and asked where Sharon had gone. What if they missed even one raid? And Guile smiled and suggested they wait a little longer. Sharon knew what she was doing. At that moment, she approached them and, waving her hand, shouted, Uncle. Guile pointed his finger at her and said, oh, there she is. And she said, she already said she'd find someone. Look, they should say hello. Vincent looked at the protagonist in surprise, thinking he had beginner's gear. At that moment, he smiled awkwardly and said it was nice to meet him. He wondered, what about the sword? It was about to break. Then he leaned toward Sharon and whispered that he understood they were in a hurry, but didn't she think she brought a complete noob? She whispered back that he shouldn't be afraid, Uncle. Looks can be deceiving. He was the strongest player in the square, and he noticed he looked like a greenhorn. She thought she was surprised too. His gear did leave much to be desired, but the guy clearly outclassed everyone around him. Then, she used Keen Eye Level 2. It increases observation, which is crucial for an archer. When focusing on a player, it allows you to determine their approximate skill level. At that moment, Silborn approached them and said, it looks like they're ready. Vincent turned around and said, yes, Mr. Silborn, their quartet is assembled. At that moment, the protagonist looked at him in surprise and thought, Silborn, the leader of the Silver Guild and the famous mage Silborn. They say he has as many as 5 magical artifacts. Then he smiled and said, excellent, they can move out. He wondered if they would really fight alongside him. After that, Silborn climbed up onto the hill and waving his hand, shouted, attention. He was grateful that they had decided to join the troll hunt led by the Silver Guild. The protagonist thought in surprise, a troll hunt? A troll is one of the low-level monsters, but it has an aggressive nature and a high regenerative capacity. A creature with terrifying strength, capable of crushing a boulder with one hand. Such an opponent should not be underestimated. MC wondered if he could handle it. At that moment, Guile smiled and said, by the way, the beasts are very vicious, so it's best not to run into them. They'll chase him until they kill him, and they move in groups. In short, trolls are tough opponents. Vincent added, but fire and magic terrify them, and they run relatively slowly. If he'd hunted before, such prey would seem easy to him. The main thing is, they'll make money on this. The protagonist asked, money, right? Then Sharon approached them and told him to listen. Anything he can get from a troll is quite expensive. For example, its blood. It's used to make high-quality potions. There's also demand for troll skin and bones. These parts are used to craft cool equipment, so usually, large guilds hunt these creatures. Vincent smiled and remarked that they were lucky to be involved at all. Sharon looked at him and said, by the way, the rumors were true. The Silver Guild really is recruiting new members. That's why everyone is so tense. And Guile sighed and waving his hand, said that a couple of drops of troll blood would be enough for him. At least he could pay for his studies. Then the protagonist looked at him and asked, Guile, is he a student too? And he smiled and scratched the back of his head and said, yeah, he earns his tuition by playing. And in response, he smiled and said that he also came here because of his studies. Guile gave him a thumbs up and said, so it turns out they are brothers in misfortune. They will farm together. And at that moment, Sharon folded her arms across her chest and said that she wanted to go back to university. Vincent looked at her and asked, is there a problem at work again? She asked, could it be any different, living paycheck to paycheck? At that moment, the man shouted, ladies and gentlemen, I want your attention. They should get closer. He'll tell them their plan now. After a while, Silborn smiled, looking at the system window, and said, okay, troll hunt. Can they deploy their maps? For the past few days, the members of the Silver Guild have been risking their lives to set traps for the troll in several places. Now, the plan. First, they lure the troll into the traps laid out along its path, one after another. When it hits the last one, they all attack it together, and then the mission will be accomplished. Humans move much faster than trolls. Following the plan, they should be able to catch one of them quickly and safely. The others were surprised. Wow, the famous guild has everything planned out as expected. And MC placed his hand on the pendant around his neck and thought that he wanted to enjoy his new abilities, but apparently he wouldn't be fighting anyone one-on-one. At that moment, Guile asked, is that fair? Vincent folded his arms and asked, well, they can't change anything, right? After that, Guile called Mose to the system window and told him to take a look. There wasn't a single member of the Silver Guild on the troll lure team. Vincent looked at this thoughtfully and said that they would most likely all be in the vanguard attacking. They were probably trying to squeeze out participation points. Killing them gives more. And Sharon said that she was grateful they'd at least invited her. They didn't know. What if they got something magical? The protagonist looked at her and thought, so just because he's on the team doesn't mean he'll fight with everyone else, and the rewards are distributed automatically based on the number of points. Then Silborn spread his arms and told them to show their best and do a great job. After a while, they reached the third trap zone. The member walked forward and, turning slightly, said, so they just need to find the troll, huh? The guy behind him looked at the system window and said, exactly. When they meet him, they shouldn't lure him into a trap right away. And he smiled and asked, are the silver ones going to fight him? Cool. Once they accept them, I bet they'll be doing nothing but hunting too, huh? He laughed and said, yeah, easy. Then the guy said, he should watch his step, idiot. The next second, his eyes widened in surprise when he noticed that one of their squad members had a monster grabbing his head and starting to crush it. Several more monsters appeared from behind the bushes and the guys screamed in fear. Damn, how many are there? They started running in the opposite direction, shouting that they needed to run. Damn it. Easy, of course. He should shut up and run. At that moment, the trolls resolutely ran after them, and they, running into the clearing, turned and shouted, damn it, where's the trap? Someone's ahead among the trees. This way, quickly. Finally, the boy then reached for the sword behind his back and turning sharply, shouted, damn trolls, this is what's coming for them. Before he could finish speaking, he slipped and fell to the ground. He was in liquid and asked, what the hell is this? Viscous oil? Why him and not him? The system reported that viscous oil, a thief class ability, immobilizes anyone caught in it, explodes on contact with fire. At that moment, he looked ahead in surprise, noticing how the trolls had grabbed the boy who had been running with him shortly before. He screamed in fear, help, they have to get him out. But those present were watching, and one of them said, he's imagining it now. And the guy thought, really? Then Silborn took out his staff and, concentrating his energy, said, idiots. He directed a beam of energy forward, creating an explosion. And then he took off his glasses and said that he already told them that this would be a quick and safe hunt. Well, who's next? Hurry. Meanwhile, the location's boss, the Black Mountain Troll, approached the territory. His eyes burned with rage, and MC held a sword in his hands and looked at him. Then Vincent said, seriously, he can handle the troll alone. Sharon said, yeah, right. Then he slammed his hand on the shield and asked what his attack power was. He couldn't hurt him. She smiled and said that then, when they meet, Uncle fights the troll and doesn't run away. Giles smiled and said that later they will all tell everyone that he died a hero's death. And he shouted in irritation, are they already burying him? And in this way? And Giles stepped back and shouted that she had started it all. At that moment, a troll on the cliff top next to them stepped on a fragile branch and made a noise. The protagonist looked away, and Sharon asked, what's wrong, Mose? He pointed at the cliff and said that there was someone there. Then she looked ahead in surprise, and a huge troll jumped down right in front of them. He instantly swung his weapon and was ready to strike, but the next second, Vincent held up a shield in front of the troll's weapon, blocking its attack. He gritted his teeth, and then the troll threw him aside. Guile cried out in alarm. Uncle, the protagonist asked. A troll? A huge monster stood before him. He thought, is this what it looks like? They've been told otherwise? Is this what he's supposed to fight? A chill ran through him, and he felt a thirst for blood. He thought he was going to die. The next second, several arrows flew forward from behind him, and he covered himself with his hands, blocking the attack. Sharon continued to aim at the monster, then turned and shouted, Uncle, and at that moment, Vincent charged again. His eyes blazed with rage. He hit the monster with his shield, then pushed off the ground again and used a shield strike. The system reported, class feature, any, shield required. Hits the target, pushes it back. He threw the troll aside, but it managed to grab a tree and skidded to a stop with its feet on the ground, and it growled angrily. And Vincent frowned and asked, what? Sharon shouted, Uncle, is he okay? Yes, but the damage was 0, even though the blow was full force. She said the arrows were useless too. What should they do? And the protagonist held his sword in front of him and asked if maybe they could lure one into a trap. They said it was easy, considering the troll's slowness. But Guile reached into his bag and said, this troll seems unusual. Judging by its size and appearance, it looks more like a quest boss. He agreed, that's right. Besides, it came to them alone. Guile said that trolls usually move in groups of 4. They just had to take a look at it. MC asked, can they kill it? And Vincent looked at Guile and asked, what do you think? He took out a potion and said, even if he debuffs its regeneration, its defense level is still high. Vincent drank the potion and said that in that case, there was only one thing to do. They had to hold off the troll until the Silver Guild arrived. At that moment, the huge monster swung its weapon and struck in front of itself, and the party members sharply dodged. Sharon appeared behind the monster and aimed 2 arrows, then released it and screamed, how annoying. And Vincent looked at her and shouted, Sharon, get back. Mose, he should be distracting him from the side. The protagonist shouted, yes. Then he thought, what the hell is he even doing here? They've been playing together for a long time and working as a team. These are the kind of people who truly enjoy Circuit. Compared to them, he was just an idiot, living in hopes of hitting the jackpot and killing slimes day after day for 2 months. He really wanted to have a real adventure, just like this. Then he heard Vincent call out to him. He looked at the troll who was swinging his weapon and thought, this is the end for him. But the next second, Vincent was next to him and pushed the monster away with his shield. He looked at the protagonist and shouted that he had to pull himself together, and he wondered, could someone like him change if he started this journey later than everyone else? He clenched his teeth and thought, no more than a little bit is enough. He'll do it right now. With these words, he pushed off the ground sharply, concentrated energy in his sword, and struck the troll's hand. But the next second his sword split in two, and the system reported that the weapon's durability was 0. He looked in bewilderment at the remains of his weapon and thought, "Oh shit!" The next second, the monster's attack sent the protagonist flying back and screaming loudly, and then he fell to the ground. The system reported that his health was less than 20%. Leather gauntlets' durability was 0. Leather gauntlets were broken. At that moment, Chiron shouted, "He's coming, get away!" Then the troll launched an attack, and Guile covered himself with his hands and flew far back. He skidded to a stop on the ground, and at that moment Chiron drew her bowstring and said that this troll could take out any of them with one blow. She screamed that they should move away so he wouldn't get so angry. "Uncle!" Vincent ran forward and shouted that he heard. He ran toward the troll, and at that moment it grabbed a tree, uprooted it, and began to attack Vincent. But he swung his shield, and hitting the monster in the leg, shouted for it to take it. The next second, the trolls screamed loudly and then prepared to attack. Vincent continued to hold the shield to its leg, and Guile called out to him in alarm. He looked back sharply. The next second, there was an explosion, and MC, sitting up, clutched his head and asked, "Is he still alive?" Then he looked at his hands in surprise, and the system reported that his stamina had been restored. He was surprised and thought he had recovered. So this is what the regeneration effect everyone dreams of looks like. Suddenly, then he abruptly looked away, hearing Vincent's name. At that moment the monster attacked Vincent with a huge tree, but he held out his shield in front of himself, trying to defend himself, and the protagonist thought, "No way!" He screamed, "Uncle!" Vincent's body began to tremble, but he continued to hold the shield. Then he turned around and shouted, "Chiron!" She fired an arrow. It hit the troll right in the eye. He grabbed his head and screamed loudly, then began to hit with his hand, hitting the shield on Vincent's back, and he held on with the last of his strength and frowning, thought, "Damn, is this how it will end?" The next second, MC suddenly ran forward. He jumped at the troll, throwing him aside, and then turned around in surprise and thought, "Huh?" Guile, looking at him, shouted, "What was that his just now? A throw with a bend." And the main character stopped and, trying to catch his breath, thought that he didn't expect to knock down such a colossus. And then Guile called out to him, and he looked at him and shouted, "Is he okay?" He answered, "Yes, and here's Uncle." Then he was surprised, looking at Vincent's body, which began to glow. He asked, "Is this the healing light?" The protagonist looked at the glow around him and, spreading his arms, wondered, "Is this what restoring teammates' health means?" Streams of energy flowed into Vincent's head. Then he raised his head in surprise and said, "The life bar is full." Then Chiron asked, "Restoring teammates' health? What was he talking about?" MC laughed awkwardly. Vincent, looking at him, thought, "This guy doesn't look like a simple newbie." Then they heard a loud roar, and the protagonist turned around to spot a kneeling troll. Chiron then readied an arrow and shouted, "He's getting up." This time, she'd aim for the back of his head. Then Vincent threw his sword forward and shouted, "Mose, he will finish this fight." The system announced that a two-handed steel sword had been acquired. The protagonist quickly drew it from its sheath, and looking resolutely forward, ran toward the monster. He swung the weapon, then delivered a slashing attack. Meanwhile, Silborn stared at the system window and thought, "It's nice to see an inventory that doesn't have a single empty slot. If this continues, perhaps they could earn over 100 million won in just 10 minutes? He smiled and thought, "Of course. According to the rules, a minimum of 120 people are required to hunt a troll. A silver guild has 40 players. They had to find the other 80 elsewhere, but he figured out how to profit from this. And to add credibility, he recruited several experienced players. The automatic reward distribution system is based on the quest participants' contribution to its completion. The quest rewards are distributed according to the difficulty of the task completed by the player, so killing all the trolls would earn the highest participation rate. Of course, rumors would spread about the deception. If his reputation were damaged, he'd simply retreat into the shadows for a while until things calmed down. And then he'd be altruistic for a while and shed his past as if it had never happened. Won't it be brilliant? Then he looked in surprise at the system window that appeared, which said that the quest was completed. The Troll Hunter quest had been successfully completed. The main objective was to destroy a troll named Black Mountain. He frowned at this and thought, Black Mountain? What the hell was going on? The rest of the group also looked at the system windows, and it said that the Black Mountain had been destroyed. The automatic reward distribution system was starting. The group with the highest participation percentage was group number 13, and Silborn thought in surprise, what? Him? The system reported that the swordsman had been awarded the MVP title and a special title, without a doubt. The player with the highest contribution to healing the team was Mose. A special reward had been received. The player with the highest damage was Mose. After a while, Silborn was clutching his wounded shoulder, breathing loudly, and thinking, damn it, what the hell is going on? No mana, no health, what the hell? He was trying to get to that damn team number 13 that had taken credit for the quest. Not long before, he had shouted at his subordinates to grab those bastards and bring them to him immediately. Then a few players approached him and said, well, they've found him, Silborn. It's interesting to see a top player run away like a rat. He's at a dead end, isn't he? He pressed himself against the wall and screamed, damn it, what's a dark guild doing here? What do they want from him? One of them said he knew, the leader of a troll hunting party. His comrade drew his dagger and added, he's not going to live anyway, so he should surrender. He said, terrified. Damn it. His shrill screams echoed around. Sometime later, in a Sparitan square, the protagonist entered a shop, and the employee, smiling, said, welcome. He's looking for something? He looked around, then, opening his belt pouch, said that wasn't quite right. Then he placed the item on the table and said, auction, meaning he'd like to list the item. He put the ring down. A few hours earlier, everyone gathered near the sphere, and the main character thought, this. Sharon smiled and said, wow, that's a pretty cool core. Vincent said, it was probably different from the usual ones because it was a boss. In front of the protagonist was a core, an item that can be obtained after killing a monster, something like a treasure chest. The type of core depends on the monster. The stronger the monster, the larger it is, and the higher the chance of getting a good drop. The protagonist thought, those are the rules of circuit. He never thought he'd see such a big core one day. Then Sharon smiled and called out to him. He asked, yes. She said he should open it. He pointed at himself in surprise and asked him, and she gave him a thumbs up and said, of course. He has the highest participation rate. And Guile nudged him from behind and said, exactly. Come on, he should open it quickly. After that, the protagonist walked to the core and said, well, let's go. The others looked at him expectantly, and he placed his hands on the core, and a bright light scattered around. Then the system announced that the items would be distributed according to participation percentage. Received 3 Black Mountain Bone, 3 Black Mountain Hide, Round Steel Shield, Steel Longsword, Argon Mountain Boots. The others began to rejoice, looking at these lists, and MC smiled and thought that all those days of slime hunting paled in comparison. Then he looked in surprise at the next system window, which said, Mountain Ring of Argon Power, Magic Quantity 1, bidding time 24 hours, starting price 80 gold. Put it up for auction. In the present, he sat at the table and wondered if 8 million won was a reasonable starting price, if in real money terms. It was difficult to navigate because the cost can vary greatly depending on the type and effect of the artifact. Lately, prices have been getting lower and lower. Who cares? As long as it gets to the top. After that, he put the item up for auction, and after a while, he sat down on his bed and thought, isn't 80 gold a bit low? Maybe he should have raised the price? No, it's too late now. What's the point of regretting now? At least they don't accuse him of greed compared to everything else. The ring adds +1 to damage. So 80 is fine, he's doing well. Afterwards, he leaned back on the bed and said he was tired. He put his hand to his head, sighed loudly, and thought, incredible, so much had happened today. He killed a troll himself in his first group quest, got some pretty good loot, and he also made his first friends in the game. A friends list appeared in front of him, which said Sharon is online, Swordsman is online, Guile is online. He wondered if he hadn't won a star in that lottery. Then his eyes suddenly opened. He took off his VR headset, sat up in bed, and asked what time it was. Then he heard a notification on his phone. He received a message from his mother, in which she wrote, son, is he eating well? He shouldn't eat only noodles. He should at least buy rice. She put some money on his card, but just in case, so he shouldn't worry. And he looked at the phone screen and smiled and said, Mom, he will have his salary from his part-time job tomorrow. There was no need. And then, he received a notification. 65,001 were debited from the Kehoe account. Details. PC Telecom. The remaining is 107,541. 35,001 were debited from the Kehoe account. Details. Payment for a transport card. The remaining is 72,541. He shouted, hey, what's wrong with them? They robbed me blind without even letting me enjoy the moment? Damn sad. Then another notification came, and he shouted, what again? Another debit? Then he was surprised. What? He thought it was that moment he realized his future. He laughed out loud and looked at his account. He asked, 30 million in one day? He thought his future would be tied to Circuit. After a while, the employee thanked him for his visit, and the protagonist left the official Circuit representative office in the Republic of Korea. He looked at his phone screen and thought, having received the money for the ring, he began to prepare for more serious matters. For starters, he took another semester off from college. That's it. The money was transferred, the device was back. He looked at the package and realized he bought the powder at a specialized store for Circuit players. Speaking of which, the powder is a nutritional supplement for restoring and maintaining nutrient balance in players' bodies. It's a necessary thing if you play for long periods of time without breaks. When a player eats in Circuit, they receive this supplement through VR glasses. All the necessary microelements enter the bloodstream through the skin of the face. A real find for gamers, since they don't have to be distracted from the game or waste time cooking. Although, of course, it's better to go offline and eat properly. Then he was surprised, looking at the system window, which said the Circuit community. Popular searches, Moe's, Silborn Ambush, perk for restoring teammates' health. He thought, what? It said that after defeating the Black Mountain boss, the Dark Horse Moe's is among the top players. Silborn's body was found. Members of a dark guild are suspected of the murder. Silborn respawns at Charlion Castle in a week. The Trinity Guild. Arthur is looking for a man named Moe's. They are offering 500 gold for any information about him. He thought, what's this? He asked in surprise. Silborn was killed, and why would someone pay so much for information about him? He imagined himself being torn from all sides, invited to join the guild. He wondered how much longer this would go on. He gritted his teeth and thought, this won't do. He abruptly ran into the house and, kicking off his sneakers, thought that if nothing changed, his freedom and future in the game would be ruined. He quickly put on his virtual reality glasses and thought, okay, it's time for him to get out of Asperiton. Then he said, log in. The system said, connecting to the server. He found himself at the edge of a cliff and looking ahead thought, this is $1 million chance. He can't miss it. He'd get away from everyone. With these thoughts, he turned around and walked deeper into the forest. After a while, a worker at the forge said, excellent, everything's ready. The equipment is made from the hide of a Black Mountain troll. The protagonist was wearing a Black Mountain armor set, magic, heart of the Black Mountain, leather chest guard, Black Mountain might, leather gauntlets, Black Mountain muscles, leather arm guards, Black Mountain trace, leather leggings. Effect, health +9, dexterity +3, strength +8, defense 118, 3 out of 5 items 14.4 health regeneration per second, 5 out of 5 items +11 to strength. MC happily said, wow, and the blacksmith smiled, and folding his arms across his chest, said, this is the first time in 20 years that I've been a blacksmith like this. The protagonist clenched his fist, and looking at it, thought, wow, this equipment is perfect for a wanderer like him. Then he bowed and said that he had made excellent armor. And in response he shouted, you're welcome. It was a pleasure to work with the materials he brought. After that, the protagonist went outside and thought that now was the time. Well, or so it seemed to him. He approached the rock and asked, where is it? After that, he sat down on the ground and leaned his back against a tree. He said, apparently, he really is lost. What should he do? Then he saw air currents nearby. He wondered if it was blowing from underground. After that, he pressed his hand on the spot and everything around him vibrated. Then the stone walls of the rock parted in different directions, releasing powerful streams of wind, and the protagonist closed one eye and shouted, what? The system reported that he was the first to open this dungeon, the Black Root dungeon. He thought, new? He walked forward and said, it's so dark. Inventory. Then he took out a Belsec box, ready for use, normal, glows when squeezed. Range, 15 meters, effect, 30 minutes. He said, wow. After that he walked further forward and thought the further he went, it became darker, more frightening. Then he noticed a slab on a hill, approached it and asked what it was. It said Morutal, bones, skull. The depth of hatred for the one who imprisoned them cannot be conveyed. Dark forces ambushed their troops. The smell of rotten blood filled the air. Caught off guard, they said goodbye to life and found themselves bound to a dark curse, and they would not find the peace of a dignified death. The next second, a beam of light struck the slab, and behind the protagonist, the undead began to rise. He turned sharply, noticing the huge number of skeletons, and grinned, saying that he knew a fight was coming, but so many? He then charged, swinging his sword from side to side. Dodging a skeleton's attack, he thought, damn, there's no end to them. He continued the fight and thought that he wasn't a combat class. He wasn't even very skilled with a sword, but he was capable of holding his own against such a horde of skeletons. He continued his battle as the skeletons swarmed around him. They formed a veritable mountain of skeletons, with MC inside. Then he let out a loud scream, and a bright light exploded in all directions. The use of his power was like a supernova. It would have been impossible to do such a thing without the support of a staff at his level. That's what a rare artifact, magical armor, and weapons combined to create. The next second, he stood on a mountain of skeletons, sighed loudly, and looked at the next monsters approaching him. Then he smiled and shouted, the battle is over. After a while, he stood surrounded by destroyed skeletons, then looked at his hand and asked, is that it? Then he looked at the system windows that appeared before him, which announced his level increase. He was surprised and thought, he just chopped up some skeletons and he's already leveled up twice? Then he joyfully shouted, wow, now he was already above 10th. Then he heard a sound behind him. He turned sharply and thought he had just heard a sound. He became wary and held his sword in front of him, and then walked further and asked, what was that? Is there someone else? I think it's there. Then he closed his mouth and thought, what a stench. Are those the bodies of travelers? God, how it stinks in here. Then he climbed the stairs and asked, another slab, what? He came closer and thoughtfully asked, I wonder what it says on this. Then he said, he hates them. He hates the Imperial Army. They burned their village, using their own fuel. They mercilessly killed his entire family, scoundrels, hiding their faces. They attacked silently, like ghosts, cowardly deserters who disobeyed the Emperor's orders. They plundered their homes, grinning devilishly. Therefore he, Morutal, the shaman of this village, curses them. They will never leave this place. They will wander here in torment and suffering forever, even after death, when only bones remain. Morutal, bones, skull. The protagonist thought, wait, the writing here is different from the previous ones. The Imperial Army plundered the village, killed the inhabitants, and burned everything. Vile monsters. Then he suddenly looked to the side and noticed a glow. A system window appeared in front of him which said, Quest Battle, Rank B, destroy the leader of the deserters, Giratin, cursed by Morutal. To activate it, he must speak the curse word. He thought, Quest Battle? Curse words. Then he said, Morutal, bones, skull. The next second, everything around him began to tremble, and he cried out in fear, and then the bones around him began to gather in one place, and he thought, bones gathering together. Then the skeleton that appeared said, Bone, skull, let it all burn in hellfire. A huge Giratin appeared before him and shouted, how dare he desecrate him with his pathetic words. They should have pulled out his organs alive and ground them to dust, not starved him. Then the protagonist looked at his trembling hand and thought, damn it, he's shaking all over. And then Giratin shouted that he freed him by uttering a curse word, and in response, he shouted that he guessed right. He will answer for the murder of innocents and the destruction of the village. In response, the monster swung its fist and hit the protagonist, causing him to fly into the wall. Giratin shouted, He dares judge him? He's an excellent fool. He won't live. Location bosses. Each of them has their own unique name. Troll, level 99. Black Mountain, level 99. Monsters in Circuit are divided into zone bosses and regular monsters. Because bosses are stronger than regular mobs of the same level, it's simply unthinkable to rank them together. Even knowing this, he couldn't have imagined that battles with the former would be so difficult. At that moment, MC was kneeling, leaning his hand on his sword. The system reported his health was below 20%. He rose to his feet and thought, damn, this time it won't be any easier. How good that while he's holding on, he can heal. His whole body aches, but his regeneration is almost instantaneous, thanks to the effects of the star and his new armor. And then Jiratin charged again and shouted, what kind of dark magic is he using? He swung his fist, and the protagonist thought he needed to react with lightning speed. He ran under the monster's fist and thought, hurry, before it catches up with him, and immediately after that, a counterattack. With these words, he attacked the monster, sending it crashing to the ground. Dust flew everywhere. And then the protagonist said, he did it. Unimaginable strength, health, and agility. Even his equipment allow him to move however he wants. Thanks to this, he can even fight off a boss. This is what it means to have good equipment in Circuit. With such an armor set, he can win. After that, Jiratin rose to his feet and shouted, maybe his body be cursed, but to fall at the hands of a newbie, he will kill him, tear the skin from his bones, and free himself from the curse. And the protagonist charged, grinning, shouting that he can talk all he wants. Little Skull. In response, he pointed his hand at him, shouting, you crazy little bug, you don't know your place? You should let him show you the difference. At that moment, a huge magical symbol appeared before him, and the protagonist closed his eyes from the streams of energy. Jiratin shouted, release the restraining seal. A level 35 Jiratin stood before him. A huge sword appeared in the center of the magic circle, and the protagonist wondered if his level had increased. The next second, Jiratin suddenly charged at him and slashed, leaping further away. MC sighed loudly as the wounds on his body opened up. Then, Jiratin turned and prepared for another attack. Running forward, his weapon raised, he struck the protagonist in the back, sending him flying backwards and crashing into the wall. Jiratin then looked at the sword and shouted that he thought the reason he couldn't cut it in half in one blow was because of its magic. He was annoying him. There was no point in swinging the sword anymore. He'll put an end to his puny life. The protagonist frowned and thought, damn, hell of a pain. If he weren't wearing this armor, he'd have died 20 times already. But he still smiled and thought that he wasn't the same as he used to be. He had 300 health and was regenerating over 100 every couple of seconds. Until he died, he'd always have a few seconds to fully replenish his health. It was hard to imagine that a pendant from the lottery would play such a big role in his future. Then the system reported that his health had been fully restored, and Jiratin was surprised. Could he withstand a blow from his sword? He shouted back. As he sees it, he took his chance and is back in action. He had to believe it. He would definitely destroy him, avenging all those who died in the village. In response, Jiratin swung his weapon and shouted, oh, he's such a cheeky brat. He struck the protagonist, but he held his sword above himself, blocking his attack. He gritted his teeth and thought, incredible power. Then he jumped sharply to the side and the energy was directed into the ground. He thought that he would wait for the right moment. After that, the protagonist pushed off the ground and, jumping up, wondered when he would open up. After that, he delivered a powerful slash, and noticing the cracks on the monster's ribs, thought, great, he hit. I must not lose momentum and deliver a few more blows. With these words, he delivered several slashing attacks, and Jiratin screamed, vile insect, he must die. He pointed his sword at the protagonist again, but the next second he severed his arm along with the sword. He ran forward and sighed loudly and delivered a few more attacks. He severed Jiratin's leg, causing him to fall to the ground. After that, the protagonist pointed his sword at him and said, that's it, Jiratin. He cried out in surprise, wondering how that was possible. What the hell was he? Wasn't he the same creature who blessed Bellic? Or the heir of Bernarder who opened the chest of the dead? How could he defeat him, Jiratin, a former knight and golden predator of the great Imperial army? The protagonist asked, Imperial? Really? He thought, a knight? Can he even hear himself? Then he swung his sword and shouted, pitiful murderer, dishonoring the Empire. And he was indignant, calling him a murderer? Youth. He has no idea what it means to be a warrior. And he asked, what about himself? He attacked a peaceful village and killed all living things. Is that, in his opinion, the act of a warrior? But he shouted that they had no choice. The famine has begun. The war was in full swing, and their army had run out of supplies. With nothing to eat, they were forced to ask for help from the villagers they were defending, but they stubbornly saw them as nothing but enemies and even decided to attack. Not an ounce of gratitude for their efforts to protect them. Those little bugs had no honor, trying to fight the Imperial army after everything they had done for them. Then MC asked, so that's why they killed them all, right? He shouted back, of course. Not a single pathetic worm survived. If it weren't for the Morudal curse, it would have been such a wonderful memory. He laughed. The protagonist said he asked him if he knew what it meant to be a warrior. He should believe him. He knew much more about it than someone like him. He had served for 2 years. Then he swung his sword and shouted, soldier's oath. They swore before the people and the nation. They are the army of the Republic of Korea. With these words, he delivered a powerful blow, hitting Jiratin's helmet. But the next second his skull shattered into tiny pieces, followed by his entire body beginning to dissolve into thin air. At that moment, bad memories appeared in the protagonist's head. He wondered if he had really said such a stupid thing. Damned soldier. Had he completely lost his mind? And then he noticed several system windows appearing, one saying about leveling up. He smiled and thought, did he rise 6 levels? It said a new achievement, collecting 11 swords, all stats plus 2 points. He was surprised. An achievement? Plus 2 points on top of everything? Then he turned around and asked, what this time? He noticed an item and shouted, a core? He noticed that it was clearly different. It was bigger than what he had seen before. He pointed his hand towards it, and then a bright flash scattered around. Many items appeared there, and he shouted in surprise, is this all for him? I need to put this in my inventory quickly. He was surprised, noticed the remaining sword, and thought, this is what Jiraten was holding. Then he cried out sharply, noticing a system window appearing, which said 11 engraved swords, Sharma's Revenge, unique, type, longsword, creator Lavoger, weight, 11.8 kilograms, strength plus 19, agility plus 14, damage with one hand, from 211 to 231, damage with two hands, from 284 to 341. Engraved sword summoning skill, automatically learned. When used, the sword appears near the player, disappearing after deactivating the skill. MC breathed heavily in, covering his mouth with his hand, shouted, unique. He thought, the highest of the known ranks was rare, but is there something even higher? If 11 engraved swords, charm, is considered unique, then even in the future, it is unlikely that anything like it will be found. He started laughing and thought that he was the first in the game to receive a rare artifact, and a unique one at that. Then he noticed that the sword was starting to disappear, and shouted, where is it going? And then streams of energy flew into his hand and he asked, did it dissolve? After that, system windows appeared, which said that the engraved sword summoning skill had been learned. He had learned his first skill. Engraved sword summoning, skill name, Sharma, skill level, maximum, cost, 11 mana. He can summon the sword or command it to disappear by saying its name. Cooldown, 1.5 seconds. He thought, Sharma, so this is his first skill. Then he thoughtfully said, well, now is the time. He pointed his hand forward and shouted, Sharma. A magic symbol appeared under him, and he smiled and said, incredible, sword summoning works. In the center of the magic circle was a sword, and then he took it and said, wow. He started swinging the sword back and forth, thinking it fit comfortably in his hand, and the weight was just perfect. Jiraten, what a fool. He didn't really want to share such a sword, huh? He wanted to try it out in a real fight. Then he looked ahead in surprise and asked, did he step on something? He picked up the object and asked, what is it? He held a ring in his hand and a system window appeared, saying, seal of the defeated knight Jiraten, unique, type ring. He must fulfill the necessary condition to start a hidden quest. Restrictions, one-time use. He asked, knight seal? Hidden quest? Then the protagonist started collecting items and said, not to be sneaky, he better get to it quickly. How much could all this sell for? Probably around 500 gold if he didn't sell it too cheaply. Then a bright light began to shine on his face. He looked up and noticed that it was already dawn. He should take the loot to the nearest village. He thought that with this money, he could forget about poverty for a while, right? After some time, the city of arts, Toiko. The players were surprised. Were they kidding? One of them looked at the system window and asked, are these really artifacts for sale? His friend asked, is something wrong? He told him to look at the first page of the auction, and he was surprised. What is this? A skill book? He said, wow, he should see how quickly the price is rising. Then another player shouted, stop. Are all these things being listed by one player? Who could that be? The skill book listed at the auction was a rare, fast healing skill book. When used, you gains the skill Fast Healing, conditions level 7, and the ability to begin the faith of the Armos Church. The current price is 800 gold. The auction ends in 4 hours and 21 minutes. The seller is Mose. Players were surprised. The same Mose who was with Silborn during the troll hunt. Sometime later, the central trading continent of Arantas branch in Toiko. The protagonist looked at the gold bars in bewilderment and then turned his gaze to the worker, who made a few notes and said that he earned 8,726 gold at the auction. He shouted in surprise, excuse me. The worker repeated the amount, and he shouted again, how much? The worker repeated himself, and then the protagonist fell down in bewilderment. He thought he should be happy, but he still couldn't believe it was happening. In that dungeon, he earned 80 million won, then he looked away and, pointing his fingers at the coins, asked, by the way, what is this? It doesn't look like gold. After that, the worker took the coin in his hand and said, well, he didn't know. In front of him was an Ormacon token. One such token was equivalent to 1,000 gold coins. The protagonist covered his mouth and shouted, 1,000? The system reported an Ormacon token, a magical one. Weight 10 grams, equal to 1,000 gold coins. History, a valuable currency depicting Ormacon, the legendary dragon with golden skin. The token contains the famous Orma ore. MC took it in his hand and thought in surprise, a currency with a magical rank? Then the worker pointed at him and added that he also wanted to warn him he should be vigilant for a while. Now everyone in the city will want to know who this Mose is. He was surprised. What? A dark guild had formed in the game, whose members rob and kill both players and NPCs. He thought perhaps he really should be careful. After some time, the players in the courtyard began to mutter. Mose, he wondered how much money he got from the auction. Probably at least 100 million won. He was jealous beyond words. They'd rob him if they met. At that moment, the protagonist walked past them and, adjusting his hood, thought that this was much more serious than he'd imagined. It was time to lay low. But the hood's stealth effect would soon wear off. He needed something better. After that, he sighed and, sometime later, came into the store. He said he needed armor that completely concealed both his body and face, and that it was durable. The worker folded his arms and, looking at him, said, "Complete camouflage? And durable too, huh? That would cost him a pretty penny." He told him to just show him what he had. He didn't care about the price. The worker leaned over laughing and said, "Oh, so he's with money." After that, he placed the armor on the table and shouted, "Here." The protagonist looked at it and thought how shiny it was. He'd hardly be recognized if he equipped himself with this. Then the worker added, "A real work of art. He made it at the Kingsmith competition." That was a long time ago. The protagonist asked, "So how much does it cost?" And he held up 2 fingers and said, 200 gold. He knows it's a bit pricey, right? But this set is his best work. He won the competition with it. The next second, gold coins started flying towards him. He looked at it in surprise, and the protagonist smiled and, pointing to the coins, said that he'll take it, the whole set. Meanwhile, Kia was walking down the street. Veyron looked at her and asked, "Is she on a mission again, Kia?" She looked at him and said, "Veyron." He guessed right, and he folded his arms over his chest and, laughing slightly, said that he could help if she wanted. But she passed him by and said she would be a burden, considering the months of preparation this mission had taken. He sighed and remarked that she was more than just a simple mutt. The next second, she spun around and pointed the weapon at his neck. He laughed and said, "Quick as always, huh?" Then he held his hands out in front of him and said, "Easy. Or does she want to cut a colleague on duty?" Then she put the sword back in its sheath and said that next time he should think before he spoke. Veyron. He should watch his sword and his words. Then she drew the object and said, "In Astani." She threw the stone to the ground, and a portal opened before her, through which she disappeared. Veyron looked after her and said, "What an impudent mongrel." Then he opened the scroll and said, "Well, where could they have hidden her so well? Where is she, the Star Florin?" Sometime later, MC was riding in a cart, and the man driving the cart said that he was his savior, and the protagonist replied that he shouldn't thank him. He had agreed to give him a ride, so they were even. He said that he had thought the monster would eat him. He was really very grateful to him. He remembered how the protagonist had beheaded the monster, and then he asked, he was still a student, right? Very young. He replied, yeah, he decided to make money while studying, and now here he is. The man said that he was sure that his parents were proud of such an independent son. He replied that they would let it go. How did he end up at Circuit, uncle? He replied that it was a long story. He got fired from the company, after which he opened his own chicken restaurant, but soon went bankrupt. Then he heard about Circuit. It seemed like a good way to make money, so he decided to give it a try. Working in delivery is a responsible job. So everything went to hell if that monster eats him. Where is he going? Is he heading somewhere specific? The protagonist replied that he wasn't heading there yet, but he'd be planning something as soon as he reached the Silver Valley. He said he should let him know when he decided. He'd take him to the ends of the earth. He replied that it was fine. He didn't want to impose. And the man laughed and said he could rest easy. He was like a bodyguard to him. After a while, they stopped at the gate, and the protagonist said, well, then they'll see each other. And the man said, great, there's a fountain in the center of the Silver Valley. He suggested meeting there. The next second, a system window appeared in front of the protagonist, warning him that his armor needed repairs. He was surprised already? Okay, then he'll take care of that first. After a while, he entered a specialized area, and watching the worker's actions folded his arms. He thought, it's certainly cool to get the Giratine seal. Then he remembered the system window that talked about the ring. He thought, a hidden quest. Got it. But what about the conditions? If only they'd given him some hints. He keeps thinking about it, but it's no use. Damn, it seems he's at a dead end. Okay, first he needs to meet the transport guy. The next second, the worker shouted, everything's ready. After that, MC put on his armor and thought that only after that would he plan his next step. After that, he went outside and thought, why are there so many people? At that moment, Max started kicking the man cowering on the ground and shouted that he'd told him 100 times he hates it when people are late. They're the Valley Clan. He takes them for fools, huh? The gathered people started murmuring. He'd only delayed the delivery a little, that's all. He can't believe this guy is the clan's heir. And why is the Valley Clan always at the center of all the troubles? What are the 14 Knights even doing? Aren't they supposed to be catching troublemakers? Max then grabbed the man by the clothes and, raising his fist, shouted, he needs to hold on. They're burying him today. You idiot. But the next second, the protagonist grabbed him by the arm, and he turned around and angrily asked, what's wrong? What was he doing? MC said, sometimes things happen on the road and people are late. He thought it was right to beat them up for that. He jerked his hand back and shouted, idiot. Does he even know who he is? Everyone in the valley is obligated to obey him, and if he ruins his mood, he'll use force. The protagonist said, is such a small thing enough for him to hit someone? He asked, Is there something he doesn't like? He swung his fist and shouted, "Get it!" But the next second, his fist flew past the protagonist's helmet, and the protagonist punched him in the face and shouted, "It's self-defense, idiot!" From such a powerful blow, Max flew far back and hit the wall. The people watched in bewilderment, and then the protagonist looked at the man and shouted, "Uncle, how is he?" He rose up on his knees and looking at him said, "It was him." The others were surprised. Did he just hit the heir of the Valley clan? Are you crazy? Oh no. At that moment, Morik approached them and shouted, "Bastard! Doesn't he know that he is the great Morik of the Valley? How dare he hit his son? Python, let him answer for this." The knight reached for his sword and answered, "Yes, sir." He walked forward and swinging his weapon said, "He, the freak, attacked the master. He will deal with him. He swears on the name of the Knight of the Silver Valley. He must die." With these words, he struck, and the protagonist said, "Sharma." He held his sword in front of him, blocking the knight's attack, and he screamed in surprise, "What?" After that, MC threw him back, and he flew straight into Max's face, after which he fell to the ground, and Morik screamed, "What is he doing? He must get up immediately, and he considers himself his knight?" After that, the protagonist pointed the weapon at him and said that now it was him. He looked at him in fear. Those present were muttering among themselves, "Is this armor? Maybe he is one of the Order of 14 Knights?" And the protagonist, hearing this, thought, "From the Order?" People were screaming. With such force, it's no wonder. God, they've finally come to help them. Lord Knight. He took half of their income, calling it taxes. Their father was executed because he had nothing to pay with. In the name of Bellica, they beg him to punish him. And then the protagonist thought he has no idea who these 14 knights are, judging by how the situation is developing. Then he looked at Morik and asked, "Is everything said true?" And he cried out in fear, "That's not entirely true. Perhaps part of it. They were just stockpiling in case of famine." And then MC, angry, shouted maybe he should visit his house and see for himself? And he began to bow and shouted that he apologizes, "Sir. He committed a terrible crime. He begs for mercy." Then the protagonist said, "All right, since he admits his actions, he will not take his life. But he must compensate all the victims." He shouted, "Yes, he will do everything," and the people began to applaud him. Then the system reported that his fame level had risen by 274 points thanks to rumors. The hidden quest, Tyranny of the Valley Clan, has been completed. The reward is a hint on how to obtain a rare artifact. A random increase in fame. So a hidden quest, a clue to obtaining a rare artifact. He should be heading to Fallope, a city on the edge of the continent. MC smiled and thought, that was unexpected. Just go to Fallope. At that moment, two people hidden behind cloaks watched the scene from the top of a cliff and began to talk. "Sir, will he arrest him?" He was posing as one of them. "He won't punish this one in armor? Did he forget God's prophecy that one day a certain wanderer would make this world a better place? And how could he not notice? Thanks to this guy, they have less work." So yes, but who is he? He's not sure. But he thinks it's the same Mose everyone is talking about, a famous figure. Wanderer Mose? He thinks they should keep an eye on him. Meanwhile, the protagonist looked at the map and thought, so the next place he's going is Fallope. After some time, the borders of the continent, the city of Fallope, the city employment office. The protagonist collapsed to the ground and, sighing wearily, said he didn't understand anything at all. How many days had this been going on? A secret class. Unlike regular ones, players of this class possess hidden powers and knowledge. But such encounters are rare. These classes are so rare that nothing much is known about them in the circuit community. So even the bureau worker couldn't help him. Was he really going to have to search the city? Then he looked away in surprise and thought he hadn't expected to meet elves here. Fallope is full of surprises. The next second, a man ran past him and pushed him aside. He ran on, turned around and shouted, "Damn it, he should watch where he's going, idiot!" And the protagonist, looking after him, asked, "But he ran into him himself. What's there to yell about?" He clenched his fist and shouted that he wanted him to step in a pile of excrement. The next second, there was an explosion, and the protagonist looked at it in surprise. The man grabbed his mouth, and in the spreading clouds of smoke, he noticed a bag of scattered coins. He shouted, "His money." And then Veyron walked up to him and, pointing a finger at him, said, "Oh, he's a dirty swindler. Did he think he could scam him? Did he think he could escape?" He pointed a finger at him, and the protagonist thought, wow, he's got a lot of guts. Then he was surprised. What? He thought it was a familiar ring. Maybe that's what it was. At that moment, the man pulled out a knife, and pointing it at Veyron, shouted that he must die, the son of a bad woman. But the next second, Veyron attacked him with his sword, not giving him a chance to attack. After that, he put the sword behind his back, and pushing him away in irritation, said that he was just wasting his time. MC looked at him and thought, his movements, he didn't even notice it. What kind of guy is this? At that moment, a system window appeared in front of him, saying he'd completed a hidden quest. He'd found a clue to a secret class reward. He wondered if he'd completed the hidden quest. The next system window said he'd started a hidden quest, the secret class swordsman. He should talk to the man in the black robe. He wondered if it was a secret class swordsman. After a while, Veyron was walking down a dark alley, and the protagonist was following him. He thought he'd just assumed, seeing everything from afar, but there was no doubt about it. His ring was exactly like Giratin's. He'd said he was a swordsman, right? Who knew that killing him would lead him here? Maybe luck really was on his side? Then he wondered, had he disappeared? Where had he gone? And the next second, Veyron was behind him, and with a sharp movement of his hand, he grabbed his throat, then threw him to the ground. He pointed his sword at him and shouted, "Oh, he's a rat? Is he following him?" He frowned, looking at him, and then lifted the pendant with the tip of his sword and asked, "Where did he get that?" He was already angry and, clenching his teeth, shouted for him to answer. Someone more worthy than him deserved it, and he replied that he won it in the lottery. Veyron sharply struck him with his sword, and the system reported that his health was less than 5%. He should be careful. He screamed loudly, and Veyron frowned and asked, "Is this a joke?" And the protagonist began to rise and replied that he was serious. The thing is, in the city of Lindurk, an old man sold stone runes. Before he could finish speaking, Veyron grabbed him by the armor and pulling him towards himself, asked what he looked like. He replied that he had a beard and gray hair and a robe. Then Veyron let him go and said, "So he was in Lindurk." MC asked, "Who is he?" Then the system reported that his health was fully restored, and he said that in the criminal world he is known as a high-class criminal, the gambler Lero. The protagonist thought, a criminal? Batman? Then Veyron added that he was tasked with tracking him down. He knows about one of the mysteries of the Aspargan continent, the disappearance of the Langerus Cavalcade. MC asked, "The Langerus Cavalcade?" And he replied, "What a fool, he doesn't even know that. The Cavalcade was considered the greatest fighting force on the continent, but one day it all disappeared on the way to war. A search party investigated the place where its warriors disappeared, but only found abandoned ruins. After that, the protagonist grabbed the pendant and said, 'So this is the pendant.' Before he could finish speaking, he answered, 'That's right. It belonged to Florin, the commander of the Langerus Cavalcade.' MC thought it was just a magnificent artifact, but then Veyron said, 'Judging by how quickly his wounds healed, the star is real. And now,' he suddenly pulled the sword from behind his back and struck. The protagonist put his hand to his helmet and screamed, 'What is he doing?' And he said that Florin isn't here, so he'll kill him and take the pendant. He screamed, 'What? What the hell?' But Veyron prepared for the attack and told him to be a good boy and die. The protagonist said that he was going to kill him all along, and he replied, 'Of course.' He smirked and added, 'Dead men tell no tales.' In response, MC summoned Sharma and thought, it's clear why he gave him everything so easily. The next second, Veyron was already at his side, and he thought, quick. Veyron delivered a powerful slash, and the system reported that his health was below 10%. He should be careful. Then Veyron looked at him and said, 'Finally, the suspension will be his.' Then he was surprised to see the protagonist start to rise and screamed, 'What? How did he even survive that blow?' But the system reported his health had been fully restored. He asked, 'Immortal? Is he one of them?' Veyron appeared behind him and asked, 'What do they call it? User? Player?' He'd heard that before, but it didn't matter. Even if he rose from the dead, he'd seek him out to kill him again and again. He struck again, this time from behind. MC gritted his teeth and thought, okay. He just needed to wait a few seconds. Then Veyron approached him again and asked, 'Does he think he'll just silently watch while he heals?' The next second, he added another powerful blow, and the system reported his health was below 3%. He should be careful. The protagonist sighed loudly and thought, no, his consciousness was leaving him, just like that. After a while, Robin said, 'The swordsman keeps all the truth in the sword and dedicates himself entirely to it. He should remind him more often that this is a top-secret mission.' The protagonist wondered in surprise, 'What's going on here?' This man, and Robin blocked Veyron's attack and said that not only had he spilled all the secrets to the immortal, but he had also succumbed to temptation, behaved like a lousy dog. He called him a traitor and sentenced him to death. Veyron said, Master Robin, it's not like that. He must give him another chance.' But the next second, Robin delivered the final attack, and moving on, said that he would apologize in hell. The protagonist thought, did he just kill him? Then Robin approached him and said that he was next. Now he knew too much, so he himself understood, and he thought, the first one really scared him, but this one is on a completely different level. There is a colossal difference between them. Is this how he will end up? No. He told himself that he would be different. He decided to bet everything on Circuit, and then Robin smiled and asked, does he not want to give up? And MC rose to his feet and thought that he would join the secret class. He wouldn't get another chance. Even if he died and had to pay a fine, he wasn't going to back down. Robin frowned and asked, he did understand the difference in their skills, right? But he still challenged him? He replied that even if he died and rose from the dead, he would still pursue him. So he would give it his all. And Robin looked at him and thought, what resilience. Even though he was shaking, he had no shortage of courage and will to live. Even among swordsmen, you don't often meet such a person. Then he noticed his ring and asked, what is it? It's a swordsman's seal. Then he grabbed the protagonist by the neck and asked what this ring does, and he thought he couldn't move. He replied that he got it after defeating Juratin. He asked, did he tell Juratin? He must do it again. He confirmed it, and then Robin let him go and said he couldn't believe he'd fallen by his hand. But he could see in his eyes that he wasn't lying. He asked if Juratin was a swordsman too. He replied that it was true, he was. Several hundred years ago, he defected to the Imperial Army and betrayed the swordsman. There weren't many of them back then, so no one could stand up to the Imperial Army, and he was biding his time. The protagonist thought, so that's where Jiraten got such an unusual ring. Then he said, he's apologizing, maybe he shouldn't have killed him, and Robin folded his arms and said it was okay. Sooner or later, someone had to do it. But after everything he'd learned about the mission, he wouldn't leave alive, unless... Basically, he had two options. Every time he was revived, he had to die in agony immediately or replace this dead idiot and work for them. He had to choose. Immortal. He would. Before he could finish speaking, MC sensed his terrifying aura and shouted that they would work together. Robin looked at him in surprise and then asked, won't he even think about it? It was as unthinkable as Bellica, the sun goddess, suddenly turning to ice. Well, he had made his choice. He placed his hand on his shoulder and added that he didn't know if he could really become a swordsman, but the next second, he punched the protagonist in the face, causing his helmet to fly off. He thought, why? He began to fall, and his eyes began to close, and Robin said, it was a greeting, rookie. After a while, the protagonist woke up on his bed and looked at the system window, which said a new location, a shrine. He looked around and asked, shrine? After a while, a shrine, a training hall. The protagonist, smiling, looked at Kia, who was standing in front of him. He ran to attack, holding a wooden sword in his hands, and shouted at her to hold on. But she blocked his weapon and asked, did he think he could handle her one-on-one? She began to strike. MC, gritting his teeth, tried to defend himself and thought that it was easy for her to say, but he couldn't track the movement of her sword. He couldn't match her in speed and technique. She was the #1 among the master's students, and these were not empty words. Then she pointed the weapon at him and shouted that he was open. She attacked him, causing him to fall to the ground. After that, she extended her hand to him and said, not bad, but he has room to improve. In response, he smiled and taking her hand, said that she just needed to give him time. Next time he would win. After some time, Mom asked, oh my god, what is this, Kiho? The protagonist was lifting weights and said, Mom, she just has to accept this. She screamed, 4 million won. What a huge amount of money. Where did he get that money from? He shouldn't say it's illegal. Then he put the weights down and said, it's not like that, Mom. It was just a gift from him. He'd been saving up for a long time. Then she asked, by the way, why is he suddenly being so polite? And he said he had to run. Mom, he hung up. The money is hers, so she has to decide how to spend it. He'll call later. She replied that she understood. After that, the protagonist turned off the alarm and sighed loudly, saying, I wonder how much they'll wear him out during training today? A few days ago, after being knocked out, he woke up in a shrine, a secret hideout for a group of mercenaries who call themselves swordsmen. They swear allegiance to Adies, the goddess of blades. It's a small organization that handles various international orders. Robin, the man who brought him here, introduced himself as one of the 10 masters and invited him to join the ranks of swordsmen. Deciding it was destiny, he joined them, but it didn't take long before he was to regret his decision. After a while, Robin stood on top of a cliff and shouted, go. He must run as if his life depended on it. The protagonist tried to keep up with Kia, who was approaching him. They continued training. Robin shouted, the one who forgets the basics dies first. They mustn't skip basic training. The workload was really intense. So he wondered if that could be the reason for the small number of members in this organization. Many of their missions are secret and national in nature. Therefore, it is important to know as much as possible about all countries. He must learn as much as he can. If you ask him how he endured it, he will answer in one word, Kia. It was only thanks to her that he didn't give up everything, both his journey to becoming a swordsman and the game itself. At one point, she called him over and asked what he was thinking about. He replied, nothing at all. He was simply shocked that they would be on their first official mission. She smiled and said that it was normal to be nervous, but he shouldn't ruin everything. And he put his hand to his chest and said that he was actually a swordsman now too, and already knew the rules. Then she turned around and said, okay, he shouldn't have been so worried. She hoped to see him alive. He walked forward and replied, yeah, they'll meet at the shrine, Ka. Then he watched her go and, continuing on his way, thought, well, it's time to go to Aspargan, right? Sometime later, he arrived in the city and, walking down the street, thought that he had successfully completed the training course and was now a full-fledged member of the organization. As confirmation of this, he received the Swordsman's Seal, their distinctive ring. The system reported the Swordsman's Seal, unique. Ring type, melee damage increased by 14%. He thought about it, and for his first mission as a swordsman, he returned to Aspargan. The system window said Super Battle, Quest Level S. He was to find the source of supernatural activity in the northeastern edge of Aspargan. The client was the Order of 14 Knights, the reward unknown. He thought that airships flew from here to the snow price in the north of Langlis, and the number of players had increased. Players passed by and said that this time he would go on foot. Thanks to his speed boots, it wouldn't take more than a second, right? His companion replied, of course, it's magical. The protagonist thought, awesome. Then the player asked, wondering why troll hides have risen in price so much. His companion smiled and said it didn't matter, they'll just keep hunting them. MC thought that a couple of months ago everyone was beating slimes in hopes of getting magic items, but now the average artifact level had noticeably increased. Then he heard cries for help. A guy stood surrounded by people, shouting that all the artifacts he'd collected in the Valinko hunting grounds had been stolen, and that they'd return them if he didn't pay a ransom. People were murmuring, Valinko hunting grounds? He'd heard that the #1 guild was taking over the territory. Only players with magical artifacts were in this state, right? They said that regular players and NPCs were kicked out so that only the #1 guild could supply resources to large companies. Poor guy. He had the misfortune of running into them. After a while, the guild members lined up near the cave. One of them said, "Hey, he told you he can't come here. This place was only for them." The #1 guild members. The players stood in front of them. One of them asked, "What's going on?" One of the guild members grabbed his guy's hand and asked if he was going to leave on his own, or if he needed help. Then one of them told him to look. That's it. A tearful guy stood before them. He asked, "Did he bring the money? Does he have any idea how much the artifact he scratched is worth?" He then glanced at the protagonist and asked, "Who the hell is that?" He smiled and said, "The hunting grounds are public territory, open to all players. Who are they to rule over that?" The others said, "The #1 guild, idiot. He should back off the hard way." The protagonist sighed and asked, "First, they occupy the public lands, and now they're threatening him? It would seem like rock bottom had been reached, but they're just trash, pathetic scum." The next second, the man grew angry and raising his fist, shouted, "Get it, you bastard." But the protagonist hit him faster, sending him flying far back. Another man screamed, "Brother!" He turned to his comrades and pointing a finger at the protagonist shouted, "What are they waiting for? They should attack him. That's the end for him, idiot." Then the system reported that the #1 guild had become hostile towards him. MC flexed his fists and thought that he didn't even need Sharma for a fight like this. The swordsman struck with his sword and shouted for him to take it, bastard. But the protagonist easily dodged his attack and then punched him. He made his way forward, dealing with everyone in his path. And the rest screamed, "Who is this?" And MC, lifting one of the guys by the neck, asked, "Him?" He was just a player who decided to hunt in these lands. The guild members were perplexed. What should they do? Stand and watch? At that moment, Saksa approached them and asked what all the fuss was about. They screamed, "Mr. Saksa!" He was the leader and chief thug of the #1 guild. Then the beaten man pointed forward and shouted, "Well, that's it. He's dead. Does he know who he is?" The great Saksa, the leader of the #1 guild and also a ranker. Then the guy pointed forward and shouted for him to look. He had a bronze token, which only players in the top 9,000 receive. The others were surprised. What kind of joke is this? What the hell? What are they supposed to do? The protagonist thought, while he was training with the swordsman, a lot has changed in Circuit. The latest innovation is the ranking system. Just 3 months ago, a player's position in the rankings was determined by his popularity. However, the Information Guild has started keeping an official count of players. According to rumors, there are over 310,000 players vying for a place in the ranking. The next second, Saksa clenched his teeth and screamed, "Idiots. Don't they know that the #1 guild has 7 rankers? They're already behind schedule on resource deliveries. All of them. Get out of here before he calls security." Then he pointed his finger at the protagonist and said he'd pay for raising a hand to their guys. But the next second, the MC punched him, sending him crashing to the ground. He concentrated energy in his hand and said, "I'll call everyone. Is anyone here, including security?" He summoned a sword and added, "Let them see how his business crumbles to dust." He then dealt a few blows with the sword and walked forward. The wounded guild members remained behind him. They screamed, "It's time to get out." They started running away from him, and the protagonist said, "Well, that's it." The system reported that the airship he'd reserved a spot on was leaving in 10 minutes. He looked at it and said that he'd been so focused on these bastards that he'd completely forgotten his main task. After that, he ran to the right place. After a while, he approached the Dawn Velis airship. He was inside, and then, looking out the window, he said, "Wow, what a view." Then Kalawar approached him and said, "Hey man, is he here about the mission?" MC looked at him and replied that that's right. He looked at him thoughtfully, and then the protagonist bowed and said that the truth only calls to the sword. He responded in kind, and the protagonist wondered what kind of aura he had. Then he used Insight. The system reported that Insight is Moses' unique ability, allowing him to see the name and level of another player or NPC. He was level 91, and he looked at it in surprise. Then Kalawar said that he didn't think he'd meet swordsmen here. "His name is Kalawar. He's a swordsman from Laoswan." MC replied that he was Mose, a swordsman from Aspargan. He said thoughtfully, "Something serious must have happened in the north." He asked why he thought so, and he told him to think about it himself. Why were there 5 bigwigs gathered on one airship? He wondered. Who was he talking about? And he said he was just going to see them. What about him? He smiled and said he was curious now. He laughed and asked, "Is that true? Then he should follow him." After that, they walked through the doors and the protagonist, looking around, said, "Wow." He thought, simply amazing. Then Kalawar walked further and said, "Here, Mose, everyone is here. Some of the strongest people, of course." He looked at those present, gathered around the table, and thought, the best on the continent? Then Aurora, level 201, a triple crown mercenary, folded his arms and asked, Have they guys come to participate in their mission? Yvonne, level 217, a 5th-generation bin caravan merchant, remarked that they didn't look like much of a fighter. He thought they could handle it? Then Hare, level 186, a member of the 14 Knights, said that while they might not look impressive, one of them possessed the blessing of an immortal. Next to him sat Sire, level 155, a member of the 14 Knights. MC then looked at Hare and thought, does he know him? After that, Tigris's swordmaster, Gon, level 244, said he'd heard of a wanderer who managed to become a swordsman, so it was him. And the protagonist looked at him and thought, what's wrong? He's level 244? Swordsmen are divided into swordsmen, masters, and grandmasters. A grandmaster is the highest rank of swordsmanship. It's the aspiration of everyone who has completed the shrine's training and received the seal. So this is the legendary grandmaster, the king of kings no less. Then he introduced himself, and Calloware, looking at him, asked, and him. He introduced himself too, and after that, he laughed and said, young swordsmen and no one cower before the grandmaster of the sword. A bright future awaits them. Then a system window appeared in front of the protagonist, saying that he had earned a secret achievement, encountered a ghost blade. He had encountered one of the 2 ghost blades. His strength had been increased by 2. He was surprised. A secret achievement? He thought he'd been given a couple of stat points for meeting the Grandmaster? How much stronger were these guys? No wonder this is an S-class mission with such people involved. Then a voice came over the speakers. Dear passengers, this is Captain McGroffin of the airship Dawn. They will soon arrive in the north of Langless. Their journey is coming to an end, but he is sure that for them, it is just beginning. May the blessings of Bellica and Bellis be upon them. Then Gon waved his hand and suggested discussing all the details in Langer. The protagonist replied, yes, of course. After that, he looked in surprise at the system window, which said the quest level had been changed. A super battle. Quest level SS. He must find the source of supernatural activity in the northeastern edge of Aspargan. The client was the Order of the 14 Knights. The reward was unknown. He wondered if the quest had doubled. After some time, north of Langless, the fortress of the Snow Wall, Aurora placed his fist on the table and said, the quest level has suddenly increased. Gon then looked at the document and said that if this continues, the quest will have to be cancelled. Aurora folded his arms and said, perhaps it's for the best. Newbies will definitely die here. Then Yvonne asked, but why did the difficulty increase? And Hare looked at the document and said, according to this, the source of the supernatural activity has been determined. The protagonist thought, determined? And Hare added, on the eastern continent of Lan, the magical continent of Olu, numerous red lightning bolts have appeared here and in Langer, causing damage. At first, they thought it was a natural phenomenon caused by a magical experiment in Olu. Aurora asked, but if the lightning is red, then what? And Gon said, it's probably Garnus. Hare said that's true, but they don't know how exactly it got here. A disaster-class monster, danger level 17 from an unknown continent. The elder dragon Garnus reached Langless. Then Aurora asked, well, what's the reward? Hare smiled and said, 50 Ormicons from the Arantas Bank. Aurora laughed and shouted, as expected of the Order of 14 Knights. He appreciated his honesty. Yvonne added, but she needs something else besides money. Hare smiled and asked, how about food trading rights in Aspargan? She smiled and gave him a thumbs up, saying he knew how to persuade her. Then he said, it's up to Master Gon. Honestly, he didn't know what to offer him. He looked at him and said he wasn't interested in the reward. He was in, as long as these two joined the quest on his terms. With that, he pointed at the protagonist and Calloware. The system reported that Grandmaster Gon had invited him to his team. MC was surprised. Really? After a while, Langer, the dragon in the snow, a member of the Sincerity Caravan, Sayer, extended his hand and said that he greeted them, the rescuers, in the name of Bellica and Bellis. Gon raised his hand and said, they don't deserve such high praise. And the protagonist wondered if he'd arrived before them. Was he from the Orin of the 14 Knights? Although, who is he? Just look at his level. After a while, everyone sat down at the table, and Aurora asked, so, how are things now? Sayer said that there were no red lightning strikes at the moment. Gon said thoughtfully, there's a lull. It's time to act. After that, Aurora slammed his hand on the table and shouted that he would go to the vanguard and take the brunt of the attack. He smiled and said, okay, he'll take care of the swordsman in the rear. After that, the protagonist sighed and thought that they would attack from behind. Yvonne said that her power would immobilize the enemy. Hare said that he would join Lord Gon. And Sayer said he had magical support. Then Sayer said, excellent. Now he would use a spell that will transport them closer to Garnus without attracting attention. They will do it, ladies and gentlemen. After a while, the protagonist shielded himself from the snow. He walked forward and thought he couldn't see anything because of the snow. The next second, red lightning struck behind him. He turned around and thought, was that just Garnus flapping his wings? What power? Calloware turned and shouted, Mose, they have to go. He ran after him, and then Sayer took the staff and said that since everyone was gathered, they could begin. He raised the staff up and, concentrating the energy, said, the sounds of fountains, the sounds of oceans, the sounds of the deep sea, he conjures in his name, as if he were the ocean, he will cover the earth with thick silence, so be it. Then he struck the staff on the snow, and the energy scattered around. Aurora said, it's so quiet here that his ears are ringing. The protagonist looked at his trembling hand and thought, This is very powerful magic. It's chilling him. Then Ser spoke. Oh, indestructible Bellica, their wise goddess, O Bellis, their stern but reasonable patrons, two deities who order the waters of the endless sky and who are destined never to meet. The energy continued to spread around, and the system announced he heard sacred chanting, but the 34% effect had been activated. He now recovers 583 health per second, and the effect lasts for 2 hours. The power of all attacks is increased by 34%. The effect lasts for 2 hours. Yvonne said, excellent. This will definitely come in handy. And MC happily looked at his hands and thought he felt the power. It was filling him. Indeed, excellent skills from a support who has reached the pinnacle of mastery. Then they heard a sound from the top of the cliff. The protagonist turned around abruptly, wondering what those sounds were. He reached for the weapon behind him and said, it seems the enemy is already close. He shouted, attention everyone. Everyone prepared for attack. The protagonist wondered where it would come from. The next second, the monster was behind him. He turned around and asked, what? Is that a dragon? Then the dragon began concentrating energy in its mouth. It began flapping its wings, and MC fell to the ground and thought that he couldn't stand. His legs wouldn't hold him. He would probably die here. The next second, the dragon released a stream of fire. The protagonist shielded himself with his hand. Aurora stood in front of him and held out a shield. He screamed, what are you sitting around for, you idiot? He should run to the rear. The next second, Yvonne used a rope to secure the dragon's mouth shut and told him to shut it at least for a little while, okay? And he said, well done, Yvonne. Now it's their turn. Gon swung his sword and as he struck, shouted for it to take. Then he caught his breath and said that he thought so. This tactic will buy them time. Hare said, yes, it seems so. The protagonist smiled and thought, so this is how the strongest play. The next second, the dragon opened its mouth, tearing the rope, and Gon shouted, everyone get ready. Aurora told them to rely on him. He ran forward and deflected the attack with his shield. He shouted that he sent it along with its flames. A powerful stream of energy burst out straight into the fiery stream from the dragon's mouth. And then Sire closed his eyes and said, the almighty ones, they must have mercy on this mortal. Blessed light must fly upon the enemy and them. The next second, a magical symbol appeared above the dragon, from which a beam of energy erupted. The system reported, the dispersal skill has been activated. For the duration of the skill, the characteristics of enemies are weakened. Remaining time, 2 hours. Aurora smiled and shouted, excellent. Then a stream of energy from his shield pierced the dragon's fire stream and he said, damn it. He's a tough guy, huh? The protagonist thought his level had increased so suddenly. He'd seen something similar during the battle with Giratin. So NPCs can level up just by equipping a special weapon. Then the dragon flapped its wings and Aurora asked, what, is it going to attack from the sky? Yvonne shouted, we can't let that happen. It must entwine him. White rose. Several shoots enveloped the dragon, and Yvonne tried to hold them back. She said they couldn't hold out for much longer. The dragon was too strong. Hare told her to hold out a little longer. He's using a spell. He just needs to fly. The next second, wings appeared behind him, and he soared into the sky. The protagonist looked at him and thought, wow. And Calloware ran forward and shouted, Mose, they have to go. This is their chance. The dragon is still tied up. And he ran after him and shouted that he understood. They jumped to attack together, but the dragon turned its gaze on them and then flapped its wing and threw them into the snow. Calloware shouted, damn Mose, is he okay? And he shouted, yes, everything is fine. He clenched his teeth and thought they would succeed. This creature knew that they would attack. Then Gon walked forward and laughing slightly, said, his dear swordsmen. Tension gripped their shoulders. They can speed up and strike more powerfully. They must remember that the duet of sword and technique is the main weapon of a swordsman. That's it. They must become such masters one day. He sent a powerful stream of energy forward, creating a slash on the dragon's throat. The protagonist thought, holy shit, level 388. Gon is now even stronger than Garnus. His technique is perfect. It has no equal. It seems he has found himself an idol. Then he ran forward and said that this is their chance. He is injured. Calloware ran forward and shouted, Mose. He ran after him and shouted, yes. He thought that this raid can't end until he does something. And he thought, I get it. Looks like this guy has a big future ahead of him. Then the protagonist pushed off the ground and swinging his sword, sharply struck the monster. The next second, he gritted his teeth as he landed, and Gon walked forward and, throwing his sword over his shoulder, told him not to overexert himself. He was still a rookie. Then he rushed to attack and delivered a powerful blow. MC covered his hand and thought that he expected nothing less from the Grandmaster. Gon turned around and asked, well, is this okay? Then the protagonist looked up and higher, clasping his hands in front of him, shouted, attention, everyone move away from Garnus. Then a bright flash of energy appeared from the sky. He said he apologized, ancient creature. After that, Aurora, holding his shield in front of him, shouted for everyone to take cover behind his shield. This was necessary to save millions of lives. And a powerful energy from the sky pierced the dragon's body. An incredibly bright flash scattered around, and then the dragon froze and fell to the ground. The protagonist smiled and said that they had won. Then he was surprised and thought, is this Garnus's core? Then he looked at the others and thought, how could they clearly not see the core because they were NPCs? Then he approached the core, and Yvonne, approaching him, smiled and said, well, that's it, the raid is over. He thought that this was the end of the brutal battle against Garnus. During the fight, he had risen a whopping 25 levels. Then Aurora waved his hand and said that he hated the cold. So see you soon. He thought Aurora had left them immediately after receiving his reward. Yvonne had summoned her men from Bin Caravan, who had butchered the dragon's body. Then she said, okay, they need to get moving. They're sorting through the bones and skin. They'll make a good profit on them. The protagonist thought she'd left, quite pleased with both the outcome of the battle and the spoils. Then she climbed into the cart and shouted at him to remember his promise. Higher, and he laughed and said, okay. After that, he extended his hand forward and said, Mr. Gon, Mr. Callowar, Mr. Mose, he wants to thank them again. He smiled and said, meeting such talented guys is already a reward. He smiled, looking at them, and agreed with him. In response, the protagonist laughed awkwardly and scratched the back of his head. He thought it was a bit hard, but it seemed Higher appreciated his efforts. After that, he turned to them and said, and so, Swordsman Laoswan. He bowed and said that he is here. He said, and Swordsman Aspergan. MC bowed and said that he is here. After that, he said, someday the fame of their deeds will spread far and wide and reach his ears. And when that happens, he will welcome them with open arms, and he will look forward to seeing them at Bin Caravan. After that, he walked through the portal, and Callowar, looking at the protagonist, said, well, he had urgent business, so he should go. They'll see each other again. He waved to the protagonist one last time, and the protagonist looked away and thought that, alone, it was starting to feel like the battle had never happened. Then he looked away and said, right, I need to deal with the core. He thought, just take the entire reward for himself. Even though he hadn't really done anything, he didn't even know if it was right. But refusing such luxury would be foolish. To stand on par with true warriors, he would need to be much stronger than he was now. Then he extended his hand toward the core, and a bright light scattered around. The protagonist covered it with his hand, and then looked in surprise at the set that had appeared. He extended his hand forward and asked, what is this? He reached for the sword, and a system window appeared stating, Artorias brand, legendary type, two-handed sword, weight 8.8 kilograms, strength plus 43, health plus 31, agility plus 31, intelligence plus 16, passive skills. Atori's fighting style, after killing 100 monsters, the skill Destructive Flame, Solar Storm is activated. Limit, maximum use 3 times, cooldown 10 minutes. If the monster is more than 20 levels lower than the player, it does not count towards the 100 monsters. The protagonist was surprised, legendary, and then he looked at the next system window, which said, Atori's Rising Sun Armor, legendary, 5 out of 6. Atori's Mind, Heavy Armor, Helmet, Sun. Atori's Heavy Armor, Chestplate, Sinews. Atori's Heavy Armor, Pants, Madness. Atori's Heavy Armor, Gloves. Fire Atori's Heavy Armor, Boots. Brand Atori's Two-Handed Sword, Strength plus 87, Health plus 77, Dexterity plus 84, Intelligence 59. 3 out of 6 item bonus, player speed increased by 34%, Unbridled Flame, Solar Storm Charge increased by 1, 5 out of 6 item bonus, Melee Power increased by 44%, 6 out of 6 item bonus, Solar Fury skill activated, Devastating Flame skill, Solar Storm enhanced. He smiled and said, wow, is this true? This isn't some kind of hidden camera prank, is it? What fell from Garnus's core was as astounding as the dragon itself. A legendary set that surpasses any unique artifact. He was the first to receive legendary items in Circuit. After a while, Jian said, hello everyone, this is the second streamer from the Republic of Korea, Jian. Have they heard the news the Information Guild posted yesterday morning? A ranker battle awaits. Anyone can participate. Until recently, ranks were assigned randomly based on players' stats. However, in the future, this process and its verification will receive more attention. Rankers will be given national-level quests, so if he's confident in his abilities, he should come to Aspargan's Central Square. MC sat down on a bench after his run and thought, since deciding to get stronger in Circuit, he's been running every day to build up his endurance. This will help him stay in the game longer. After logging out, he felt dizzy. He'd been playing for too long. It was hard to accept the difference between virtual and real reality. He wanted to change his real life and decided to do it with Circuit, but the boundaries between the two worlds blurred. It was even funny. But the truth is, only in the game does he manage to earn incredible amounts of money. Because of this, he decided to work on himself and take the game seriously. Should he treat Circuit as just entertainment? Would he have a normal life like all these people if he didn't play the game? No. The issue of lack of funds won't go away. He still thinks about it. Yes, he will return to where he belongs. Sometime later, the protagonist was walking down the street and, looking at his fingers, said that he gave his armor to the blacksmith, and before heading to the shrine, he looked away and added, no one will notice him there for sure. Inventory. He took out his sword and said, a legendary artifact. After all, it wasn't a dream. Then he was surprised, looking at his hand and shouted, what's going on? Why is it so hot? A bright flash of light exploded around him, and his body was enveloped in energy. He put his hand to his head and said, damn, my head is splitting. The system reported that he had acquired the passive skill, the Atori fighting style. The protagonist then saw several frames in front of his eyes, and looking at his hand, asked, passive skill? So that's how it works. Then he heard a sound and turned around, wondering if someone was there. The guy stood there and asked, seriously, he's got a high level, right? Yeah. MC peeked around the corner and thought, wow, he was talking so easily into the crystal ball. He said, this is a useful thing. Should I buy one of those? After a while, the store clerk thanked him for his purchase, and he went outside and, looking at the bag in his hand, said that he had taken the armor and bought the ball. That's it. Now it's time to go to the Aspargan Sanctuary. With that, he took out the stone. After a while, the clerk smiled and said, "Welcome." They would do everything to make his flight comfortable. "Where is he going?" The protagonist answered, "Bin Caravan." She climbed the stairs and said that then he should look into Rowandel's white horse. He should follow her. After that, they went inside. The protagonist, sighing, said that he was going to the sanctuary in person. He decided to get by with a simple note, and, with these thoughts, he looked at the note, and then Kia approached him and asked, what was taking so long? Should she always wait for him now? He noticed her and asked, "Is she flying with him?" And she smiled and said, "Of course, they have a joint mission." After some time, Bin Caravan, MC stretched his arms and said, "They got to Langer faster." Then Kia pointed her finger forward and told him to look. "Mose, this is the Bin Caravan Tower, a place of general trade." He looked at it and said, "It looks impressive." Then a man approached them and said, "Miss Kia, Mr. Mose, welcome." He was Russell, the Silver Master, a member of the Information Guild. He smiled as he looked at them, and after a while they entered the levitating elevator, and he said they had already reached the 81st floor of the tower. Their floors, 80 through 90, were reserved for guest rooms. They would be located on the 88th in the smelting room. Kia asked, had their master sent him, right? He opened the door slightly and replied, "Yes, he will give you the details upon arrival." Then he closed the door and approaching them, said, "Before he begins, he wants to warn you that everything said here carries the same weight as Master Robin." They bowed, and Kia said, "A Spargan swordsman, the swords he summoned are here." He then looked at the records and said that the two of them had been chosen to carry out the mission assigned to the organization. Recently, artifacts that were not supposed to fall into anyone's hands were illegally brought into Bin Caravan. It's called the Ulysine Rhapsody. Here are the Rhapsody numbers 7 through 14. The protagonist looked up at him and asked, "The score?" He said they said they'd soon put it up for auction on the top floor. Bin Caravan is run by merchants, so no one, including them, can take the item if it's brought in as merchandise. Their job is to buy back the artifacts. Kia will participate in the auction disguised as the aristocrat Marie Ariane, and Mose will play the role of her bodyguard, a knight named Maxim. Sometime later, they arrived at the ball, and the butler said that they welcomed the Ariane family from Perif. Kia walked forward, and MC followed her, and noticed that everyone was looking only at her. To participate in the auction, they needed to go out into the world, a great start. After that, a girl approached them and, extending her hand forward, said, "Welcome, young lady of the Ariane family. She is Akasate von Ram. Should they join their table, if it wouldn't inconvenience her?" She bowed, lifting the hem of her dress, and said that everything was fine, but she was grateful for the offer. After that, they followed Rame, and the protagonist, looking around, wondered why everyone was laughing. After that, they approached the table, and Rame said that she introduced them to Lady Marie. The girls laughed. "Sister, but you can't do that." The protagonist was indignant, and then Rame said she apologized. She wanted to show respect and use the Perif dialect. She'd heard that their homeland is famous for its grapes. Their family has vineyards, right? Kia answered, "Exactly right, and quite a lot." One of the girls was surprised. "Oh my god, so she got her title through farming?" The girl next to her said, "The Akasite family has a rich history. There were many sorcerers in their line who gained power from magical artifacts, and they all served at the royal court. But Ariane's family should find better things to do, not to mention the elven blood in their veins. She can't imagine what it's like to look like one of the slaves for sale on the lower floors of a skyscraper." The girl was surprised. Oh my god. She kept wondering why her necklace was on backwards. It turned out she was quite a simpleton. Rame grinned and told him to be so kind as to straighten the lady's jewelry. The knight approached her and said, "Yes, my lady." He obeyed. He extended his hand to Kea and said he hoped she wouldn't blame him for this. He was simply following his mistress's orders. The next second, the protagonist grabbed his hand and protested. How dare he touch her with his filthy hands? Is he seeking death? Those present cried out in fear, and Kia said, "Oh my god, are all the knights of the Akasite family such idiots, or just him?" The girls were outraged. What did she say? Scoundrel, how dare she? And she said, "Arrogant fools." The grateful lady had honored them with her presence and wanted to resolve this situation with dignity and fairness, as befits aristocrats. She pointed her fan at them and shouted that she, Marie of the Ariane family, had been the victim of a grave insult from the Akasite family, and therefore she challenged their knight to a duel with her knight to defend her honor. "Maxim, is he ready?" He answered, "Yes, my lady. He is the knight of the flowers of the Ariane family, Maxim." He drew his fiery sword and shouted that victory in the battle for the family's honor would be his. At that moment, those present began to mutter among themselves. A duel at the first appearance, then? The Akasite cannot be dealt with so easily. The girl shouted, "Orf, her brave knight. He must defend the family's honor." He stepped forward and answered, "Yes, my lady." He held his sword in front of him and shouted that he, a knight of the Akaste family, defends the good name of this family. The protagonist thought, level 32, not so high. Orf then charged and swung his sword, but MC ducked, dodging the attack, and remarked that it was too slow. He then delivered a powerful blow, shattering Orf's breastplate, and he fell to the ground. Those present were perplexed. With one blow, that's power. Then Rame shouted in irritation, "Longshell, her loyal knight, he must deal with this trash." And he walked forward and said that he, Longshell, the Knight of the Wind, had received orders from Lady Akase, and he would deal with him here and now. With these words, he dealt several blows, but the protagonist spun around, parrying all his attacks. He gritted his teeth and protested. "Really?" And the protagonist asked, "Is that all?" He looked at him in fear and said that he was a monster. Then he fell to the ground, and those present watched in bewilderment. Afterwards, Kia approached the protagonist and said that she, Marie, was deeply disappointed with what was happening here. They had decided to mock a race that had come from distant lands. What kind of prejudice was that? She hoped that in the future, their event would welcome guests from afar much more warmly. They mustn't forget that Bin Caravan is a place where all cultures and peoples of this world meet and interact. The others began to applaud her, and then Lyro approached them and said, "Finally, the moment had come." How long he had been waiting for this, Mose. After some time, Kia removed the jewelry from her ear and said that now their mission had truly begun. The reception had gone well, but the main goal was the auction. The protagonist was sitting on a chair across from her, looking at her with admiration. She wondered why he was staring. He smiled awkwardly and said, "Nothing." She had gotten into the role so well. She began to remove the second earring and said, what was there to play with, especially since she was dealing with nobility. He was surprised. What? When? How? Seriously? She said that she used to be a slave in the house of aristocrats. Their behavior, their thoughts, all of it seemed to have eaten into her. Honestly, as a half-elf who had been enslaved, she wanted to finish him off on the spot. But now she was a swordsman. Kia, who suffered because of her position and status, was already dead. With these words, she smiled. The protagonist lowered his gaze and asked for forgiveness. Then she slapped him on the back, and smiling, said that everything was fine, he should relax. Why was his face so scared? They had decided everything. The master said he would give them a good rest after the task. Therefore, the mission should be successful. After some time, they were riding in a carriage, and Kia said that they had 25 ormacons and another 7,000 in gold. If they bought the artifact for less, fine, but that would not be the end of today. Then they stopped near a building and began to climb the stairs. MC asked if someone else was hunting for the scores, should they get rid of these people? And she noted that it was true, so they would have to haggle to identify them. Then the protagonist adjusted his suit and thought, here is Eden, the Bin Caravan auction room. They walked forward and through the open doors, and he said, well, go ahead. After some time, the auction host stood on stage and said, ladies and gentlemen, and also honored guests, he asks for your attention. Only today, here and now, he will present them with artifacts more valuable than any jewels. From treasures that hold the secrets of the world, to artifacts that will raise their level, they will definitely not leave you indifferent. So they are already beginning. The audience began to applaud. And then an item was brought onto the stage on a cart. The host announced that the first lot for today was a nail from the index finger of the last princess of the destroyed kingdom of Ezrandel. He removed the cape from the container, and then the MC sighed and said, breathe out. The next second, a system window appeared in front of him, which said, Lona Ezrandel's nail, unique. The owner receives the quest, the tragedy of the Ezrandel family. He thought, so the item also comes with a task? Then the host said, the starting price is 3 ormacons. At that moment, shouts were heard in the hall. 3 ormacons. 4, 5, 17. Then the host said, 17 ormacons. 17. Someone will give more? After that, he pointed to the nail and shouted, sold for 17 ormacons. He congratulated them. After that, the protagonist sighed and said how tired he was, and Kia nudged him with her elbow and told him to pull himself together. Mose, the auction had just begun, and he slapped himself on the cheeks and said, right, I need to pull myself together. After that, the host said, so, the next lot for tonight. They looked at the stage in surprise, and he said, the work of the most talented and at the same time most malicious composer. Their attention is given to the Ulysenia Rhapsodies, 7th through 14th. The system window said that this was of unique rank, and the protagonist thought, the information window is black? Perhaps the artifact is not so simple. Then the host raised 4 fingers and said, the starting price is 4 ormacons. Shouts were heard from the audience. 6 ormacons. 8. No, 9. He pointed to the audience and shouted, wow, 9 ormacons. Anyone willing to raise the bid? Then Kia said 25. The others looked at her in surprise, and the host shouted 25. 25 ormacons? Who will give more? The room fell silent. Then the host asked if anyone was there. After that, Lyro said 50,000 gold, 50 ormacons. The host looked around the room in surprise, and the protagonist turned slightly and asked, 50? Does anyone have a lot of money? And Kia extended her hand to him and told him to be quiet and not move. She shouted 75,000 gold, ormacons, 75. The host shouted 75, 75 times. The MC looked at Kia and asked, 75? Is she crazy? That's the amount. And she replied that everything is fine. She's waiting for a reaction. Then Lyro said, 100,000 gold, 100 ormakanami. The host shouted, 100,000 gold. They just said 100,000 gold. That's the highest price for an item in the history of the auction. Then Kia smiled, looking at the protagonist, and said what she said. And then the protagonist turned around and said, we just need to catch this buyer. He was surprised and said, that man. Kia called him, and he said it's him, the one wanted on the A-list. The gambler Lyro. After a while, they went outside. Lyro started running, and MC and Kia ran after him, drawing their swords. After that, Lyro turned around and said, wow, they were looking at him the whole time, and now they're chasing him. The protagonist gritted his teeth and said, Lyro, it's him. And he concentrated the energy in his body and said, so be it. He was waiting for their meeting. The protagonist thought, What kind of aura is this? As if one wrong move and he would be crushed into dust. After that, Lyro put his hand to his chest and said that he should introduce himself. His name is Lyro. After that, MC threw off his cape and said, Kia, be careful. She was surprised. Why? And he thought, Kia is an NPC. She cannot see his level and understand the danger of the situation. Then he said, this man is a real monster. Lyro was level 1 or 2. Then the gambler said, truly, this is a historic moment, Mose. Kia looked at the protagonist and asked, does he know him? He answered, right, in Lindurk, he sold him an artifact. But did he remember it? In response, he shouted, of course. He instantly appeared next to him and added that their meeting was destined. The protagonist asked how he moved so quickly. Then Kia launched several attacks, causing Lyro to jump back. She said she didn't know what kind of fateful meeting they were having, but she wouldn't just stand by and watch. She was Kia now, the swordswoman of Aspergan, and her sword would help her find out the truth. Then she was surprised when Lyro passed her and appeared in front of the protagonist. He said he would show him something, Mose. With that, he snapped his fingers, and they disappeared. Kia began calling the protagonist's name in alarm, and then the protagonist, finding himself in the darkness, looked at Lyro and asked, what was that? And he said that now his friend wouldn't find them. He had to understand. That place wasn't particularly suitable. He wanted to talk face to face. He asked, talk to him. He laughed and said, he was so scared. Mose is immortal. His eyes turned black and he screamed, yes, he is worth fearing. He started laughing maniacally, then sighed and said that during that lottery, he had chosen over 1,000 immortals. Why did they all rush to sell artifacts without even properly trying it out? But he, Mose, he was not one of them. So he had come up with a plan especially for him. He pointed a finger at him, and the protagonist asked, what was he talking about? He told him to remember. Before he became a swordsman, was it really such a coincidence that he met Jeritin? Why was that man's mission in Follop to capture him? Did he think it was a coincidence that they ended up together at Bin Caravan during his mission? He looked ahead in surprise, and Lyro laughed and asked, what? He considered himself lucky? He had calculated everything in advance. MC thought in surprise. What? Why? So it wasn't luck, but Lyro's plan? He knelt down and, dropping the sword from his hands, asked, well, what's going on? Why? And Lyro said that he simply wanted to conquer this world with the hands of immortals. He sat down opposite him and said, come on, Mose, he must give in to his anger. He must unleash this on the Empire. He is capable of it. What will he say? He will rule the world. Plus, he can avenge his family, all the dirty morons who took it from him. The protagonist looked at him and asked, revenge? And he said he must kill everyone who wears the golden crown. It's all in his hands. He chose him to do it. With these words, he placed his hand on his shoulder, and the protagonist thought, so, Lyro was a man who hated the world that deprived him of his family. He became angry at everyone, and now he thirsts for revenge. And Kia? Was meeting her part of his plan too? No, it's not like that. It was his choice. And then he took up his sword and said, Lyro, he is not a pawn in his game. The decision to become a swordsman was his own, as was his desire to train for that purpose. Though of course he was grateful. The pendant he received from him gave him a future. But now he was making choices according to his own desires. Lyro frowned at him and asked, what did he say? Then a system window appeared in front of the protagonist, saying, a quest battle. He must defeat the gambler Lyro. The reward is a hidden ability. He swung his flaming sword and shouted, let's go. He slashed forward, and Lyro stepped back, gritting his teeth and said, Mose, what the hell? Dark liquid began to flow from Lyro's body, and the protagonist thought he saw a black haze around him. He asked, are you scared? That's his power. It's limitless. He can grant it to him too if he wants. And he asked, repeat this. He said it was his last chance, Mose. He must join him or die. He must choose. Then he said he had no choice. He wondered why. Everyone would bow their heads before him if he accepted his offer. Why would he refuse? He would kill those vile minions of the Empire, and the whole world would be at his feet. And MC said he was sorry to disappoint him, but he didn't need it. He asked, really? If that's the case, then there's nothing to be done. He'll have to kill him with his own hands. In response, the protagonist smiled and said, good luck, or something. The next second, a battle began between them. Lyro grabbed the protagonist's sword and, frowning, said that he knew that they, the immortals, were different from them. They saw and knew things that others could not. He knew that they came from their own world. He had to sell his soul to the devil for knowledge of them. Then he pushed the protagonist's sword away and said that he came here to have fun and find meaning in his continued existence, right? And he gave him all of that. He then struck, leaving a scratch on the protagonist's cheek, and shouted, new power, dreams and meaning, fun and pleasure. With every word, he struck again and then pulled away and asked, so why does he refuse? He only seeks fun and pleasure in the world. He doesn't care what happens around him. His hands trembled, and the MC said, yes, that's right. He came here for money, like many others. But thanks to it, he gained incredible power, and with it, he was able to improve this world. He traveled across the continent, visited many places, and now he understands well how much beauty and the unknown is here. Lindurk, Aspargan, Langer, and of course, Bin Caravan. His heart beat joyfully every time he found himself in a new place. Lyro, his gratitude to him knows no bounds, and he understands how he feels. But he apologizes. He cannot fulfill his wish. He will not destroy this world. He asked why. He said that he does not know too much, and he thinks that he himself does not want to destroy everything here. Therefore, he decided to take his pain and bear this heavy burden himself. With these words, he pointed his sword at him, and then Lyro grabbed his head and began to laugh loudly. He screamed, Is he trying to tell him that he, who for years dreamed of revenge, does not want to see the destruction of this world? How can he even spout such nonsense? Fine, if he does not want to listen to him, then he will finish him off here and now. With these words, he pushed off the ground, rushed forward, then grabbed the protagonist's sword and delivered several blows. The system reported that his health level was manatee 70%. Laro screamed, "He must die." Mose, he struck again and again. The system reported his health at 50%. Attention, his health at 30%. Laro shouted, "He must see Mose. This is his hatred and revenge." With these words, he directed a powerful stream of energy at him, and the system reported, "Attention, his health at 10%. The protagonist clenched his teeth and thought, "What's going on? He can't even strike back." But if he doesn't stop him now, Laro will plunge into an endless cycle of destructive desires. This cannot be allowed. He must think of something. The next second, the sword in his hands began to glow. He thought, "That's it." The system reported that he destroyed 100 monsters. The effect of the Atoria brand is activated. A new skill has been acquired. A system window appeared in front of him, which said, "Destructive Flame, Solar Storm. Class, Active. To activate the skill, you must master the Atoria brand. If there are pieces of Atoria's Rising Sun armor in the inventory, this was activated automatically. Summon Solar Storm. The range is 250 meters from the player. Damage from 12,245 to 15,560. Burn damage, 1,226 per second. The effect duration is 100 seconds. The cooldown is up to 3 times. The flames can be reflected by saint-level skills." MC looked at this in surprise and asked, "An active skill? Solar Storm?" The next second, his eyes filled with white, he swung a sword covered in flames, and then plunged it into the ground in front of him, and streams of fire flew in all directions. It began to hit Laro, and he began to scream loudly and said, "His wife and children." Horrible memories surfaced in his head, and he said, "Vile soldiers of the Empire, he will never forgive them. He will take revenge on them." He remembered how the boy tearfully begged, "Daddy, please, he mustn't kill him, uncle." Then, with bloodied hands, he looked at him in surprise and said, "It wasn't his fault. It was all them, the Imperial rats. He had done nothing wrong." He thought that even then it was clear to him that he had done wrong, but it was already impossible to undo anything. And even though much time had passed since those events, he was still grateful to him for stopping him. At that moment, the protagonist asked, "Laro?" And he began to dissolve into thin air and said, perhaps deep down he regretted not having acted differently then. He apologized. "Mose, goodbye." But MC extended his hand to him and then looked up and thought, Laro didn't mean to, but he had atoned for his guilt. After that, he returned and with tears in his eyes, thought that he would always remember him. At that moment, Kia noticed him and running up to him shouted, "Mose!" Then the system reported that the hidden trait, Lucky Destroyer, had been acquired. Sometime later, the protagonist was on an airship. He looked at the system window and said, "Lucky Destroyer." Huh? It said name, Mose. Class Swordsman. Hidden trait, Lucky Destroyer. He thought about how the Lucky Destroyer trait, which he received after the fight with Laro, unlocked 2 skills. Lucky Destruction. Level 1, Class Active. Activated by using 1 luck stat. Objects found in the ruins of ancient dungeons can be encased in a sphere. The level of the item encased in a sphere depends on the skill level, and the cooldown is 72 hours. He thought about how Lucky Destruction allows him to create spheres from objects. The next system window said, Destroyer Fusion. Level, Maximum, Class Active, allows you to store a sphere in your inventory. Spheres of the same level can be combined with each other, up to a maximum of 3. The effects of the combined spheres reach their maximum values, but there's a chance of a monster spawning from this sphere. The cooldown is 48 hours. He thought that combining the Destroyer allows you to store and combine the resulting spheres. Perhaps Laro used this skill when distributing items to players. It felt like he'd left it as a legacy. Now he intends to act in such a way that such unfortunate people as Laro no longer appear here. After talking with him, it became clear that in this virtual world, those they call NPCs possess human emotions, such as anger or empathy. This means they are the same people as players. They exist on par with those NPCs who simply follow a program algorithm. They are noticeably different from them. So can Circuit then be considered just a game? It's more like a parallel reality. Then Kia approached him and asked if he was okay. He replied, "Well, yes." She asked, "Are you sure? What will he do on vacation?" He replied thoughtfully that he didn't even know, that he had no plans. And where was she going? She folded her arms across her chest and said she wanted to visit her family. He asked, "Home?" She looked out the window and replied, "Yeah, she's from a small village in Ajarusa." He said he'd come over sometime, and she smiled and said she'd be waiting. Sometime later, the capital of Aspargan. The protagonist walked down the street and sighing said he wasn't in the mood at all. Then he added thoughtfully, after talking with Kea, he realized it was time to rest. Then he heard a sound from the ball and looking at it, asked, "Who is it?" Sharon appeared there and smiling said, "Finally he answered. How is he doing?" Sometime later, they sat in a bar and, clinking glasses, shouted, "He's happy to see you again." Guile, smiling, looked at the protagonist and noticed that they hadn't seen each other for a long time. Sharon asked what he'd been doing to make him famous throughout the game. He smiled awkwardly and said he'd been working odd jobs here and there. He'd gotten noticed in a lot of places, so everyone started talking about him. Then Guile coughed and said that his younger brother, would tell them what had happened to him during that time. Then he showed them the ring on his finger and, smiling, shouted for them to check it out. He and his girlfriend had gotten paired magic rings. Sharon smiled and said how cool it was. Vincent pointed at it and asked, "Quite a quality item, huh?" Then MC looked at him and asked, "Did he get a girlfriend?" He was congratulating him. He thanked him in return. And then Sharon covered her mouth with her hand and said that she'd heard she was an elf. He certainly set the bar high. The protagonist then spat out the drink and thought in surprise, "An elf?" And Guile asked, "What's so special about that?" The protagonist thought about meeting an NPC. It was the first time he heard about such a thing. If you recall the conversation with Lyro, those who have traded reality for this game no longer distinguish between NPCs and real people. But for now, he sees that people, like him, are surprised by Guile's words, although he personally finds it difficult to decide how to perceive such things. And then Guile called him and said, "No, sir, that sounds strange. Can I just call him Mose?" He said, "Yes, of course." He blushed with embarrassment, looked away, and said he didn't do anything special back then. Thanks to him, he was able to pay for college. He was struggling financially back then, both in circuit and in real life, but now things are much better. He's grateful, Mose. In response, he smiled and said, "Well, what's wrong? If you weren't with them, they wouldn't have saved their wounded uncle and escaped that trap." So he's grateful to him. Then Sharon added, "Frankly, such meetings are only possible thanks to Mose. If it weren't for him, they would all have fallen victim to the schemes of the vile Silborn." Vincent then added that he'd heard of people who suffered because of a similar personality, and they all quit the game after that. Sharon added, "And they also defeated the boss." Guile smiled and remarked that without Mose, none of this would have worked. And at that moment, he thought, Lyro, the chance he gave him affected other people too. Then Sharon smiled and, raising her hand, said that by the way, she was quitting. The others shouted in surprise, "What?" And Vincent folded his arms and said that he knew it would end like this. She said that the work wasn't very good, so she decided to focus on circuit. Then she called up her inventory and added, "Yes, she wants to show off. They should see." She bought it herself. She took out a bow and added that it was a rare one. How long had she been looking for that? And the protagonist thought, she bought a rare item. Wow. The protagonist thought he knew how much pain it took to earn such an artifact. Guile and Sharon both had normal jobs. What about him? Though he tried hard, ever since he'd earned the Florence Star, he'd been consistently lucky, acquiring high-level artifacts and skills easier than everyone else. Instead of improving himself, he'd relied on luck and taken everything for granted. He'd tried before, asked for a chance, promised himself he'd enjoy the game like Guile. Guile and Sharon, what was he doing now? He should go back to the beginning and give it his all. Then he said, "Guys, it's been so long." He suggested they do a quest together. He extended his hand forward and thought that back then, he hadn't yet known how this would turn out. Sometime later, he was walking through a cave, and Guile, sword in hand, turned around and said he didn't think it would turn out like this. They stood near the cliff and shouted that there were too many of them. A multitude of monsters were approaching them, and the system reported the destruction of a monster colony in the Dummit Mountain Mine. Monitor lizards, 0 of 1,568. Unknown, 0 out of 1. Not long before, they were riding in a carriage, and a system window appeared in front of the protagonist, which said, "The destruction of a monster colony in the Dummit Mountain Mine." A colony of monsters was discovered in the largest mine on the Aspargan continent. According to intelligence, the monsters are monitor lizards. There is a risk of collapse of the mine due to the rapid expansion of the colony. He must hurry to destroy it. Quest class, Wyvern, quest level B+, reward 5,500 gold and bonuses from the Lord of Dammit Fortress. MC thought, monitor lizards, then. Then he looked at the others and asked, "Does anyone know anything about these creatures?" Guile opened the book and said he'd found one that said they belonged to a family of deep mountain monsters, living in packs of up to 100 individuals. Vincent was surprised, 100 in packs? And they needed to destroy an entire colony, right? Sharon said that, if the quest was for a Wyvern class, there would be more than 500 monsters, right? Guile screamed in fear. How many? Then the protagonist said someone else had to lead the colony. If they got rid of the leader, the remaining individuals wouldn't pose a threat. Vincent noticed he was right and added that the leader usually stayed in the rear, observing the battle. To lure him out, they could take control of key areas for the colony. Guile smiled and said, "Yes, well, will they decide on roles?" Then he looked at Sharon and told her to go to the top of the mountain and find traces of the colony. In response, she smiled and gave him a thumbs up, saying, "Okay, they can rely on her." He added that since he had magic at his disposal, he would help him in battle, Mose. Vincent pointed to himself and said that he would cover them with a shield. The protagonist was surprised. What? And then Sharon looked at him and said, "He's the backbone of their team." And Guile added that he understood that this might be difficult for him. He apologized, but with this plan, their chances of victory are the highest. They are counting on him, Mose. Then he smiled and said that he agreed. After a while, they were descending a stone staircase, and Sharon, holding a glowing ball in her hand, walked forward. She shouted for the others to watch their step. The protagonist asked how much longer they had to go, and then she waved her hand and said, "Stop." There were some sounds coming from below. Vincent held up a shield in front of him and said that he thought they were there. Guile said, "Wait a second. Does the road end here?" They walked into an open area, and Vincent said, "There's a cliff right here." Guile shouted, "He must be careful, he mustn't fall." The next second, a red glow appeared next to him, and the others shouted, "Guile!" The next second, a monitor lizard attacked him from behind, and Sharon shouted, "Careful!" The protagonist quickly dashed in front of the monster and stopped its attack with his sword. Guile fell to the ground in fear and shouted, "Mose!" Then the protagonist pointed his sword at the monster's neck. At that moment, Vincent leaned over to Guile and asked if he was okay. He replied, "Yes, he's fine." Then, many more red eyes appeared in the darkness, and the protagonist said, "There are too many." Guile looked at the system window and shouted in surprise, "What? 1,500? What is he doing?" And then Sharon ran to the side and, taking a stance, shouted, "Everyone, get into position as agreed." He replied, "Aha." Then he was horrified, noticing several monitor lizards approaching him. But at that moment, Vincent ran towards him, and standing in front of him, pushed the monsters back with his shield, shouted, "Guile!" Energy burst from his shield, and he pushed them back even further. He said, "What monsters?" He clenched his teeth and added, "There are too many of them." The protagonist stood next to him and said that their position was terrible. They can't form up as planned. Then Guile shouted, "Sharon." She fired an arrow, but the monitor lizards were approaching faster and faster, and one of them put his hand on her weapon. Guile thought, if they block her, they won't be able to save her. They shouted, "Over here." In response, she shouted that she understood. MC began attacking all the monsters in front of him, and shouted that he would take the hit. Sharon then ran over the monsters' heads to the rest of the team. The protagonist, breathing heavily, looked at the opponents and thought that killing them would take a very long time. Guile said in fear, "They." At that moment, Sharon shouted that he had to pull himself together. He wanted to protest. There were too many of them. The plan had failed, and they had nowhere to retreat. Then Sharon took aim and asked, "Is he suggesting surrender? They should at least try." Then Vincent raised his shield in front of himself again and noticed that she was right. They couldn't just give up, and they hadn't seen their leader yet. They had to at least find out what he was like. At that moment, the protagonist thought, what could he do? Try to break through the pack? No, he would take too much damage. Then he noticed the system window appear, and he smiled. It said he'd successfully destroyed 100 monsters, the Atoria brand effect had been activated, and he could use the destructive flame solar storm skill. He said, "What timing?" Vincent said he'd protect him to the max, so he should try to break through. MC then told him to wait. He'd do it. He needs to hold his shield tight, uncle. After that, he headed towards the monsters, while Vincent called out to him in alarm. The next second, a powerful explosion thundered in front of them, and after the smoke cleared, the protagonist stood in the center of the scattered monster carcasses and declared, "Forward." The system reported, "Monitor lizards, 415 out of 1,568. Unknown, 0 out of 1. Flames from the protagonist's sword scattered in all directions, and the number of defeated monitor lizards increased with each swing of the protagonist. Vincent, watching what was happening, said, "Amazing." Guile added, "Yes, that's their Mose." And Sharon thought she knew he was strong, but not that strong. She said without blinking, "He took out an entire crowd. Incredible." At that moment, the protagonist continued the battle, and the system reported that the monitor lizards were 975 out of 1,568. After that, he said they had dealt with half of them. The rest shouted, "Of course, we must finish them off." Guile declared, "They must begin." The protagonist thought the whole team was confidently advancing, and they had managed to stop the monitor lizard attack. He recalled the bright days, nostalgia. Then system windows appeared in front of them, and Sharon was surprised. What was this? There was only one unknown left in the task. Vincent asked, "The boss finally?" Guile stood back to back and asked, "Where is he?" And then Sharon shouted, "Guys, they have to look deeper." They were surprised. Deeper? After that, MC looked forward in surprise. Sharon said, "This." Guile asked, "What?" A man, a hunchbacked man, walked forward in front of them, and pointing his finger forward, said that his arms and legs were normal. The protagonist asked, "Who is he?" And he answered that he is a fallen man. He has everything like them, but he fell. He asked, "What do you mean?" He doesn't understand, and he pointed his finger behind himself and said, "He has a hunchback, so there you have it. He is a fallen man." Mom threw the hunchback off a cliff. Vincent said that this is simply inhumane. Guile said, "Why?" MC asked, "Are there other people like him here?" He answered, "Yes, but they turned into bones. They look like his mom and dad. Who will they throw this time?" And then Guile shouted that they didn't come for that. He replied that he didn't believe it. Mom used to say the same thing, and they also killed his friends. They took care of him when he was abandoned, and he taught them to live in peace. The protagonist asked, "A wish?" He said, "A hole, to destroy it." He was surprised. "What?" And then Guile pointed his hand to the side and shouted, "If he collapsed the mountain, all the nearby villages would be buried under stones. People would die." And he said that there were more bones here than living people in the area. The king of the village throws everyone into the hole, those without arms or legs, and those with a hunchback. They disobey. He throws. The king killed moms and dads. Sharon asked Viceroy. Guile said, "Oh my god." Vincent said that he threatened them with death. He made parents disown their own children, just so the village would look good. Crazy idiot. Then Sharon said thoughtfully, "So that's why the people weren't happy when they took on this case." He agreed. They were more scared than anything. Then the guy shouted that if they interfered with his business, he'd get angry, really angry. The others looked at him silently, and MC thought, no matter the reward, they didn't like the idea of having to decide who lives and who dies. Surely this was the first time they'd had to make such a difficult choice. He himself never imagined he'd face such a dilemma in a regular quest. Vincent said, they're putting people's lives at risk. But do they have to kill them all? Sharon agreed, it was just awful. Guile asked, is there any other way? And then the protagonist approached them and asked what they were going to do. Vincent pointed a finger behind him and asked, maybe there was another way? How about trying to talk to him peacefully? The protagonist looked at the boy, then walked up to them and bending down said that he apologized for killing his friends. They had to. They attacked them. He must listen. He must not get rid of the hole. If he did, the village would collapse and his mother would die. He said no, he didn't want her to die. And he said that they would deal with the bad king and then people like him would not be thrown here. The boy asked, the bad king will not do this to anyone again? He didn't want anyone to turn into bones again, and his friends to be sad because of the dead. He said that in that case they should leave here with them. By leaving the mountain, he could help other sad fallen children. He asked, other fallen? He answered, right. He would help other people, and they would punish this king. Then the boy extended his little finger and asked, does he promise? If he promises, then they will do as he says. He shook his little finger and said he promised. Then he sat up and added, but now he had an idea. Sometime later, not far from Mount Demont, the Information Guild in Laidwood, the protagonist was sitting at the table, the orb lay in front of him, and he said that they hadn't seen each other for a long time. How was she? Everything all right? Then a matter came up that he would like to entrust to her. There will be an errand. How about Knight Maxim? After some time, Sayre came to this place and said, wow, what a surprise. Not a single monitor lizard left. Vincent smiled and said that they tried. He said that they really were great. Here are 6,000 gold pieces honestly earned. He placed several chests of coins and thanked everyone for their work. After that, he left in a carriage and the others left the cave. And Vincent, folding his arms across his chest, said, since they were done with business here, they would go to Castle Demont. And Guile looked away and thought, hoping Mose had everything under control. 2 hours ago, Vincent said he wanted to get the reward for the quest and get revenge on that king who ordered the children thrown off the cliff. Sharon said she supported him. Guile asked, do they want to have their cake and eat it too? And then Vincent said thoughtfully, there must be a way to do that. Then the protagonist said there was. He was sure they knew Circuit was popular because of its freedom in terms of gameplay. By freedom, he meant that any event they could imagine is possible within the game. The goal of the quest was to destroy all the monitor lizards, right? Vincent clenched his fist and said, so that's why he told that kid to leave the mine. He answered, spot on. If everything went according to his plan, they would be able to get revenge and get the reward for completing the quest. Sometime later, Kia was sitting on her horse, and the people gathered in the square were surprised. They were from the squad of knights. Will the king finally be punished? Then Kia pointed her sword forward and shouted, Laurie, ruler of Demont Castle. Now he will answer for the evil he has committed. MC looked at her and thought, she came just in time, Kia. After that, Laurie came down to them and said, unexpectedly, what is a noble lady doing in this god-forsaken place? The people watched in bewilderment, and then the man knelt down in front of his horse and shouted, Miss, he asks her to listen. In all the world, there are no more beautiful eyes than those of his little daughter. Tears appeared in his eyes. He put his hand to his chest and added that he had been threatened with death if he did not throw her off the cliff, simply because she is disabled. The threat came from the king himself. Hire sat on the next horse and said, oh my god. Proof of guilt was just handed to you on a silver platter, Laurie. He removed his hood and added, is everything these people say true? Laurie said, so he's from the Order of the 14 Knights. He's devoted to his country, like no one else. He clenched his fist and added, healthy citizens are the foundation of the Empire's future. Those cursed from birth have no right to walk this land. Vincent asked irritably, what a moron. Sharon said irritably, what an idiot. And Laurie added that he took advantage of his position to solve a problem, and the politics of these lands are not up for discussion unless the Emperor himself intervenes. Then Hire asked thoughtfully, is that really it? There's one problem, that's not why he came. He was brought here by some rumors. The Information Guild said there was a quest for swordsmen here, and the gist of it was to take revenge on a certain lord from the castle. Laurie was surprised. What? A swordsman? Retribution? Who dared do that? He pointed his finger forward and shouted for everyone to be arrested right here and now. The guards rushed to the attack and the people screamed in fear. It wasn't them. Then Hire said, Laurie, what is he doing? He was hired by the Order of 14 Knights, and he confidently serves the very shrine. Everything he said contradicts the laws of this. Creatures like him poison this continent, not understanding who the real trash is here, and he screamed. How dare he insult him, the lord of the castle? He asked, what? His behavior was starting to irritate him. Energy began to concentrate around his body, and he added, he should take a closer look at who stands before him. However, since this was not his task, he would not interfere. He smiled, and Laurie asked in surprise, what? Another energy began to concentrate around him, and he screamed, what the hell? At that moment, Kia decapitated him with one easy movement. The residents were perplexed. Is he dead? Really? Is it true? They are saved. They are grateful to her. Glorious night. Then a system window appeared, saying to destroy monsters in the Demont Mountain Mine. Monitor lizards, 1568 out of 1568. Unknown, 1 out of 1. Task completed. Vincent looked at this and noticed that Mose was right. Guile said, quests really can be done this way. Then Sharon shouted, Mose, he must take a look. She found this in the mine. It seems that guy left it for him. The protagonist took it and asked, a letter? It said, his dear fire friend. He's grateful to him. As promised, he and his friends left. He must head to this point. There is a large ship there, but he doesn't know what's inside, and he is afraid to approach. MC asked, a ship? But from where? And then Kia shouted, Mose? Does he even know how long it took her to get here? Will his conscience allow him to? Before she could finish, he smiled and said that he missed her. Kia? They haven't seen each other for a long time. She blushed with embarrassment and replied, yes, exactly. After a while, they were all sitting in the establishment, and Kia asked, so he needs someone to help him with this, and he thinks it'll be her, right? Then Sharon looked at her and asked, what's her relationship to Mose, Kia? She asked, who? How can I explain it? In short, they're probably colleagues. Then the protagonist spat out the drink, and she smiled and added, as the immortals would call it, right? And Vincent started pounding the protagonist on the back and said he was a man. He needed to pull himself together. After that, the protagonist thought they were more than just colleagues. Never mind, he still needed to find that ship before leaving the location. After some time, he descended the stone stairs and, approaching the water, said it had become quieter here. I wonder if it's because the monitor lizards are gone? Is the place mentioned in the letter even here? But there's no sign of a ship. But before he could finish speaking, a ship appeared from the water and he shouted, it can't be. The system reported that ruins have been discovered, the ship of the celestial ruler. Does he wish to turn the ruins, the ship of the celestial ruler, into a core? He clarified whether he wants to make a core out of this. What a question. Of course he does. The next second, the ship lit up and then turned into a small sphere in the protagonist's hands. A system window appeared, stating, Heavenly Ruler, type transport, legendary, power, 1,400,000 magic power, and 2 square supergiant gravity crystals. Maximum speed, 861 kilometers per hour, the speed of Gynar chasing his prey. Rotation speed, 102 thunderclouds colliding with the goddess of the winds. Maximum passenger capacity, 850. After a while, Hare approached him and noticed that they had met again, for the umpteenth time. MC looked at him in surprise, and he smiled and said he was surprised and intrigued. It was the first time he'd seen the immortals so often. The protagonist said he didn't think Hare would be here either, and he said they were both interested in Demant Castle. He replied, perhaps he'll blame Kia for the king's murder? He clarified. Will he accuse? No, according to the code of the Order of the 14 Knights. The protagonist said Kia didn't break the law. He folded his arms and replied, well, the order does indeed act according to established principles, and what he said is correct, but he only needs to know that he is a human, just like him. He was surprised and he said that they did everything right. He hates those who torture and keep people in fear. Therefore, he wants to express his gratitude to him and that young swordswoman. Then he turned towards the forest and said that was all. MC put his hand to his chest and thought, a human, like him. After a while, Kia fixed her hair and, putting her hand to her chest, said, it seems the last couple of mugs yesterday were unnecessary. The protagonist followed her and smiling said, yeah, that's obvious. Then she added, but at least this way she found new friends. He smiled and remarked that he was glad to hear that she considered them as such. She said, does he see Mose? She likes immortals. They have no prejudices about this world. They treat her like a human and don't care that she's a half-elf, so she likes him. With these words, she turned to him, and he awkwardly scratched the back of his head and thought, Kia. Then she waved her hand and added, it's almost lunch, so he should hurry. After some time, they were all sitting at the table, and Vincent asked, so, Mose, what are his plans? He asked, his. Be thinking of finding a new quest. Do they want to join? Vincent happily answered, of course. Guile added that with him, he's not afraid of anything. Sharon asked, what is he doing? He should earn his own money, and he laughed and said, I think she was delighted. Vincent got up from the bench and said, then go ahead. Then Kia asked, where are they going this time? The protagonist replied that he hadn't thought about it yet. Maybe they would return to Aspargan? She said, I see. And then he looked at her and said, Kia, she must come with them. She looked at the hand extended to her in surprise, then smiled and said, I'd love to. Sometime later, they were on a floating ship. Guile looked out the window and said, wow, Mose, what is this? Vincent looked around and said, he's kidding me. Sharon said, it's brilliant. And Kia, looking at the protagonist, asked where the ship came from, where he got it. He replied that it just happened. Then she looked away and asked, who is this? The protagonist said that he would introduce Elsha, the fairy of the sparkling tree. She is the guardian spirit and the foundation of this ship. She said, welcome. She controls the ship under the orders of her new master, Mose. Soon they would reach their destination, the continent of Aspargan. MC looked at her and asked, they just boarded and have already arrived. After a while they docked, and Kia, descending the stairs, asked, Mose, isn't he by any chance a secret wizard of the White Fortress or something? He smiled and replied, of course not. He turned and added, follow him everyone. They should go to the Information Guild. Then he noticed people crowded near the building and asked, what's the matter? He began to push his way through the crowd, saying that he apologized. They should let him pass. He approached Sayer and asked what had happened. In response, he offered his deepest apologies, but he had some bad news to report. All the Information Guild offices on the continent had closed. Sharon was surprised. All the offices in Aspargan at once? Guile asked, but why? At that moment, a man ran up to them and shouted, "Attention! Everyone to the square, now!" The others turned around in surprise, and the protagonist said, "This is not good." People around were surprised. It couldn't be that. Were they imagining it? Or was this mukbang on Circuit TV? They looked at the huge system window and wondered, are the bodies real? If this is a prank, then it's a bad one. The protagonist thought, what the hell is going on? The system reported that the circuit is under their control. Immortals, they can stop the broadcast themselves. The protagonist thought, under control? Immortal? Is it an NPC? Then the character on the screen said that he was addressing the immortals. As prophesied, they have come to their lands. But who allowed them? The sun goddess Bellica? Or Bellis, the moon goddess? No, they entered this world without permission. No one welcomes their presence because the immortals have invaded their world to destroy, plunder, and deceive them. Did they really think they would just stand by and watch this? They must see. In a moment, the lives of these invaders will end, but they can't return to their world. MC thought, these are innocent people. Then the character said, oh no, immortals. He is Lydorn, Prince of Logis, and he declares war on them. The system reported a new quest has been activated. A high-level unification quest, Prince of Rebellion, S difficulty. They must defeat the Prince of the Logis Kingdom, the extraordinary genius Lydorn. History. Prince of the Logis Kingdom, Lydorn, was known among the people for his calm demeanor. However, now, driven by hatred, he has raised his sword against the players. Lydorn has resorted to killing innocent players because not all players play by the rules. Some have committed inhumane acts, enjoying what they couldn't do in their own world. He decided to confront that portion of the immortals who continue to commit atrocities in the world of Circuit. After Prince Lydorn's appearance yesterday, panic erupted on the Circuit forums. Some players perceived it as a normal event. However, there were those who were concerned about the AI's excessive intelligence. Many users on the forums expressed support for Circuit TV. Posts appeared from time to time in which players expressed sympathy for Lydorn. Soon, many players began searching for teams to join quests. In a short time, nearly millions of players had united to fight back against Lydorn's tyranny. Sometime later, the protagonist was flying on a ship. He looked out the window, and then Kia approached him, holding 2 cups of drinks in her hands, and told him to take them. She had made some kefale tea. He thanked her in return, then looked at his reflection in the drink and asked, what do you think of all this? She took a sip and asked, what do you think? She didn't have any particular thoughts. She was simply surprised, probably because she had been at war since birth. Whether it's a war with fate to avoid being abandoned by her parents, or a war with wolves to avoid becoming their prey, a desperate struggle, a slave's fight for survival, or a war against those who laugh at her for the mingling of 2 bloods. This is the kind of war she speaks of. She spent her entire life needing to protect herself, so other people's squabbles have always been left out. The protagonist said he should apologize, and she looked out the window and said everything was fine. A mage once said that their world is unstable, that passages between dimensions are constantly opening and closing. It seems that every race that doesn't belong to this world came from another reality, and elves are one of those races. The protagonist said, wow, he didn't know that. She added that at first, many attacked them, persecuted them. However, in their day, 2 entire civilizations finally found common ground. Although half-breeds are still viewed with disdain, discrimination hasn't completely disappeared. But now there are immortals, like him, Mose, bright and brave individuals. Sometimes they cause a little trouble, but that's human nature. The truth is, civilizations have developed thanks to them. Many locals have come to love immortals. The protagonist asked what she, Kia, thought personally. What did she think of them? She answered, as she had said, she liked immortals. They don't call her half-breed, subhuman, or half-elf. To them, she's just Kia, and he, Mose, is one of them. He answered, of course, he's grateful. He blushed with embarrassment and looked out the window. Then she added, I wonder what it would be like if looked at the world the way he and his friends did. He thought that some people didn't understand and didn't accept players. Lydorn, for example. He thought he had his own motives, too. It's always hard to watch other people's grief and suffering, but the method of fighting he'd chosen harms the innocent, and the problems aren't getting any easier. Ultimately, no matter what drives him, this can't be, and he will put an end to it. Lydorn. After some time, the fallen knights lay on the ground. One of the survivors put his hand to his wounded arm and said, impossible. An entire army of players and NPCs was destroyed in the blink of an eye. Was he even beatable? At that moment, Lydorn sat on a creature in front of him and said, Black Griffin Cavalry forward. He then shouted loudly. After that, Jihyun announced that she had a grandiose event in Circuit next. They received word that the Wild Rose Guild, which was the first to head to the event battle, had been completely annihilated. Immediately after the battle, Prince Lydorn directed his cavalry to lay siege to Toiko and Meiji's castles. Kia looked at the orb and noticed that the situation was getting worse. The protagonist folded his arms and agreed that they should join and help them. Vincent looked at him and asked, do you plan to join the battle right now? He was surprised. How else? He had to do something too. He looked at the others and asked, what about them, guys? He wasn't going to force anyone, they should decide for themselves. They started exchanging glances, and then Vincent said, they would like to join, Mose? He asked. Really? He said obviously that he was much stronger than each of them, and if he led their squad, they would follow him. Sharon noticed that Uncle was right. Their team of 13 needed a leader. No one could handle this better than him. Giles smiled and said exactly who, if not him, and he put his hands in front of him and told them to listen. He was not the kind of person who could command them. Then he looked at Kia, and after that he nodded and hit himself in the chest, said, but the situation is getting worse by the second. If they really believe him, then they should become his comrades in this fight. Vincent smiled and said, well said, of course they will. Sharon added, they have nothing to fear if Mose leads them. Guile clenched his fist and said, follow him even to the ends of the earth. Kia placed her hand on her chest and said, she, Kia, the swordswoman of Aspargan, promises to support him to the very end. In response, he thanked each of them. He promises that he will always move only forward. They must trust him and follow him. After some time in the field, the knight turned around and asked what was wrong with their troops. The man behind him shouted that they had 20 tank warriors left, and 10 of them had low health. He clenched his teeth and said, damn, how can they even stop Lydorn? Then a voice came from the orb in his sack. Can he hear it? He must answer. He took out the orb, and a voice came from it. It's King Tiger. Most of the warriors are dead. How are they? He answered. The same thing. Almost no one is left. They can't fight any further. He said they need to join forces. Their unit is now on the riverbank near the plain. He replied, acknowledged, they're moving. Everyone heard. Before he could finish speaking, the man behind him pointed forward and shouted for them to look. They were here again. They got here so quickly. What are they doing? They have to run to the plains. They have to join up with the others. Hurry. And then the warrior stayed behind and shouted that he would try to buy time. They have to attack, you idiots. At that moment, a spear came towards him, and he shouted, how fast? He thought it was the end. The next second, he heard a spell, Artra, Cage, Rano. A bright flash of energy spread around, and the mage told him to go to the others. The warrior thanked him, and then was surprised. Wait, it's the same guy, right? The same player who was the first to go to the White Tower. Third in the official mage rankings, Kellyan. After a while, dark clouds appeared over the camp. The commander-in-chief slammed his fist on the table in anger and shouted, are they insane? They really mean to tell you that an army of nearly 11,000 users and NPCs was wiped out? They asked him again, can't he see it? The guy replied that it wasn't just an enemy army of NPCs. They were lucky to be alive at all and able to get out of there. Another man started shouting, are they lucky? But their guild was completely wiped out. What were they even doing while they were being killed on the front lines? At that moment, the guy got angry and yelled at the man, what? Is this their fault? How old is this idiot? Kiho shouted, enough. Now is not the time. They need to quickly build a camp and fortify their defenses. At that moment, everyone turned around in surprise and looked away, not understanding what was happening. It turned out their enemies were advancing. The leader shouted, all tanks, form a single line of defense. The boy shouted, hurry up, act fast, or have they decided to die here? They must cast a spell on the tanks immediately. Everyone replenished their mana reserves. Kellyan looked around in bewilderment, watching the horror unfolding in the camp. The army had attacked with incredible speed, and he wondered if they could even hold out. Their enemy army consisted of a multitude of enormous birds. Lydorn apologized to his faithful comrades, saying that they had followed him, abandoning their country, their throne, and their honor. Their loyalty to him is such that even the great sun goddess cannot eclipse it. He foolishly entrusted his soul to the ruler of the Ainu. Knights who follow the enraged prince, forward. If he can take at least some of the enemy immortals with him to hell, then he is ready to die even 100 times. He shouted, spread your wings now. With these words, the army went into battle. A serious battle broke out between the opponents. Blood immediately began to spill, and countless soldiers and troops perished all around. Kellyan channeled his magical powers toward his allies to aid them, but he knew his strength was running low. If this continued, they would be destroyed. He had absolutely no idea what to do. At that moment, the system reported that an Elsha player was requesting a mana source, the requested amount being 1,000. He was surprised and asked, what is this? What kind of player was this, asking for so much, and how strong was he? Although that was completely unimportant right now, he pressed the yes button. At that moment, he wondered what was going on. A golden statue appeared on one of the airships, and he noticed it and asked, what is it? Special tubes emerged from this airship, through which the spirit of Elsha observed the onset of the ongoing battle. Light shower, maximum coverage, 1,871 people. Open fire. At that moment, gunfire began from the magical ship. Many griffins were destroyed, and the boy asked fearfully, what's going on? No one in the army understood who they were. But why were they standing? Let them attack now, forward, before the enemy becomes confused. The battle continued despite the strange changes, and MC asked if everyone was ready. The guys looked confidently ahead, and the protagonist announced that they would now act. They must march against the prince. At that moment, the battle began to intensify and become more serious. Suddenly, everything around glowed with magical light, and the protagonist was stunned. When the dust cleared a little, he loudly shouted, fight! After these words, many of their opponent's knights were destroyed. Sharon was one of the attackers, skilled in the use of bows and arrows. One of the knights shouted to Mose that he would hold them back and tell him to move forward. He cried out in response that he understood everything, when suddenly a knight appeared behind him and shouted for him to die. He was stunned, and turning around, he saw someone strike him in the chest. It was Kellyan, who thanked him and said that thanks to him, he had escaped death. He hadn't known there was a player with such a huge flying ship. Mose rose from his seat and replied that his name was Mose and that he was pleased to meet him. They shook hands when Kia suddenly exclaimed that now was not the time for such pleasantries. Mose agreed and said that they should talk later, and Kellyan shouted that he agreed too. At that moment, they suddenly disappeared and continued the battle with incredible speed. Mose destroyed one opponent after another, deftly dodging all attacks. He noticed that a fast knight had now appeared before him, difficult to get rid of, and it wasn't as simple as he had previously thought. These freaks were strong, each one of them equal in strength to a small squad of ordinary warriors. In that case, he would use the Atori sword. When he cast the spell, everything around him lit up with a bright flame. This flame spread everywhere the protagonist was with his weapon. His opponents gritted their teeth in anger when they saw this, and the protagonist realized he had gone too deep. At that moment, they pounced on him again, when suddenly Kia appeared next to him, determined to protect him. They stood with their backs to each other, and Mose turned around and asked her curiously, "Is she okay?" She smiled and replied, "Of course, don't worry." After these words, the protagonist gripped the sword even tighter and told her not to worry, because he would protect her. Kia turned to him in surprise, then smiled silently and said she could handle it herself. She rushed toward the enemies and told him to take better care of himself. Mose thought that was a good thing, and that there was something he could do. He frowned and looked confidently ahead, when suddenly something alerted him and he paused. He saw a familiar face and announced, "Here we are." It was Lydorn, level 144. He was now directly in front of him. Lydorn appeared to be standing at the top of the slope, but suddenly he shifted, and Mose screamed in anticipation. Their swords clashed as Lydorn leaped at him, and Mose thought he wouldn't be able to withstand such a blow for long, when he was suddenly thrown aside by another blow from Lydorn. As he fell to the ground, the system reported that he had been dizzy. He clutched his head and realized everything he saw was swimming before his eyes. Lydorn approached him and shouted for him to die, swinging his sword, but Mose irritably thought he hadn't even dreamed of such a thing. At that moment, Vincent protected him with his shield, which surprised Mose. It cut his face very badly, causing him to cry out in pain. Lydorn asked, "They decided to stand in his way? That was very presumptuous. Do they even know why they call him the White Wolf?" It's because those who decide to oppose him always die from his wolf fangs. At that moment, Vincent was stunned and was destroyed by a sword that was pointed at him from behind. The sword pierced the guy and his blood spilled. He cried out in pain for the last time, and the protagonist screamed, "Vincent!" He was horrified, and he said that he killed him with one blow. How painful it was. He began to fall to the ground and tremble, after which he turned to Mose and said that apparently he was the first to leave him. Mose screamed in fear and pity for Vincent, and at that moment, Lydorn said that he would be next. The protagonist became so angry that he exclaimed what a freak Lydorn was. At that moment, he was confident in his abilities, and flames appeared around his sword. The system reported that he had activated the Atoria set effect, activating the Solar Fury skill. Solar Fury is a limited-use class active skill. It is used by the player independently while wearing a full Atoria set and while in an angry emotional state. Health is absorbed at a rate of 3 points per second, and the player dies when the bar depletes. Absorbed health cannot be restored with magic or artifacts. To restore it, the skill must be deactivated. Mose shouted that he would kill him with his own hands right now. After these words, he pounced on his opponent and began to fight with his sword. The system reported that health absorption had already reached more than 10% of his total health, with strength and speed increasing by 50 points. A few seconds later, health had already been absorbed by 20%. Strength and speed increased by 100 points. Lydorn thought that it seemed he was getting stronger with each passing second. The system continued to report that the absorbed health had amounted to over 30% of total health, and that both strength and speed had increased by 150. At that moment, Mose yelled at him to take the hit now and exclaimed in anger, causing Lydorn to be thrown aside. Mose, barely breathing from the rage he'd felt, muttered, "Lydorn." He replied that apparently immortals have feelings too, and the death of a comrade affects them. He hit his back and head on a boulder that tripped him after the impact. He tried to rise to his knees when suddenly Mose yelled at him to shut his mouth. At that moment, the system reported that 40% of his total health had already been absorbed, but his strength and speed had increased by 200. Their swords clashed, and Lydorn spoke up. "A dead species is also immortal, isn't it? What a tragedy." Their swords shook, and he continued to say that he couldn't even imagine what he did to him when he was forced to say goodbye forever. At that moment, he became extremely angry and lashed out at the protagonist, who thought it was simply impossible. His level suddenly began to rise from 178 to 210. He had been strong before, but now he was simply incredible. His level reached 235, and he shouted that players were immortal, murderers, and that they had no right to walk this earth. The protagonist looked Lydorn straight in the eye, and their anger grew even stronger. Lydorn told him to look death in the eye, player, because he carries the sword of vengeance and has come to take it. At that moment, a sharp sword was already flying from behind the protagonist, who turned sharply and realized what was about to happen. The sword pierced his arm, and he cried out loudly in pain. He fell to the ground, his blood spilling in bright splashes. Lydorn scowled, saying that he was not the master of this world, and thought he could do whatever he wanted. Who gave him the right to dispose of the lives of those dear to him? Let him answer that, immortal. At that moment, someone called out to Mose and said they were already here. It was Sharon and Guile, and Lydorn said that he thought he had someone close. At that moment, his gaze turned to his opponents, and Mose became terrified for his friends and shouted at them to run away. Lydorn raised his sword and pierced Guile, who was unable to react. His blood spilled, and he felt incredible pain. Sharon, frightened for him, cried out, "No!" and Lydorn told him to feel powerless while he killed those dear to him. Mose screamed at him to stop immediately, when suddenly Sharon felt a similar sword approaching from behind her. She turned sharply, and at that moment, Kellyan saved her, apologizing. He grabbed her by the shoulders and pushed her aside. Mose hadn't expected such an action from Kellyan, and was surprised. Lydorn screamed, "What just happened?" His sword hit the ground, missing his victim. Mose realized they were gone, and everyone was stunned. Much time had passed, and the battle continued. The army struggled with the arriving griffins. The griffins were killed one by one. Kia, who had destroyed one of them, paused and sighed with relief. At that moment, she felt a wet drop on her hand, and looking at it, asked, "Is it raining?" But now was not the best time for that. Then she looked into the distance and saw Mose, who was fighting Lydorn alone. Mose shouted, "Lydorn, please stop." Lydorn asked again, "What do you mean stop?" "They are hypocritical and selfish hypocrites. True monsters called in blessings. The sorrow they will experience being immortal is dust, a mirage, self-deception. And it only lasts a few days." Mose asked again, "What?" Lydorn answered that they then returned to their world again. And at that moment, Mose was dumbfounded by what he heard. Lydorn continued to say that the flame of life, his beloved Ain, was forever extinguished because of his kind. And these people always came again, and he always killed them. And does he know what they once said? They said enough. They were tired of playing. At that moment, Mose was caught off guard. Lydorn said that's it. For them, everything that happens here is just a game. Mose didn't understand what this meant. He remembered his friends discussing how they could go on a couple of territory capturing quests today. A fighting game ranking sounds fun. When Mose realized the gravity of the situation, he froze and backed away, muttering, "No," and his solar rage deactivated. He shouted that not all players are like that, but those who break the laws and cause chaos are immortal, and it's always them. These are people who don't want to take responsibility. That's why he came to settle this problem once and for all. Did he really think he had the right to stop him? Did he really think he had the strength? What could he do to counter his anger? Mose didn't know what to say, and thought he had to admit that Lydorn was right, but he couldn't back down. He can't do this for those who are fighting with all their might, and for Kia. He's the only one who can defeat him. Even if Solar Fury isn't working, he'll manage and put an end to this. At that moment, he pushed off the ground and ran toward his enemy, screaming and attacking. Lydorn was confident in his strength, and Mose was trying to hit his weak spot. At that moment, a sharp sword was pointed at Mose, and Lydorn asked, did he really think he'd found a weak spot? He was in a hurry, and that's why death had already opened its arms, player. Mose was stunned, and his other arm was cut. The system reported that his health was at 20%. He gritted his teeth in pain, and realized the damage was colossal. Was he really going to die like this? At that moment, he began to fall to the ground when he suddenly heard Kia's scream. He realized it was her voice, and she was screaming for him to hold on, because she was coming here. Lydorn realized she wasn't one of the immortals and froze. Mose, too, gaped in shock, shouted at her to leave right now. Lydorn asked her if she knew him. She confidently answered yes, and Lydorn asked if she was willing to sacrifice her only life for some player. At that moment, she didn't answer him and looked sadly ahead. Mose shouted, Kia, no. She smiled and shouted that of course she was willing to do it because this man was dear to her, and it didn't matter that he was immortal. She couldn't let his eyes close even for a second and was ready to die for this man. And she didn't care that he was completely different. Lydorn asked why she was doing this at all. She replied that she had no objection to his desire to achieve his goal because he had made his decision and could judge her himself. Lydorn understood. Great, since she had chosen death, then he would do it right now. At that very moment, a sharp sword was pointed at her from behind, and Mose screamed in fear, no, and he threw his sword to deflect the attack. He actually managed to hit the sword, and Kia stepped aside, shielding her head from the bright light. Lydorn asked in fear, what? He was doing this even now? How dare he do such a thing? At that moment, he swung his sword, and Mose was frightened, so he cast a charm spell. A magical blue glow appeared in his hand, and at that moment, he pierced his enemy, Lydorn, who was dumbfounded in pain. The sword sank into his chest, and a multitude of splashes of blood poured out. The rain began to pour even harder, and in a moment of consciousness, Lydorn screamed, he did it. Mose thought, that's it, and Lydorn asked, has he really decided that this is the end? He was just a spark that would start a great conflagration, but his mission was complete. He began coughing up blood, declaring that others would take his place and ignite the flames of war. With these words, he fell to the ground and died. A moment later, he was no longer moving, and the system reported that it was the Prince of Rebellion, the quest completed. The main target, Lydorn, successfully destroyed, and they were beginning the automatic distribution of rewards. The protagonist leveled up, and Mose realized they had succeeded. He looked at his hands in bewilderment, and turning to Kia, asked why she had done this. He ran closer to her and grabbed her by the shoulders, shouting, "Why is she risking herself like this? If she died, he wouldn't be able to survive it." Kia grabbed his face with her hands and said that it was necessary to kill Lidorn. He asked her never to do that again, and she replied, "Okay." Kia offered to pray for him, and when the protagonist closed his eyes, he said, "Yes." They stood hugging in the rain for a while. The tragic story of Lidorn. Much has changed in the world of Circuit. The Lidornites, a group of NPCs hostile to players, appeared in the kingdom of Logis and its surroundings. They decided to continue Lidorn's work, and innocent players suffered once again. Soon, the White Tower instituted magic, and this mark allowed NPC and ordinary players to accurately identify trolls. The Information Guild placed a bounty on the heads of such individuals. Some NPC players began calling themselves troll hunters and seeking out the marked. Then a real troll hunt began in virtual reality, and he became the subject of considerable controversy, as his ship made him considered a celestial ruler. Now he could practically no longer move without attracting attention. It was good that people were still preoccupied with arguing about whether he was an NPC or not. However, if he is unlucky, everything will turn out so that he can forget about peaceful travels. He wondered why he even bothered arguing about such nonsense. Who cared who he was? After Lidorn's death, his heart was heavy. Kia calmed him, and ultimately the effect was swept away. She suggested taking a vacation and going to her homeland. So now they were on their way to her hometown of Ajaris. The system reported that preparations for his training were complete, and he responded, "Excellent, he'd be there soon." They set off on their magical ship, and Mose extended his arms and began charging. The system reported that the interior walls of the lower floor had been further strengthened with magic. He said that sounded excellent, and thanked the system for it. At that moment, he carefully examined the system, and magical power appeared in his hand. He shouted a charm spell and held his sword out to the side. He decided to take another sword in his right hand. It was another engraved sword he'd received after defeating Lidorn. He thought, Karma? Lidorn had killed his comrades with this sword. The system reported that he had 11 engraved swords. Karma. Level, Legendary. Type, Longsword. Creator, Lavoger. Weight, 9.8 kilograms. Strength, 31. Health, 24. Dexterity, 38. Intelligence, 28. When the engraving is complete, the sword automatically appears in the player's dominant hand. The sword summoning skill is learned automatically as soon as the owner receives the sword. This is a set skill, 2 out of 11. With the acquisition of Karma, he learned a new skill for 2 engraved swords at once. He was pleased with this, and the system added the effect of 2 swords out of 11. All engraving type skills are changed to will summoning. Learning the active skill Go, the sword's power is increased by 8%. At that moment, he cast the spell, and the sword moved in a parallel direction. This skill allows him to direct swords at a selected target using runes. So now he can use long-range combat techniques, which is very convenient for him. Should he mention that his attack power and base have increased? But he understands there is one caveat. At that moment, the swords were aimed at him again and returned to his hands. He raised one of the swords with incredible strength, exclaiming as he did so, realizing he now had to catch the second sword. He managed to catch it too, and knew he had succeeded, when suddenly something alarmed him. He fell to the ground because the swords were so heavy and he was tired. When he tried to get up, he cursed and shouted that he couldn't handle 2 yet. This was too bad, because now he wouldn't be able to protect anyone, and like a fool, he would stand by and watch the people he loved die. At this rate, he would lose them all. He needed more, and couldn't stop. He would keep trying until he succeeded and couldn't move. After some time, he emerged from the training hall and said that it had been very difficult. He could barely catch 1 sword, and now he had 2. He twisted his arm from side to side because his muscles were twitching. Suddenly, something alerted him. He looked ahead. Kia was standing there, asking if he was finally finished. Let him look at himself, all dirty. He should also keep this. She handed him some clothes, and he asked again, "What is it?" The system replied that it was a rare linen shirt. Kia asked him to put this on after he cleaned himself up. These were clothes from her hometown. They were going to her place, so he should change. Mose thanked her for this, and said that in that case, he would do it right away. He understood that he had to become stronger to protect his loved ones, and with these thoughts in mind, he went to his room. Meanwhile, an unknown, powerful man asked his subordinate if he had brought everything. He replied, "Yes, director, I only received this today and it's still warm." The director replied, "Yes, this is what I need." And that's a completely different matter, which is why he can't stop playing. Sometime later, when the protagonist and Kia arrived in her city, he gaped in surprise at the tall building. The free city of Azaris looked magnificent, in his opinion. He expressed surprise that it was so huge. Kia replied, "Yes, this city is." The White Tower was the home of the Ruza alchemists, secret servants of the Empire. People say that in the past, they all conducted experiments here without any restrictions. After that, this place turned into a lifeless wasteland where nothing grows. However, Giza, the wisest of the elves, blessed this land by sacrificing his soul. Thus, the free city of Azaris was born. Mose asked, "Why is the city called free?" She replied that they simply don't have a definitive ruler. This greatly surprised Mose, and he asked, "How come? Then who deals with criminals?" She replied that a conglomerate does so. representatives from each race gather for discussions. These representatives are called Azara's elders, so in the city, he can hear many different opinions from different people and on a variety of topics. Mose found this very interesting because not long ago, this game was his chance to make ends meet. He had overcome many difficulties, made new friends, and even completed his first teen quest, and during his journey, he managed to join the ranks of the swordsmen. As both Mose and Kiho, he was fortunate to begin to build relationships with wonderful people, so in the final battle with Lydorn, he made an important decision. His duty was to protect those dear to him. At that moment, he was deep in thought, when Kia suddenly noticed and shouted his name. She asked what he was thinking. He began waving his arms and saying that it was just a trifle. Kia replied that that was great, then they should go ahead, since she had so much to show him. She took his hand and pulled him along. Mose looked at her lovingly and reflected on how, seeing her smile, he swore to protect her, no matter the cost. After a while, they arrived at a tavern, where they decided to have a beer. Their glasses collided, and they smiled, saying that it was very tasty. Suddenly, a man named Lorad, whom they had known for a while, approached Kia. He came closer and shouted, "Kia, they haven't seen each other in a long time." Kia turned to him with delight and greeted him, repeating how many years it had been since they had seen each other. He grinned and replied that it was true. Kia decided to introduce her friend Lorad to Mose and mentioned his name. He's short, but his ears are definitely the largest in their entire city, and his voice is absolutely off-key. Lorad felt shy after such a greeting and replied, "Oh well." Mose approached him and said he was pleased to meet him. Lorad replied that the feeling was mutual, then suddenly realized he was a swordsman. He saw a gold ring on his finger and asked if he was really one of them. What brought him to their city? Kia replied with a smile that they weren't there for work, just on vacation. Lorad asked again, "Are you serious? Then let them forgive him." Kia laughed and replied that everything was fine. After all, many thought swordsmen came to stir up trouble. He replied that he'd thought she was there for that very reason. Kia, surprised, asked him again, "What business are you talking about?" He unwrapped the package from his hand and asked her to look at it. She asked if it was marble or medicine. Lorad replied that it was called venetic, a substance absorbed through the skin. Mose and Kia were dumbfounded and asked again, "Is it a substance?" Lorad replied that it was quite easy to obtain in Asgaris. Even children could find it without any problem. Kia frowned and said that the Azaris elders had imposed a ban on prohibited substances. They couldn't allow it. Lorad replied that they should already know that many immortals had arrived in Azaris, and the city began to develop thanks to the construction of new factories, and everything was fine until something happened. He didn't know when it happened, but every bar started selling these balls. The people behind it were terrible. At that moment, several unpleasant faces entered, and everyone turned to look at these guys. Kia was surprised and noticed Lorad's reaction. Lorad asked again, "What's going on?" Lorad noted that it was them, the traders of that very same venetic. They had their own guild and a giant potion factory. They assumed that's where the substances were produced. Mose frowned and realized these people were players. Kia asked what their guild was called. He replied that their guild was called Pickup Artist. They often left the tavern with girls and had fun at various discos. When it was all over, one of the guys asked who was staying on the night shift tonight. The waiter who worked at this establishment greeted the manager with a frightened expression and replied that it would be 3 half-elves and 6 limps. The manager started shouting, "What? Only 3 half-elves?" But he'd said he needed at least 5. Another guy waved his hand and asked them to be quiet, as there was no need for such noise here. It seemed the guests had arrived from Valum today. He asked again, "Valum? Okay." Valum half-elves were still okay. Fine. He'd keep them for the night. Let him bring them here and make sure they weren't scratched. The waiter obeyed and bowed low, after which they all turned to the side, and one of the guys asked the other if he'd made up his mind yet. He replied, "Yes, so what?" The guy mentioned seeing something interesting yesterday, a half-elf in the company of a strange player. His friend asked, "What, a half-elf? Does he have a photo?" The guy pulled the photo out of his pocket and handed it to his friend. When he saw these people, he realized this was what he needed, exactly what he wanted. He should bring it here quickly. The photo was of Kia with the protagonist. He smirked, looking at Kia with more disdain. After a while, a new day dawned. Kia served a plate of food for Mose and asked him to try it. It was stewed rudo in Azarusi. Class, food, magic level. Upon consumption, all stats increase by 1, and health regeneration increases by 8 points per second. Duration, 3,600 seconds. Mose was surprised by such delicious food and asked, "Kia, did she cook it herself?" She replied, "Of course." He thanked her even more profusely and began to eat with pleasure. She asked, how did he like it? He exclaimed that it was very tasty, and she was glad that he liked it. Suddenly, she remembered that her friends, Shara and Farah, would soon be coming. She wanted to introduce them. At that moment, Lorad burst into their house exclaiming, "Kia, Mose." They turned to him in bewilderment and asked, "What happened?" He replied that it was something terrible and that they should quickly pack and go. Meanwhile, loud screams were heard in the building of their city. Numerous doctors were covered in blood and shouting, What kind of poisoning is this? Maybe it's food poisoning? But it didn't stop at all. Loud screams of fear continued. Mose and Kia arrived at the scene and didn't understand what was happening. They watched in horror as people started shouting about these substances, demanding they give it to them. The girl lying on the table begged for more substance. Mose realized something was wrong. He noticed something on his neck and wondered if it could be, but before he could fully process this, Kia suddenly shouted at Lorad, asking what was going on here. Please, let him tell her something. Lorad lowered his gaze and replied that the two had been forced to take the substance from those guys. When the guys heard this, they were stunned with horror. They realized it was the pickup artist. The protagonist became enraged, and at that moment, the guy continued to scream in terror, demanding they give him the substance right now. Mose realized that they had not only started distributing the substance throughout the city, but had also forced Kia's friends to take it. This was simply disgusting. He turned to Kia, who was teary-eyed and looking at him ominously. He replied that those who did this to her friends would be punished, and he would personally ensure it, going to any lengths to ensure it. Kia asked if he swears by this name, Bellica herself. He answered confidently, yes, he does. Around the same time, the Circuit Masters group, the game's largest online community, was thrown into chaos by two events. The first was the search. The Information Guild's search team found the Holy Treasure after 9 months of searching, including game time. The Holy Treasure, also known as the Eye of New Humanity, is the numb eye of a giant orthopus, formerly known as the Great Prophet. It was announced that the new humanity the Prophet spoke of was the players who had begun appearing en masse in the world of Circuit. The second hot topic among the masters was Venetic. If this new substance is not injected into the body within 24 hours after the first time, severe poisoning will begin, accompanied by convulsions. The poisoning can cause death, and there is no antidote. It's known that only high-level alchemists and mages who have mastered the Karskania detox skill can reverse the effects of poisoning. However, most alchemists are already guild members or sponsored by someone, so the price for these specialist services is incredibly high. Finding a sufficiently experienced mage is quite difficult. They can be counted on one hand. There's no choice but to become substance slaves. After some time, the protagonist and Kia arrived at the building of the very same pickup artist. They approached with confidence, and Mose asked if Lorad had told them about this place. Hadn't he? She replied that it was true. He explained that Shira and Farah had managed to tell them they'd received an invitation from the troll's minion. Their birthdays were coming soon, their favorite bard was coming to town, and they were so happy about the invitation. But it was all his fault, and he should have stopped them. Kia listened silently and suddenly realized the troll's minion. This frightened her greatly, and she was dumbfounded, after which she thanked Mose for coming with her. She wanted to tell him something before they entered because she was going to tear them to pieces. He agreed with her, because these creatures cannot be forgiven. It's guys like that that caused Lidorn to appear. Well, it was time for them to get up. When they approached the gate, they were stopped by guards. One of them announced that entry was for VIPs only. A place was reserved for this evening, but in case they didn't know, an exception was made for half-elves, who could use any of the castle's rooms. Mose, surprised, asked again. The guard replied that this was an order from the organizers. Mose noted that he was accompanying Kia, but the guard apologized, saying that they didn't care, as he wasn't a half-elf, so he just needed to leave quietly and peacefully. Mose was angry about this, when suddenly Kia abruptly walked past the guards alone. Mose was afraid for her and shouted, "Kia, where is she going?" She turned around with a smile on her face and asked him not to worry. She would just see what was going on and return to him, and she would have one foot here, the other there, so he shouldn't be afraid. Mose continued to panic and replied that if something happened to her, he wouldn't survive, after which he clenched his fist and it began to shake. Kia came closer to him, took his hand in hers, and told him to give her just 2 hours. If she didn't return within that time, then he should do what he saw fit. He was surprised by this decision and spoke her name calmly, then remained silent and, shaking her hand, said, "Okay." Kia bowed to him calmly and said that she truly reveals herself only to the sword. Mose also bowed to her and also said that he truly reveals himself only to the sword. Then she said goodbye and went inside the building. Mose frowned, thinking that he was bursting with the desire to turn everything upside down and dismantle the castle brick by brick. But he had to wait for her because he trusted Kia. When Kia entered, she saw a crowd of people dancing and having fun at the disco. She was the only one frowning among them, and looking around, she wondered where they were, the very people who had done this to her friends. At that moment, someone apologized to her and asked if she had come alone. It was one of the pickup artist guys who said hello and good evening. Kia realized it was him, the dealer she saw when she was with Lorad. She smiled and replied that she was here alone and that she was very interested. He put his arm around her, coming closer and offering to show her around if she didn't mind. She was wary of this behavior but didn't show it. Although she was thinking that someone would lose an arm, it was still too early to act. At that moment, she hid her displeasure and asked, "Is this true?" In her opinion, it was very sweet, and it would be great if he did that. Turning away, she expressed irritation on her face, while pickup artist did not understand anything. Meanwhile, the protagonist was in the forest near the building. He was pacing in circles, confused. Was it time for him to go already? At that moment, he suddenly heard his name and finally understood. Kia approached him and he asked if something had happened. She replied that her ears were a little numb, but otherwise, everything was fine, and so was she. This young man kindly agreed to tell them everything he knew. That same pickup artist was sitting on the ground, terribly battered, screaming. Do they even know who they're dealing with? Let him go right now. Do they know who he is and where he's from? Do they really think they can survive this? Mose stared silently at his enemy, then suddenly struck him with such force that blood began to spurt from his shoulder. He cried out in terrible pain and screamed about how much it hurt. Mose gritted his teeth in anger and said he'd better tell the truth. He was in for a personal trip to hell. The guy got angry and realized he'd have to cooperate. He bowed to the ground and screamed that he'd begged for forgiveness, that it was his fault, and it wouldn't happen again. Mose said he didn't care, that he should straighten up and look here. Was this substance their doing? And the guy was dumbfounded. Then suddenly the protagonist showed him the blade of his sword again, and the guy didn't know what to say. Mose said he knew what he was thinking. Let him not even dare to lie. At that moment, pickup artist shouted excitedly, no, Venetic is made by a guy named Jason. He knows nothing about manufacturing. Mose asked again, is Jason also a player? He replied, yes, he is. A level 57 alchemist working for Director Choi. After hearing this, the protagonist was dumbfounded, and the guy began to confirm, yes, he is a representative of NG Tech's Director Choi Seoho. At that moment, Kia thought about how one of the player companies, Lorad, had once told her about them. Pickup artist shouted back, yes, they are so smart. He told her everything he knew, and if word got out, he would bury him alive. Please, he begged, pleading with them to let him go now. Let them be merciful. The protagonist exchanged glances with Kia, and she declared that they had found out everything they wanted and would leave this bio-garbage here. Mose replied, okay, they'll be leaving now. Pickup artist realized they were leaving and watched them go, thinking that they were finished, because he remembered them and would kill them both. When Mose stepped aside, he remembered, by the way, this guy has a couple of screw-ups, right? So that he doesn't think about revenge, he'll still deal with him right now. He'll just answer for everything. Does he understand? Nothing special will happen. The guy, frightened, asked him to wait and begged, please. No. His screams continued to spread throughout the forest. After some time, it was deep night. Sofo asked why he was there for so long. He just gave him a little freedom, and he immediately bolted somewhere. A subordinate approached him and asked him not to worry, because soon everything would be his. He asked when this would happen, or was it too difficult a question? He's a sheep's head. At that moment, he spilled a drink right in the face of his subordinate, who frowned with discomfort. The guy asked, did he really think all he did was make Venetics? He could keep making them. Good job. But why did he have to wait so long for this delivery? If he made it, then let them bring it right away, idiot. Now should he just sit there and do nothing? The subordinate bowed and asked for forgiveness, as he would order his guys to make the delivery as quickly as possible. The guy kicked him out of the office, saying he was only good at talking. But at that moment, he turned to the two remaining frightened waiters, who were already standing in the corner, and asked, why are they there? They should leave quickly. Weren't they from Pickup Artist? They should get out of here quickly. The guys ran out of the office, and Pickup Artist called them worthless freaks. He didn't understand where his friend was. Meanwhile, this same friend was apologizing for what he'd done and thanking them for leaving him alone. He kept saying the same thing when those same guys approached him and asked what was happening to him. Was he completely crazy? This thing costs a fortune. Did he know that? Make him look right at him. At that moment, he poured the potion into his mouth, and the guy started coughing loudly. The man asked him what happened. Pickup Artist replied that a half-elf and a player had kidnapped him and were torturing him. The guy realized that these could really be the half-elf and player Director Choi had mentioned. It seemed they had left recently, so they weren't far. He asked to contact the people in the village, tell them to destroy everything in the city, leave no stone unturned, but be sure to find them. They must pay for what they'd done. He declared war. Sometime later, the city caught fire, and many people were covered in blood and lying on the ground. Mose, seeing this, gaped in shock, not understanding what was going on. He ran up to the people and asked what had happened. He shouted that he wouldn't let this go, when he suddenly turned to Kia and asked what had happened. She replied that he should look at the wall. There was a sign telling them to come to Troll Tunga if they wanted to save the dwarf. The protagonist realized, was this really all because of them? Had they really decided to destroy the village? Kia replied that she wouldn't forgive them. She prayed for Lord Etiette and promised to tear those creatures to pieces. After these words, she clenched her hand into a fist and told Mose to get out of here. It was time for them to visit Troll Tunga. In this mood, they approached the high tower, passing through the dense forest. Meanwhile, on TV, a journalist greeted her dear viewers and said that Ji-eun, the host of Circuit TV, was with them now. She was in the place where the sacred treasure would be brought forward for retrieval. Soon, the Eye of New Humanity would reveal its power. She wondered what would happen. Suddenly, an earthquake started and everyone got scared. They realized that the sacred treasure was now on the roof, and now they would see what it was capable of. A bright magical ball rose into the sky, when suddenly a bright beam of light reflected it, and the entire sky glowed with a brilliant light. Ji-eun clutched her head and looked, asking, "What is this?" Some symbols appeared in the sky. Now they would try to decipher them. When she began to read, it said that someone had comprehended all the secrets of this world, and they, humans, must behold the greatest thing they had ever seen. At that moment, the system announced that each player's popularity points would be revealed. A rank would be assigned according to the number of points, popularity would be added as a new stat, and each player's popularity would be revealed. People who saw the system windows in front of them started to rejoice. Could they really see hidden rankings? They're simply amazing. The system also reported that 42,923,112 new popularity-related quests were discovered. Players ranked by popularity points. Mose was first, Charisma second, Ravi third, and Kellyanne fourth. Meanwhile, the following events occurred in Trolltunga Tower. A man with glasses read the new information in the system window and asked, "What is popularity ranking? Isn't it what he thinks it is? It has something to do with the holy treasure, right? It seems they have a new ranking system here." Many guys were discussing among themselves in a public place that Mose, who is in first place, has nothing to do at all. So will it arrive here? The head of the pickup artist asked when it will happen. The subordinate bowed and replied, "Soon. The package has already left." The guy was saying he'd heard it was a bit wild, that it would take a lot of effort to tame them. What else could he say? He was being tamed on purpose, and he could handle it. He found it boring when they were so obedient. At that moment, Solho grinned and asked for some, but before he could finish his sentence, Kia and Mose burst into their office, confidently striding toward their goal. They moved with a light gait as they approached, and Seolho asked, "Did they do it that quickly?" It looked even better in person than in the photo. He'd expected less, but here was such a gift. He didn't want to wait any longer. Let his subordinate drag them here. One of his subordinates replied that he understood the order, and it would be done. He was Jason, the pickup artist, and he thought they weren't having fun with his guys like that. If they were messing around where they shouldn't, he'd tell them what the consequences were. He screamed that their boss needed the girl alive, and at that moment, his subordinates rushed to attack Kia. The system reported that Engtek and Mose were receiving special potential enemy status. At that moment, Jason saw the notification in the system and asked, what? Was he imagining things, or did that name ring a bell? At that moment, he realized this was the Mose he knew. Was this the most popular player? At that moment, Mose used his magical powers and was ready to attack. With a few easy movements, he attacked all the guys attacking him, slitting their throats one by one. Blood spilled in huge quantities, and the guys started screaming. What is this? Jason realized he was the #1 player and was here, but he didn't understand what he was doing here. Jason knew it was time for them to get out of here, because he stood no chance against him. As he began to move closer to the entrance, he suddenly saw a bright glow approaching him. He used a barrier to protect himself, but a moment later, the barrier was easily shattered into several small pieces. Jason realized he'd broken his defense with a single blow, but he couldn't understand how. The system reported, 11 engraved swords, Karma, legendary skill, shorter type, creator, lava maker. This was the same legendary artifact, and Jason thought it was simply unbelievable. They'd messed with the wrong guy. At that moment, a bright beam of light passed through Jason, who was destroyed. Mose leveled up his ghost skill at that very moment. He asked, "Where is Choi Seoho?" Only he remained. Meanwhile, Seoho was walking through his building when he suddenly heard a loud sound and asked, "What's going on?" When Mose burst in, he realized it was really him, the top-ranked player. What was this ranker doing in this hole? And how dare he even come here? He was Silho, the head of NG Tech. He got into his expensive car and shouted, "Does this guy really think he's safe?" He activated the emergency security system and kept shouting that his name was Solho, and that they should assemble a security team right now. He needed everyone. He was on his way to them, and if they didn't have time to prepare, he'd rip their heads off. He began approaching the right place at incredible speed, and moments later, he was met by employees who exclaimed with joy that he had arrived. All the employees bowed to him as he entered the office, and he realized things were bad. At that moment, one of his subordinates addressed him by name and said he'd woken them up in the middle of the night. When Solho told him to shut up, he wasn't going to listen to lectures. The man asked again, how long would this go on? If the president knew, they were finished. Seolo grabbed him by the tie and, pulling him toward him, screamed, "Have you completely lost your mind? Didn't he already tell him to shut up right now, or was he hearing something?" The man replied, "Director Seolo, he knows the guild information announced that pickup artists must be destroyed." He shouted, "That's not the most important thing right now, Director Pak. The company is on the verge of collapse for various reasons. Can't he deal with this himself? Then his business partners will be used as fertilizer, one by one." He suggested they solve this problem now and stop pestering him. "You should open the door." Pak replied, "Okay." After which they opened the door, and when Seolho entered, Pak followed him and said, "What a jerk. Let his subordinate stop anyone who tries to enter here." The guards shouted back, "Everything will be done, Director Pak." When he got inside, Seolho was amazed and exclaimed that he'd found this. Surely it was one of those things created for such occasions? He held a precious object in his hand and said that with this thing, he could defeat even Mose. It was a Varibarden earring, jewelry type. Legendary status, strength, health, agility, and intelligence, 33 points. The offering activates body strength magic level 7 and grants an additional pocket. Just then, when Kia and Mose approached the building, Pak told them both to stop immediately, as they wouldn't be going any further. They stood near the door with their subordinates, and Mose said, "Then let them bring Solho to them themselves, and then they'll live." At that moment, Pak turned silently to his subordinate and saw him open the chest and ask him to look at it. Pak smiled and asked them what they would say. It was a large sum, after all. She shouted at them to shut up right now. Solho will answer for everything, He made her friends addicted. Kia became very angry and continued shouting. Do they really think they can buy themselves off with money? He replied. Does she have proof? She had made too serious an accusation to support it. Their company could collapse because of it. Mose replied that he didn't care. Let them bring Solho here now. Pak became angry and frowned, saying that he had no idea who he was, but he should know his place. Why would the director come out and talk to people like them? Kia called him a vile piece of shit, but Pak asked, although how could an NPC like her know that? The world had become a better test. At that moment, Mose became angry and to protect Kia, told him to shut up with a threatening expression and said that he would make him eat dirt if he said something like that again. At that moment, Pak laughed and asked, young man, do his parents know what he's doing? If the problems get worse, will he be able to resolve them legally? He was also talking about the game. One of the Azaris elders is on their side, and if he attacks them, he can say goodbye to Circuit. At that moment, Mose asked, so, is he finished yet? He grabbed his fire sword and looked angrily at his enemy. Pak was surprised and asked, what's going on? The system reported that Mose had declared war on NG Tech, and they were now assigned enemy status. He asked, war with the two of them? What do they think they are? But as soon as he finished his sentence, his subordinates suddenly began scattering. Kia began to destroy them one after another, slitting their throats with just a few slashes. She swore by the god of blades that she would kill every single one of them. At that moment, she had level 101 flash. Kia looked menacingly at her opponents and continued to destroy them. Pak turned around and realized his situation, and Kia paused to look him in the eyes. Frightened, Pak began to turn from side to side and saw Mose, muttering about how good he was. He suddenly became frightened and began to scream, kid, don't get involved in something you can't handle, because you'll regret it. At that moment, Pak also flew aside and was destroyed, blood pouring out of his body. He told him one last time that this is exactly what he was doing. Does he really think he can fix everything just because he can relegend? He's sorely mistaken. Mose swung his sword again, muttering that it was because there would be nothing left of his organization. Sometime later, Solho sat in his office, breathing heavily. He didn't want to do this, but it seemed he had no choice. Lorad sat next to him, but his mouth was covered with a scarf and he couldn't speak. Solho kept saying that there was no other way. He opened his lighter and said that all the evidence had to disappear, so he walked over to a warehouse with wooden boxes and threw the lighter into them. The player who entered the factory will be blamed for the fire. One of the city's elders, the elder of the swamps, would handle the investigation. He was covering for them. How could he handle that? This was an unexpected turn of events, wasn't it? Lorad couldn't respond, but at that moment, the protagonist and Kea were walking down the hallway and just happened to stumble upon Seolho. He noticed them, turned around, and asked who was there. Mose realized who was standing before him, and Seolho declared that it was the famous Mose who had graced them with a visit, and with him, a girl. What a sweet face she has. The elves they'd seen yesterday weren't half as good as her. Kea was enraged by these words and screamed at him, calling him a bastard. With these words, she decided to rush to attack him, when suddenly the entire room lit up with a bright blue light. Seolho grinned and said that she was quick, and that it was amazing. Kea, clutching her sword in her hand, looked at this in surprise, not understanding what had happened. Solho grinned and said that it was certainly cool to have a powerful weapon, and she didn't understand how he did it. At that moment, he shouted that it was his turn and swung his sword. Mose was frightened and managed to protect Kea by blocking his enemy's path. The incident caused chaos in the city, and the local branch of the Information Guild launched an investigation. They investigated everything from the attack in Ash Village to the distribution of Venetic, including the arson at the NG-Tech factory. This series of events shocked the public, prompting the Azaris elders to meet with the Information Guild. Then, he and Kea were named suspects in the substance case. He was shocked when he learned this, and when Kea and he took the stand in court, he still didn't understand what was happening. They were the ones who caught Solho, but they were accused of producing the substance. Kea asked him not to worry, as no one would touch them. People in the courtroom discussed how they first needed to find the channels through which the substance was being distributed. The elder thought so too, but another elder disagreed. He was more concerned about the arson. At that moment, the judge slammed the table and shouted silence for everyone. The elder of the leaves was now given the floor. Before making a final decision, he would like to hear from those who were in the building during the fire. The elder of the swamps will ask his question first. He smirked, and the protagonist didn't understand why he was looking at him like that. The elder of the swamps decided to begin and mentioned his connection with Pickup Artist. Kea was surprised by this question and asked again, what was he talking about? What could they possibly have in common? The elder asked, did she set fire to the buildings on their orders? And also, if he wasn't mistaken, they were both swordsmen, right? People started whispering. Pickup Artist, was he talking about the guild those immortals had? Swordsmen? At that moment, the protagonist realized he had to answer and said, yes, they were swordsmen, but that didn't mean anything. At that moment, the Elder of the Swamps mentioned that they usually carried out secret missions, and this time they were supposed to set fire to the factory, right? Kia exclaimed, no, that's not true. At that moment, the Elder asked again. No, he expected nothing less. After all, for them, this mission was supposed to be a secret. He waved the documents and shouted that he thought this was the case. 2 swordsmen had been tasked by pickup artists to set fire to the factory. At that moment, the protagonist was dumbfounded and asked, what? But that was a completely unfounded conclusion. He then thought, wait, the pack director had just said that one of the elders was on their side. Apparently, it was the same Elder of the Swamps who was now accusing them. The Elder of the Swamps shouted, attention, the residents of Ash Village have been attacked. Do they know who was behind it? One of the elves said that all the witnesses pointed to pickup artists. Another confirmed this information, as he had also heard about it. People say that all the attackers were from the same guild. Yes, these pickup artists are to blame for everything, and they hired these 2 to start the fire. If they ask why, pickup artists were preparing a substance and needed rooms. It could have been a distraction. Kia grew angry and told him he shouldn't insult the swordsmen. They wouldn't tolerate such vile accusations. The Elder of the Swamps laughed and told her not to make him laugh, as they, the heralds, always hide behind their secrecy, even if it costs them their reputation. Is this normal? So, city dwellers, isn't it clear they're guilty? Explanations have been offered, but these 2 deny their guilt only because they lack evidence. He demands they be brought before the Barvid tribunal and insist on the medium's magical sentence being carried out. The others began shouting, yes, they also have no evidence to prove their innocence. That's what the Elder of the Swamps is saying. Mose turned around and wondered, wait, what's going on? They've already sentenced them. How is this possible? One of them blurted out that they truly have no evidence. He only heard fragments. Did they really think that just because they discussed everything among themselves, the matter was settled? He was in a hurry because the situation was serious and a special investigator was needed, but it seemed like everyone here had decided to forget about business procedures, didn't they? Zyke entered the office with documents in hand, and Mose couldn't understand who he was or where he'd come from. It turned out he was level 211, which greatly surprised the protagonist. Zyke introduced himself, said his name, and said that he was the platinum-ranked head of the Information Guild. On his way here, he'd familiarized himself with the case and could say that a thorough investigation was required. He thought it was too early to pass judgment, didn't he? Or did someone have a compelling reason for the rush? Mose thought about the atmosphere in the Sudan Hall, which instantly changed. Everything was said briefly and to the point, which was very effective. His level and position in the guild were interesting. He was hardly an ordinary person, but why was he helping them? The people around him started shouting. What was he talking about? The Elder of the Swamps exclaimed that they had everything they needed to convict them. They were the ones who destroyed the city. There was nothing more to discuss. With these cries, he slammed his fist on the table, and Zeke approached Kia and said they could provide evidence. The Elder of the Swamps asked if what they had done didn't prove their guilt. What did their secret mission mean? Zeke pointed and asked if they were both on vacation now, weren't they? Kia replied yes, they had recently completed all their work and were given time to rest. Zeke asked, so what were they doing at the factory when the fire happened? Is this how people relax on their days off? Kia explained that a close friend of hers had suffered from the recent substance influx, and so she had launched her own investigation. It was a personal matter. He asked if they had any results. She replied that she had learned that NG Tech was a cover for pickup artists. So they went to chat with Seolho, who was at the origins of the nightmare that happened in the city, and later they learned about the fire. Zeke asked, where is their evidence? She replied that everything burned down. At that moment, the Elder of the Swamps became overjoyed and, grinning, said that they had no evidence, that it was all a fabrication. Zeke asked if he would shut up already. The Elder didn't expect such an attitude and fell silent. After some thought, Zyke looked at the documents and said that the matter was serious, so they wouldn't jump to any hasty conclusions. He also thinks that the swordsmen need to be questioned in more detail. At the request of his elders, he had contacted a special investigator, but no one had conducted an investigation, so they would have to start over. Do they all understand? The Elder of the Swamps, alarmed, replied, as he wishes. This sounded logical to everyone else present, too. The 2 of them would immediately head to the Azaras Information Guild. Mose turned around and asked, what? Kia confirmed they were innocent. At that moment, another man entered the room and asked everyone to wait. The boys were immediately overjoyed at what they saw before them. It was Lorad, who burst into the room and shouted that his name was Lorad. He lived in Ash Village. He had been kidnapped by Seolho, the director of NG Tech, and he had valuable evidence for the special investigator. Mose thought, valuable evidence? Lorad's gaze was confident, and he stared ahead. The people around him also began whispering among themselves. Had he said the word evidence? At that moment, the Elder of the Swamps shouted, what are they talking about? What kind of evidence could there be? Besides, he was late for the court hearing. They had already reached their logical conclusion. At that moment, Lorad revealed the seal on his neck, which glowed from within. Zeke, realizing the significance of the situation, asked, is this a memory crystal? He must have a voice, right? He replied yes, his contribution to the Lonvest tribe's war had been noticed and appreciated. He had installed this crystal to serve as an intelligence resource. At that moment, he touched his crystal with his fingers, and the system informed him that this would help dispel all doubts. At that moment, Kia was surprised by the voice that continued to say that investigators were focusing on finding the cause of the fire. One of the city elders was on their side. It was Solho. The elder of the swamps shouted, "What is that?" The elder of the swamps would lead the investigation. And this case promises to be interesting, doesn't it? Lorad repeated that he had been kidnapped, and then he wrote it all down. His kidnapping was their fault for his friends starting to look for the person responsible for substance production. If he hadn't gotten out, he would have burned alive in the fire Solho had started. The elder of the swamps was dumbfounded by what he heard and didn't know how to get out of this situation. Zyke waved the papers and declared that this wouldn't work. Was he really planning to deceive the special investigator and destroy a beautiful city? The elder of the swamps didn't know what to say and was terrified when suddenly Zyke landed on the table in front of him and announced that 52,000 people had become addicted to the substance. 383,000 were under surveillance for suspected addiction, and 110 people had already died, with more expected. So it turns out that he is involved in this trafficking? The elder of the swamps began to tremble and didn't know what to say, prompting Zyke to declare that he would do everything possible to get him locked up as soon as possible. Then he began shouting that all the military, knights, and ugly people involved would go with him. The elder bowed his head in sadness and irritation, and at that moment, Zeke turned to see Kia and Moses' reactions. They stared at him, dazzled, and Zeke smiled back, then ran up to them and apologized for his behavior, as he hadn't immediately recognized the city's heroes. He then cleared his throat and shouted that he was the platinum head of the Information Guild, and, on behalf of all the senior officers, the special investigator was closing the investigation into this case. Entech and the Pickup Artists Guild were involved in the production and distribution of substances. Many ordinary citizens suffered as a result of their activities. Swordswoman Kia's words were proven true, and she was cleared of all charges. Evidence was provided by one of the victims of Pickup Artist and Engitech. Based on this, he declared Swordswoman Kia and Swordsman Mose to be the heroes who had made the greatest contribution to the investigation of this case. At that moment, Mose was surprised when magical rays of light appeared around him. The system repeatedly announced that his level had been raised and he had received the title of Savior of the City. All stats had increased by 14, including his luck by 8, a special character trait. His popularity increased by 83,271. He also completed a secret quest, Prince Substance, Super Battle, A+ difficulty, reward unknown. He received a title that boosts stats similar to a unique artifact, and his popularity increased. He also completed a secret quest. He completed a number of seemingly simple missions, but the results were simply stunning. This delighted him. After the incident, an article appeared on the Circuit Forum in the Incidents and Incidents section. The article immediately shot to the top and became a hot topic, all because it stated that Mose had exposed Engitech, and he is the most popular player and the owner of the Celestial Ruler's ship. Every player felt compelled to speak out about the incident, and a huge number of comments accumulated under the article. The article was so popular that the site crashed due to the overwhelming number of comments, and the moderator had to delete it. After a while, Mose thanked the assembled people for coming. They had always been extremely kind to him, and now they had even come especially to say goodbye to him, which pleased him greatly. The people around him said they should thank him, Mose, because they felt indebted to him, but didn't know how else to repay him. Let him forgive them for treating him poorly, despite all his good deeds. It was a foolish mistake on the part of the city's elders. As an apology, they, the Asgaras elders, had prepared a small gift for him. This item has been possessed only by elders since time immemorial, and although it was touched by the hands of the Elder of the Swamps, that in no way diminishes the sacredness of the relic itself. This relic is called Ol Intori, a unique skill, a type of magic stone, a portal stone created from the root of the Able Tree, the Tree of Martyrs. When used, it teleports the player. Mose examined it with a smile, realizing it was a teleportation stone. Was he really worthy of such an amazing thing? The elders said it was a small gift from them, considering how much he had helped their city. This gift expressed their respect and gratitude. He thanked them for such a gift and was honored. The elders began waving to him and wished him a safe journey. Mr. Mose, take care of yourself. After some time, the protagonist set off on his magical ship, and everyone waved to him and Kia. Kia and Mose looked out the window and watched the people's reactions. They were happy and smiling, then glanced at each other and wondered where they were going now. That same evening, someone named Jinir and his men attacked. The guy who fought him asked why he was doing this. How could he do this to them? Jinir showed no mercy and finished him off with one swing of his sword, after which his subordinates appeared. Larife and Azera, the swords of Laoswan, bowed before them and gave him a newspaper clipping. Looking at the photograph, he asked, "Has this immortal become a swordsman?" He threw a newspaper clipping with a photo of Kiho on the bodies and told his subordinates that they were leaving. They still had much to do. Meanwhile, Sharon and Kellyan were captured, only he was conscious. He glanced at the girl tied to the pole and thought that they even got to her. He knew that they hated him, but he didn't expect that they would use the T-lope to determine the coordinates of the White Tower. Will Mose be able to find them? At this time, Kia asked him where they were going next, and he asked, she remembered his friend Sharon, right? She clarified. Was he talking about that archer who fought the immortals? He said that since she disappeared with that mage, he has not been able to contact her. He does not think that she is dead, but as long as the player is in an area that he has visited at least once, he can establish contact with him, and on the entire continent, there is only one blind spot left for him. Tikris. Obviously they went there. It's a city of entertainment and gambling, but also a city of contrasts, the splendor and glitter worthy of the city's reputation, and the dark side hidden behind its shining facade. As soon as they docked, MC immediately saved the coordinates of Tikris Harbor and told Kia that the ships here were so luxurious that even the Skyway pales in comparison. She remarked that this was probably a good thing, when suddenly someone's indignant exclamation was heard from the side. Kiho turned around and saw that there were gambling addicts in the alley, all of them cursing every time they lost. He was surprised, because there was an entire alley dedicated to slot machines, and Kea noted that this was what Lorad had mentioned. Tikris is a beautiful, but at the same time, a cruel city, where hope and despair live side by side. A small rabbit approached them, greeted them, and asked if they were interested in gambling. His name was Poche, and he was a guide through the local alleys. They can challenge the slot machine to get an Ormacon token, 1 coin per attempt, worth 3 silver coins. MC was very surprised and exclaimed, "Can you get these tokens from slot machines?" He replied that only one of the slot machines holds them, and all these people are trying to get them. However, there is no point in playing just for this. There is much greater wealth to be found here. Kiho and Kea caught his eye, and the girl noticed how badly worn this rabbit's paws were, and asked if he could give her 10 coins. He was very happy and thanked her, then ran off to get it for her. MC, following him with his eyes to the alley, turned to Kea and asked if she wanted to play. She told him that he could try it once, and that they also exploit Limpu children here. His face immediately changed, and she said that if you are a Limpu, you can't count on a normal job. They are just like half-elves who are sent to gladiatorial fights as soon as they learn to walk. A rabbit ran out of the alley with a bag of coins and gave it to Kia, wishing her good luck. He was about to leave, but Kiho asked him to wait and handed him the coin, saying it was for him. He was very surprised and started asking about the reason, and he answered that he was very friendly, so he wanted to give him a gift for his warmth and kindness. I hope he doesn't lose it and uses this treasure wisely. When the coin fell on his little paws, his eyes lit up with delight and he burst into tears of happiness. He thanked him, because now he would be able to pay for his little brother's treatment, after which he bowed to him and once again thanked him from the bottom of his heart, wishing their journey to be bright and successful. After that, he happily ran away, and MC turned to Kia, suggesting that she check if the luck in his inventory had run out. They played for a while. In the end, Kiho lost, but he was not upset. Kia laughed at him and asked if he really expected to win Ormacon. They reached their destination, the Tikris Information Guild. They entered, and the girl greeted them, asking if they were the ones who had contacted them recently. She would transport them to the designated room. She used magic, and a glow appeared under their feet. Then they were transported to a luxurious office, where Verenz, the head of the Information Guild, was already waiting. He asked if they were looking for someone here. Did he understand correctly? They both sat down on the sofa opposite him, and Kia said they needed an immortal mage and an archer. Virenz, puzzled, noted that they were quite rare here, but he had information about one White Tower student who fit the description. Only one player came to mind, Kellyan. He is a truly unique player. Initially, the White Tower did not welcome immortals, but Kellyan cast aside his status as a player and began to act exactly like them. He fit perfectly into their world and became a full-fledged wizard in his senior year at the White Tower. However, many mages hate him because of this. MC was surprised and asked what wrong he had done, and the man enticingly said that he was quite capable of finding out where he was now. But first, they should do him a favor in return. Kia was indignant and asked if she had heard correctly. Didn't the guild undertake to disseminate information freely? He waved his hands, asking her to calm down, and said that this information was too sensitive to be divulged to everyone, and he would be extremely grateful if they helped him a little as payment. Kiho agreed to listen to him, and he told them that not far from here there was Mount Malik, its peak crowned by ancient ruins known as the Olive Pass, and Mose must exterminate all the ghosts dwelling there. He wouldn't need magic. A sword would suffice. All the preparations were already completed. All he had to do was show off his skills and abilities. After that, they left the guild. Kea said she didn't understand why the guild's keyboard was suddenly setting conditions for the swordsmen and refusing to give out information. They couldn't waste time on this. MC thoughtfully asked what would be bad if they agreed. Her eyes widened in surprise, and he said that he thought it was more interesting than leaving for Espargan and just returning to his swordsman duties. She immediately called out to him, which scared him, and nervously asked, "What's wrong?" She asked. "Aren't he and Sharon friends? They worked on the same team." He didn't care what happened to her because he was immortal. He didn't know what to say and looked down. He had just said nonsense that only a player could say, and right in front of Kia, for whom this world was real. He was ordinary, a simple guy named Lee Kiho. Here he is Mose, the #1 ranked player in the circuit world. As time goes by, the likelihood of a gap between his two personalities grows wider. Kia said that she thinks he is at least a little different from other immortals because he is practically the only one who empathizes with them. But he is still immortal, which means that one day he can easily adopt their usual attitude towards the world. However, she would like him to remain the Mose she once met, even if it sounds too selfish. He thoughtfully looked away, after which he confidently looked at her and asked her for forgiveness. It was stupid of him to say such a thing. He and Sharon are truly partners and should help each other. He took her hand and thanked her, promising that he will continue to be the same Mose. Time passed. They returned to the harbor, and Kea noticed Poche standing alone in the alley with a dejected look. She approached him and asked with a smile, "Isn't he going home yet?" But when he looked at her, she saw his entire wounded face and immediately worriedly grabbed his shoulders, asking what happened to him. He started mumbling, and MC seriously asked him to tell them what happened. Who did this to him? Poche swallowed nervously, then shed a tear and asked them forgiveness. The precious coin they gave him was taken by Suyaman. He told him that he did not steal it, but earned it. But he still said that he was not only a thief, but also a deceiver, and he should be sacrificed to the ghost of the Olive Pass. They both clarified in surprise, is he talking about that very Olive Pass? After that, they went to Suyaman's estate, which was quite well guarded. They hid in the bushes, and Kea noted that there were a lot of guards here, but Kiho said that it made no difference to him whether they were there or not. Meanwhile, Suyaman sat in his expensively furnished chambers and cursed. He ordered his subordinate to bring him a person who would be of some use, and he didn't care how he did it. Let him just make sure he doesn't die in 1 minute, like the last one. He began to descend the stairs, under which the two had already managed to hide, and said that he may have received the position of leader thanks to the Silver Cat Society. But he was the one counting the money of these idiots, and he shouldn't forget that. This month, they barely earned 4,000 gold. They need to spread a rumor that there are already 10 Ormacon in the vending machines. Let those greedy dogs take all their money there. And that little idiot even dared to rob him. He needs to kill half of them in public to teach them a lesson. Hearing this, Kia immediately jumped out of hiding, and MC whispered for her to stop. Of course, the man heard this and turned to check what was going on, but a broken girl's fist was already flying at his face. She hit him with all her might, causing him to almost fall. Then he grabbed his bleeding nose and cursed, calling for the guards, and Kea smiled calmly and wrapped a bandage around her fist, saying that the guards were gone. All his guys had fallen asleep or ran off to lick their wounds. She prepared her final, most powerful blow, after which she began to beat him, and Kiho decided not to interfere. After a while, she finally finished and returned to Kiho, apologizing to him. She just needed to let off some steam. She turned to the idiot and offered to chat. Let him tell her what was going on at Olive Pass. Suyaman was very unhappy with the brutal beating and refused to even speak after that. But then she threatened him with a heavy statuette, and he immediately replied that it was a gambling place. People gamble with ghosts at the pass. MC was surprised and asked, "How does that even happen?" He told them about a society of silver cats, made up of the city's nobility. A necromancer they hired sent a powerful ghost to the Olive Pass, and it began luring desperate fighters and immortals into battle, promising a huge sum in case of victory. But no one has yet been able to defeat this ghost. You can't even hold out against it for 3 minutes. Kia, enraged, grabbed him by the clothes and pulled him close, ordering him to tell her how much he had sent certain death for gold. Kiho asked her to calm down. They must hear him out. She let Suyaman go, and he said that tomorrow would be different. He'd been told that the strongest immortal would come to fight the ghost. Now MC understood how this was connected to the Information Guild. He'd figured out Viren's plan. Kia gritted her teeth in rage and said she couldn't believe even the guild was in league with them. She wanted to beat Suyaman again to let off some steam, and he, terrified, begged her not to kill him. Kiho stopped her. There was no point in getting her hands dirty. He'd already lost everything. What did she think people would say when they found out there was no Ormacon in the slot machines? When this news became public, he'd be judged by the deceived citizens. She stared thoughtfully at the man, who was already foaming at the mouth with fear, and thought there were still places on him where she could hit him, but she didn't. MC suggested they go on a mission, silently telling Varens he'd regret dragging him into this. Olentori is a vast library built by the Azaris elders to restore the city's lost history. It's a secret place, accessible only by special magical stones crafted from the Able Tree. Kiho glanced at the stone and figured they had about half a day before heading to the pass. Maybe he should stop by the library first? He offered to go with Kea, but she immediately refused. The stone was given only to him. As a resident of Azaris, she wanted to follow the city's laws, but could he find one book for her? Minstrel Coffer. After that, he used the stone. Exiting the portal, he found himself in a library of astonishing size. The system immediately informed him of a secret quest, the diary of the blacksmith Lavoger. Lavoger was a half-elf who had been subjected to racial discrimination and persecution, but he possessed exceptional talent and the 11 engraved swords he forged are proof of this. To find these swords, he needed to find the blacksmith's diary. MC was delighted. Now he knew who forged his swords. So if he finds the diary, he'll find a trail leading to the rest of the swords. He decided to set out to search right away, but a question arose. How would he find this diary? An idea occurred to him. He thought there was a library search, but no, it wasn't that simple. In the end, he'd have to wander through this huge library himself and search every shelf for his diary. Time passed. There were already a dozen books scattered on the floor, and he exclaimed in frustration that this was a stupid game. What kind of nonsense was this? Who even gives quests to find a book in the open world? He took a deep breath, pulled himself together, and thought that fortunately, the books in this library were organized by section. But there were hundreds of thousands of them, so the number of shelves was simply incredible. This way, he'd have to examine every book before figuring out where the one he needed was. He stood up and confidently shouted that he had infinite stamina, after which he returned to the search with renewed vigor. His time was running out, of course, but there was nothing he could do. After some time, he finally found the coveted book, and the system informed him that the quest would unlock after using the item. He was immediately given 5 quests to explore, each describing where to find each sword. He was particularly interested in the quest to find the Sword of Jerva, hidden in the Olive Pass. The sword's owner was found dead in the ruins of Varus Street. He had been hacked to death with his own sword. This incident caused quite a stir among the Information Guild workers, as the sword was allegedly moving under the influence of someone's magic. Kiho was overjoyed. He was lucky. He might have simply missed the sword due to his reluctance to delve into that sea of books. He was grateful to Kia for taking all the arrogance out of him. It seemed he was on the right track, since everything was going so well. Now he needed to find a couple more books for Kia. Finally, he emerged from the portal, called out to Kia, and said he had arrived, but she didn't answer. Seeing her, he froze in surprise. She was sleeping on the couch. Apparently she fell asleep while waiting for him. He sat down next to her and thought that she should at least lie down on the bed, and his gaze lingered on her face, which evoked those very feelings in him. He was sure that he liked her, but living in 2 different worlds, did he have the right to reveal his feelings to her? All this time he had been silent, because demanding an answer from her would be too selfish. But wasn't the reason for these worries that he took this world extremely seriously? He needed to pluck up a little more courage. She interrupted his thoughts, calling out to him. She finally woke up. She rubbed her sleepy eyes and asked how long ago he had arrived. He had to wake her up. He nervously answered her that he had just returned, after which he handed her the book, and she delightedly said that she was holding it in her hands for the first time. After that, she smiled and thanked him, saying that she was so glad that he was her friend. The word friend made him feel uneasy, but he couldn't help it. He glanced out the window and noticed that the sun was setting, which meant it was time to hit the road. They should become good gamblers. This would all turn out with the evil spirit attacking Kiho and wounding him, and Virens would comment on all of this. He exclaimed that those who bet on him were unlucky, and the spectators laughed, and Kia, sitting among them, was very worried about her friend. MC's swords hovered next to him, ready to protect him, and Virens said that it didn't matter how good he was in the ordinary world, he couldn't reach them. The evil spirit stood in front of him and threatened him with a sword. He had the same skill. But despite his fatigue, Kiho decided to try again. Shortly before these events, the beginning of the event, the guests arrived at Olive Pass in luxurious carriages, all wearing cat masks. The organizer met them at the entrance to the ruins, and they passed through a barrier. Even though he was wearing a cat mask, it was immediately clear from the earring that it was Virens. Meanwhile, the two hid in the bushes. Kia noted that only those wearing cat masks were allowed inside, and the MC said that all the guests had come to place bets. He had a plan. To get inside, she had to somehow get a mask and blend in with the crowd. Then she would bet 100 Ormacon on him. She was very surprised and whispered, 100 tokens at once? Could they really make such a bet? He smirked and asked if she thought he would lose. She stared at him in surprise, then giggled and told him that he would never lose. On the contrary, he told her to believe in him, that there was a way to win if this place really was ruins. After that, the plan began to come to fruition. The MC approached the entrance to the ruins, and the man asked, "Is he perhaps Mose?" He immediately realized he was pretending not to know him, and confirmed it. The man said he could enter. The participants were entering in order. There were several more fighters ahead of him, a whole line. Let him go inside and not worry. Everyone had gathered in the arena. Kea had already merged with the crowd. Virens greeted all the guests and said that he saw excitement in their eyes and a desire to enjoy tonight's spectacle. After all, this night would bring a duel the likes of which these walls had never seen. The champion of Olive Pass, with 31 wins and 0 losses to his credit, an evil spirit of sleep, entered the arena. This is one of the most powerful spirits at the disposal of the Silver Cat Society, created from the soul of a swordsman who once decided to take a nap in Olive Pass. Paying for his foolishness, he is forever bound to this place, unable to free himself. Now let them welcome the second participant. Immortal, fearless, he took shooting lessons from the Blackest Spire, a large archer. A young man entered the arena, and Kiho wondered if the other fighters were also players. They must have come here to win the jackpot. The evil spirit had never lost a single one of his fights, so the battle would definitely not be easy. Virens announced the start of the fight, and the large archer wasted no time in attacking, but his opponent easily deflected his arrows. He released his sword. That was the mastery of the evil spirit. MC noticed his sword flying and wondered if it was one of the engraved blades. Meanwhile, the large archer was in shock as his face said, "People gather here for moments like these." The evil spirit swung his hand sharply, his sword struck the target, and Kiho closed his eyes, imagining the pain. The big archer was instantly defeated by such a blow and fell, and Virens declared the evil spirit victorious. The spectators began to laugh at him, calling him a foolish boy. What had he hoped for? Everyone knew he would lose, but not so quickly. Virens said that only 4 ormacon had been bet on the big archer. A couple of nobles must have made a symbolic bet purely out of pity. Kia nervously clenched her teeth and mentally called them all psychos, after which it was time for a new fight. The swordsman Mose entered the arena, and Virens said that it looked like the evil spirit finally had a worthy opponent. MC threw off his cloak, preparing for battle, and the spectators began to whisper, "Is the swordsman the one who carries out secret missions? Why is he taking part in this?" Everyone was sure that no one would bet on him now, which really angered Kia, who jumped up from her seat and exclaimed that she would bet 100 ormacon on the swordsman Mose. He looked at her with a smile, and the others were very surprised by her decision. She wasn't afraid of losing? Everyone called her decision stupid and that she was a rich upstart, and Virens thought, what was she doing? Their bet was being reduced. He laughed and told the other spectators not to be afraid to take risks. This fight promises to be interesting. He announced the start, and immediately after that, the evil spirit brought down its sword on him. But he did the same in return, blocking the blow with a flying sword. Virens delightedly said that he uses a similar skill, his sword's hovering. It is so unexpected and so exciting. The swords are aimed straight at the enemy. It seemed that one of the swords would now pierce the evil spirit's head, but in a second he appeared behind Kiho and struck him. He wondered if physical attacks weren't hitting him. Thanks to the item's passive skill, he wasn't cut into pieces. The evil spirit swung its sword again, and MC turned his weapon on it in response, and they began to fight. He nervously gritted his teeth, and thought that only Karma and Sharma could stop their fellow Jerv, who attacked from a distance. But those swords were primarily designed for thrusting, and he couldn't adequately parry Jerv's slashing blows, so he was left with no choice but to defend himself. Under these circumstances, he had no way to defeat the ghost with pure force, so first he needed to find a way to stop its sword, and he had the right skill for that. Lyro, who objectively wasn't a serious fighter, had earned the respect of the players, not through his strength, but through artifacts. If certain items were found in the ruins of ancient dungeons, they could be encased in a sphere. The skill was successful destruction. Perhaps the skill would work with a spirit bound to a sword? He could test it, but to do so, he first needed to be able to touch Jerv with his hand. The enemy's sword began to press against him, his breathing heavy, but he still stood firmly on his feet and prepared for the next attack. Virens noticed that he was tired and asked, "What's wrong?" He felt sorry for those who had bet on him. Kiho thought that now he should focus on the sword, not the ghost, and then sent his swords flying. Then the evil spirit waved his hand and Jerva, blocking the blades, flew next to Kiho, wounding him, which made Kia worried about him. Then the evil spirit clenched his fist and raised his hand, the sword at this time aimed at MC. He nervously gritted his teeth and thought that the only way to stop this was to let the sword pierce him. Jerva pierced his shoulder. He immediately grabbed the blade and used Lucky Destruction, after which a bright flash occurred and dust rose. Everyone froze in anticipation. The dust cleared, and the evil spirit began to disappear. He wept tears of blood and thanked him, then vanished into thin air. Kiho exhaled with relief, glanced at the sphere in his hand, and then raised his hand in victory. Virens exclaimed in surprise that it was simply incredible. He had defeated the absolute champion who had never known defeat. The spectators were shocked because they all lost their money, and the nobleman who had previously bet 100 on Mose received 231 ormacon. Kea smiled contentedly, and Virens thought that he hadn't expected guests with such large bets, but the money would circulate within the Silver Cat Society anyway. They would get these ormacon back through other events. Morning came, and Virens suddenly discovered a member of the society lying unconscious on the ground, and immediately realized that the one who had bet 100 ormacons was an imposter. He cursed loudly, while Kea gave Kiho their winnings, and said she had been so worried. What kind of magic did he use back then? He laughed and told her it was a gamble. If the skill hadn't worked, it would have been the end of him. She asked, since they had succeeded, how about going to play the slot machines? He shook his head, immediately declining her offer. He didn't want to lose again. It all ended with the Tigris Information Guild, having learned of Virens and Suyaman's machinations, placing a bounty on their heads the very next day after the events at Olive Pass. but they managed to cover their tracks. And the Silver Cat Society, which stood behind Viren's, was not mentioned in the investigation, nor was the possibility of high-ranking officials being involved in this matter. And yet, the fugitives won't have a peaceful life. Knowing the price on their heads and how much money the Silver Cat Society lost, it's not hard to guess that more than just mercenaries will be after these two. After that, Kiho and Kea went to the Information Guild to meet with the Golden Head Rairon. They met, and the head immediately suggested that they get down to business. What do they want to know? MC answered that they were looking for two immortals, a male mage and a female archer. He had heard that immortal mages were rare here. He smiled and noted that everything was correct. This mage was a surprisingly well-known person. It was not difficult for him to understand who they were talking about. They knew that he teleported before disappearing. They determined the point of departure, but they were unable to do the same with the point of arrival. However, they discovered that a forbidden spell called Telopi was used inside the White Tower, which hides the coordinates of the teleport. He worriedly asked, did this mean that he could have been kidnapped right during the teleportation? He answered him that if it was not he who used Telop but someone else, then everything is correct. It was a kidnapping. But this is only a guess, and they cannot verify it. He can only say that if there was a murder in the White Tower, they would know about it. So all that is known is that he left the tower alive. Therefore, they should visit the city of Lundavarun, since they are so worried about his fate. Some time ago, the kidnappers came to them. According to them, Sharon has been sleeping for about 4 hours, and the arrogant immortal woke up. Kellyan looked up at his kidnappers. Hosfoy and his friends stood in front of him. He remembered. He planned to teleport with Sharon to the Toika space, but as soon as he moved, he immediately realized that he was somewhere else. Then Hosfoy put the girl to sleep and attacked him. He caught his breath and asked him to stop right now. He pretended not to know how he used the telop. Hosfoy looked at him with irritation, then hit him in the side with a magic wand, making him scream, and said that he was an insolent guy. This idiot still doesn't understand the situation he's gotten himself into. Pride is a grave sin, and he wants to carve this lesson into his body. He continued to beat him, enjoying the process, and it got to the point where he started bleeding. He stopped, and one of his friends asked worriedly, "He's alive, right?" Hosfoy irritably called him an idiot and said that he was alive, and besides, he was immortal. At most, he broke his rib. Kellyan, meanwhile, nervously clenched his teeth and thought that he couldn't quit the game. If he didn't deal with these guys now, Sharon would suffer. He called out to Hosfoy's friends, calling them his faithful dogs, and asked if they were afraid that he would die. They always dreamed of catching up with him because they themselves were worthless. They studied according to the same curriculum. If they want to blame someone, then let them blame themselves. They didn't put in enough effort, and they don't even hesitate to mock him just because he's immortal. He clenched his fists and shouted that they were slandering the White Tower, and Hosfoy mockingly said that he knew how to speak beautifully. They knew it. After that, he grabbed him by the hair, lifting his head, and said that they had to suck up to the teachers all year, while he simply used his eloquence. If the committee had known he was immortal, they would never have given him the title of mage. His very existence has already tarnished the name of the White Tower. Now, maybe it's time for them to tell him about their plan. They'll start with his girlfriend. Kellyan was scared. He shouted that she had nothing to do with it, and he noted with a smirk that his reaction said otherwise. There's a homunculus lab in the basement of this tower, isn't there? He thinks an immortal could withstand a dozen experiments. This will allow them to better research the homunculus's combat power, so they'll have an excellent thesis. His friends laughed, and Kellyan exclaimed, "Have you completely lost your mind?" The boy looked at him and said he'd come up with something. This fun activity will help them earn mage titles. He ordered his friends to bring it here, and Kellyan was horrified, saying they were definitely crazy. They brought the Daklamas kaleidoscope. This device is strictly forbidden to use unless absolutely necessary. Opening a passage to another dimension through a mediator offers a chance to find a huge amount of knowledge, but the price is too high. Hosfoy said that he would be the key to the door to the new dimension. After all, no one knows yet what will happen if they open a portal with an immortal as a mediator, right? They will take the first step in an as-yet unknown direction of magic. They will become pioneers. And then a system window appeared in front of Kellyan. The secret quest Fighting Spirit has been activated. In the present day, Kiho and Kia arrived in Lundavarun. This city is located on the Aspargan continent and is a true shrine for mages, with a white tower rising at its very heart. They emerged into the main square, adorned with a majestic fountain and tower. Kia looked around in delight and said that it was clear at first glance that this was a city of mages. Even the architecture was unique. They were intrigued by the magic circles around the fountain. When people stepped on them, they disappeared. A young man noticed Kiho's interest and whispered to him that this was a detour. He immediately recoiled from him with a frightened cry, and the guy apologized to them for his sudden appearance. He didn't mean to scare them. Lately, many people have been having trouble finding the Lundavarun Information Guild. That's why the guild sent him to help them. His name is Zaire. He's an inquisitor. Let them follow him. They both looked at him warily. MC immediately noticed that he was incredibly strong, most likely easily comparable to Lidorn. He asked, how would he know if he was really from the Information Guild? Zaire immediately apologized to him. He was always in a hurry, and he was still learning. He was a homunculus created by the mages of the White Tower and loyal to the Information Guild. The mark on his face confirmed this. Kiho was surprised and asked, so he's an artificial human? Is that even possible? He answered that, of course, artificially creating life isn't easy, but the mages of the White Tower are capable of it. The city of Lundavaran was founded by magicians, so within its borders, citizens and visitors can freely use spatial magic. These bypasses are part of the city's infrastructure. A huge spatial stone underground allows travel without the use of a teleportation stone, and he knows everything about them. If he becomes their guide through the city, will their doubts be dispelled? Traveling through the streets only allows access to public areas of the city. Special routes are inaccessible to the uninitiated. MC decided to trust him and agreed, and then the three of them stood in a magic circle and set out. They arrived at the Information Guild, and Zaire asked them to follow him. He would lead them to the Golden Leader. When they met him, they explained their problem, and the leader, puzzled, said that he confirmed that there had been an incident of teleportation inside the tower. Kiho noted that it was considered impossible to get inside, and he confirmed this. The territory of the White Tower is controlled by magicians, so the Information Guild cannot interfere. Zaire explained that it is like a swordsman's shrine. The Golden Leader said there were no other ways to get into the White Tower except by passing the trial of the mages. He wished he could give them a different answer. After that, he left and was replaced by Zaire, who said there was still something that could be done. Money opens all doors, and this was also true for the White Tower. They could hire a mage to help them get in. MC whispered, then why did the leader say there were no ways? He also whispered that officially entering the mage's territory was extremely difficult, and he was here to help them get in unofficially. He took the sphere and contacted someone named Raiden, saying he had a favor to ask. He would like to introduce someone to a mage, and it would be best to do it quickly. Raiden told him to go to the southeastern building. They would discuss everything in person, and Kiho and Kea exchanged joyful glances. After that, Zaire suggested that they go there quickly. They would meet the mage who would become their key. They left the guild, and Zaire told them they needed to get out of the dimensional stone zone. It was very important. MC thanked him for his help, and at that moment, indignant voices of protesters against the immortals were heard from the side. Zaire immediately put a hood on Kiho and apologized, saying it wouldn't be for long. The protesters gathered in one place, telling the immortals to get lost. This was their world, and Kia asked who these people were. Zaire answered that they were Lidorn's followers, and MC's expression immediately changed. They follow the will of the late Lidorn, and their power grows day by day. According to guild information, he already has about 3 million followers. More precisely, this is the number of those who openly express their position. To this number, you can easily add tens of millions of residents of various cities who avoid players because of them. Actually, we're talking hundreds of millions. He turned to Kiho and said that he was the immortal who killed Lidorn, so he should hide his face. They needed to go somewhere else before they got into trouble. They passed by the devastated crowd, and MC felt uneasy listening to the indignant cries. When they entered a quiet place, Kia immediately asked him if he was okay, and he told her that he was just feeling a little sick. Suddenly, Zaire's sphere activated, and he received a call from Raiden. The man, with an anxious voice, told him that there was a swordsman in the building now, some man who called himself a master from Laosuan, so nothing would work out. After that, he heard the man scream and wheezing, and he didn't answer anymore. Zaire called out him worriedly several times, but he didn't answer. Then the man's voice came from the sphere. He said that he was looking for 2 swordsmen from Aspargan, Kiho, and Kia. Hearing their names, they immediately became nervous, and Zaire quickly ended the connection and turned to them, asking why the master from Lusuan was looking for them. Had they broken the rules of swordsmen? MC exclaimed that was impossible, and Kia said that if they had broken the rules, their mentor would have come for them. The master from Lusuan had no reason to pursue them. They would immediately head to Aspargan and find out what the problem was on the spot. Kiho nodded, agreeing with her, and Kia asked Zaire what he would do. Would he hand them over to the swordsman? He answered that that was not true. In any case, his job was to help them. Besides, he trusted them more than the swordsman who attacked the Information Guild headquarters. Kia smiled, saying that she understood everything, and when Zaire suggested they take a detour, Kia suddenly became very scared and immediately looked up to the sky. They also raised their heads to check what was going on, and saw that the sky had turned purple, and the top of the tower was shining brightly. Zaire suspected something was wrong and said that they needed to leave immediately. They would use the detour. The flash from the tower sent sparks flying, and as they fell into the city, they caused fires. The townspeople scattered in panic, and when MC and the others approached the tower, Batman, Janir, stood in their way. He measured Kiho with his gaze and said that they had finally met. He became nervous, not knowing who he was, and then Janir took out a teleportation stone and used it, summoning his subordinates. Azera and Larif, the Laosuan swordsmen, immediately answered their master's call and emerged from the portal. Kea, hearing their introductions, became very nervous. She realized it was his voice coming from the crystal ball. Janir said that he had turned a blind eye to what was happening in the Aspargan sanctuary for a long time. So he was the boy who killed Lidorn and became a folk hero? The prince was young and foolish, but he did the right thing, where he realized that immortals were parasites on the world. He drew his sword and waved it threateningly, saying that therefore they too would do what must be done. The Laozuan swordsman also prepared for battle, and Kia, preparing to defend herself, exclaimed, "Do they even know what the consequences will be?" Asura smirked and asked, "What's wrong? Or did she not know that immortals mock and kill people for fun?" His fellow swordsman died like a dog, accused of breaking the rules, and some immortal was taken in his place. Is she implying that they are betraying such a shameful organization as the swordsman? His partner Larif said that they had been through a lot, keeping secrets and carrying out missions. That was the duty of swordsmen. They were the ones who maintained the balance of the world, but they accepted into their ranks someone who upsets that balance. They both threw the rings off their fingers and exclaimed, "Does she even know how disgusting this is?" She ordered them to stop insulting Aspargan, and Junior asked, "Is that an insult?" In his opinion, it was a statement of fact. The one who remains alive today will be right. Immediately after these words, he jumped up and found himself in front of Kiho. Seeing the blade right in front of his face, he was frightened, but he quickly reacted and drew his sword, blocking the blow, but he didn't notice something. The blow threw him to the side. He hit his head, and blood gushed from his mouth. Seeing this, Kia called out to him worriedly, but this distracted her. Asura had already attacked her, using his special technique, making several lunges forward, but she masterfully dodged each one and then increased the distance between them. The boy grinned and exclaimed that that wasn't all, then enveloped his sword in aura and lunged at her. But his blade collided with the magical barrier Zaire had erected. Asura cursed, and his comrade told him to leave, then thrust his sword into the ground, causing a wall of thorns to emerge. Zaire tried to dodge, but one of the thorns grew right in front of his face and cut him, causing him to fall to one knee. Kia worriedly called out to Kiho, asking if he was okay, and he told her that they should worry about Zaire now. Recovering from that blow, he told them that the three of them could defeat those two, but they would never defeat that swordsman here. They needed to leave, and quickly. That thorn had left a mark on him after all, and his face had split. He told them that he would lead the two of them to a detour. His magic would only delay him for half a second, but that would be enough to prevent them from tracking where they were going. He will have a chance to create a passage for them, but Larif damaged his eye. Now it will take him about 3 minutes to prepare the spell. When everything is ready, let them try to keep their leader away from the bypass. When he freezes him, they will run to the passage as fast as they can. Kia asked worriedly, "Are they sure they will succeed? Half a second is still very little." He answered her that if they attack head-on, they will be finished. Janir heard their conversation. He went towards them and told the homunculus that he is quite good, considering his nature. The scientists of the White Tower were not idle. Suddenly the ground shook. A flash at the top of the White Tower turned into a magic circle, from which a beam of light rushed into the sky. They all looked at it, and MC exclaimed indignantly, "Is this also his work?" He answered him that he knows nothing about the affairs of magicians. But isn't this flash because of the immortals? All the strange things in their world started happening after their appearance. He asked why he had such an attitude towards the immortals. Was it something personal? He grinned and told him that 17 years ago, as a young apprentice, he was tasked with protecting a village in the Gara Mountains. That's when he realized the importance of their work. They worked hard for a long time and fulfilled their duty with honor, but now the inhabitants of that village are dead, every single one killed. Because the immortals decided to turn that place into a base for their guild and drove the inhabitants into the mountains, swarming with hungry trolls. He saw it himself and knows they, the immortals, are greedy worms devouring this world. Swordsmen should destroy people like them, not accept their ranks. Such things are absolutely unacceptable. Kia immediately came to her friend's defense, covering him with her body and saying that he was absolutely right. With the appearance of the immortals, problems came to their world that they had never known about before. It cannot be denied that the balance of the world is being disrupted because of them. But the immortal he now pointed his sword at is called Mose. He fought evil, protected the inhabitants of this world more than anyone else. He is blinded by anger, and he does not even want to understand the situation. His judgment is biased. Janir lowered his gaze and noted that there is nothing more senseless than fighting for ideology. For only the one who survives can be right. He swung his sword, the wind rose, demonstrating its power, and Kiho, along with the girl, rushed to attack. She rushed forward, accompanied by his swords, and when they approached the enemy, he easily parried them all, but Kia remained. She was about to deliver a thrust, but by that moment, Janir had already prepared himself. Seeing that he was about to attack, MC nervously cursed and thrust his sword into the floor right between them, which forced the man to retreat, but he had a new opportunity to attack. He sheathed his sword and shifted his stance, preparing for something. Kiho found this suspicious, and Zaire immediately realized how dangerous it would be and ordered Kea to step aside. Junior then began using the 7th style, Feather, and as soon as his blade emerged from its sheath, a huge dome covered the area, destroying everything. This dome also hit the girl, throwing her aside and rolling along the ground, and then a strong wind arose, making it difficult for them to see. After a few seconds, everything calmed down. Junior was about to attack again, but suddenly froze because a magic circle appeared in front of his face. It was Zaire's doing. He finished preparing the spell, and Kiho and Kea began to act, having only half a second. The city square lit up with a bright flame, and suddenly a magical seal appeared in its place. The protagonist realized he was almost there when he turned around and saw that Zere had been attacked, his blood spilling. He looked at his friend in fear and realized he was being attacked by Junior, who suddenly turned and looked at Kia. Kia was also terrified and afraid, but Mose noticed her approach and shouted her name. Suddenly, he tried to protect her, and a blade pierced him through. His blood spilled onto the floor, and the system reported his health at 3%. His entire body shook, and the blood continued to pour out. Kia, terrified for him, began screaming in a trembling voice, "Mose, how did this happen?" He extended his hand toward her, warning her not to come closer, and shouted for her to leave right now. Kia cried and couldn't move, but he kept shouting that he would find her, that he would return, and definitely find her. She had to survive no matter what. Kia obeyed his orders and began to flee, but Junior wouldn't let her. He grabbed his sword and pointed it at the protagonist, who screamed that his opponent was still him. At that moment, Mose used his swords to defeat his opponent, who stood immobilized in a confident stance. A moment later, the protagonist was attacked again in the shoulder, and his blood spilled even more intensely. He was utterly terrified by the pain and had no strength left, causing him to collapse to the ground. Junior looked into the distance and realized he had missed one. Kia had managed to escape through the portal. He told his subordinates to go, and they followed him. Moments later, Mose's health dropped to 0. He lay there, looking at the sky, and the system reported that he had died and would not be able to enter the circuit for the next 7 days. 7 days of real time equal 21 in-game days. After some time, the protagonist finally managed to rise from his seat and screamed loudly in horror. When he awoke on his bed, he was trying to catch his breath, cold sweat pouring down his body. He felt extremely ill and began to vomit. He ran to the bathroom and began vomiting. His death in the game had also affected his physical condition. He felt icy, trembling hands and thought about Kia, wondering if she had managed to escape. If only she could reach the heavenly ruler safely, she would be safe aboard. Then let her return to the sanctuary and all would be well. Master Robin was there. However, 3 weeks would pass in the circuit, and who knows what could happen during that time. What if he never saw her again? Even 3 hours after leaving the circuit, Kiho couldn't stop thinking about Kia and Master Junior. He was deeply worried and thought that he understood that as an immortal, he would definitely return and find him again. And then today's situation would repeat itself, perhaps even methodically killing him after each return. Mose understood that he needed to become strong enough to defeat Junior. After some time, Limpu asked the Nightmaster if he was okay. He asked not to worry, as he swears on Belik's name that he will escort them to their destination safe and sound. She chuckled at how self-assured it sounded, but she didn't think the guild could handle such a problem. She turned to the knight and asked if he wanted to return. He replied that it seemed they could use some help. After some time, a purple sky appeared above the tower, and a bright flash spread everywhere. Numerous beams of light began to fall directly from the sky into the forest, and a bright dome appeared over the city. The monster's sharp blades finally opened a passage to the world they so desperately desired. When a bright beam of light emanated from the tower, Kellyan called his enemy a freak and asked if he even realized what he'd done. He opened a passage to another dimension where his master resided. Hosfoy replied that this couldn't be happening. A portal must have opened. A gate had simply appeared here. Did he see? Kellyan screamed. But he was the one who created the inventory they use. He was just an idiot. This isn't some empty dimension where you can just mess around and take things out. At that moment, Hosfoy became enraged and, grabbing his staff, yelled at him to shut up because he'd succeeded. He swung at Kellyan, who had grabbed his body with his arms, and as luck would have it, his staff was thrown aside. Kellyan noticed this and shouted a spell, grabbing the staff in his hands. With these spells, he struck his enemy Hosfoy directly, who fell to the ground. Blood started pouring from his mouth, and those around him were shouting that he'd lost his staff, that he was just a little idiot. At that moment, Kellyan was thinking about how those fingers were no match for papers. He was trying to catch his breath when he suddenly noticed something was wrong. Far away from him was Sharon, tied to a post. He grabbed her by the shoulders and shouted her name again, but she didn't hear anything, so he raised the staff to her face and cast a spell. Suddenly, she opened her eyes and asked, clutching her head, did she fall asleep? He called her name again and asked how she was feeling. She turned around in surprise and asked, him? Where was she anyway? She clearly remembered escaping from Lydorn. Kellyan apologized to her, saying that a lot of time had passed since then, and he would tell her everything. God, but now they needed to get out of here. Suddenly, she cried out in horror. Kellyan grabbed her hand and insisted they were out of time and that she needed to hurry. He pulled her along, then heard his name, and Sharon said he'd saved her in the battle with Valero. She owed him a huge thank you. Kellyan begged her not to thank him, as it was because of him that she'd fallen into that bastard's clutches and ended up here. She'd been unconscious for almost 10 in-game days. Sharon was surprised and exclaimed, what? How long? But how could that even be possible? Kellyan, confused, realized the teleport he'd used was a fake and had led them here. Then the magic worked, putting her to sleep. But he knew the way, so let her follow him. After a while, they arrived at the arch, and turning to Sharon, he asked if she wasn't afraid of heights. Sharon was surprised and asked again, why is he asking that? Actually, she was afraid. He replied, okay. Even if that's the case, there's nothing they can do about it. Let her forgive him for being rude. He took her in his arm, and Sharon was surprised by this. After which, Kellyan rushed to run straight into the wall. but Sharon shouted at him to wait, because there was a wall in front of them. She was incredibly scared, and her mouth was open in shock, and moments later a bright light appeared in front of her. She had to close her eyes because she couldn't see anything, but when the light cleared a little, she looked ahead questioningly and saw them begin to fall down from a huge high-rise building. Sharon was scared and screamed that they were falling. At that moment, a bright flash of light occurred in the tower, and Kellyanne landed easily on the sidewalk, looking at a terrified Sharon. She inhaled heavily, and Kellyanne said that they had teleported to Toiko. It was definitely safe here. He wanted to tell her so much, but it was better for them to say goodbye here. He thought she should also log out and take care of herself and the real world. Sharon replied that was true. She hadn't contacted him in 3 days, and it was time. Someone might have even alerted the police, and they might have broken into her home. She decided to leave, but Kellyanne suddenly asked her to stay a minute. He wanted to tell her that he'd been making sure nothing happened to her while she slept, but if any side effects occurred, she should definitely contact him using the crystal ball. He placed the crystal ball in her hands and said he'd be glad to see her again. He also sincerely apologized for getting her into this mess. After these words, he turned and walked away in an unknown direction. Sharon watched him silently, asking, why does he keep apologizing? She felt embarrassed by these thoughts and stood there for a while. Meanwhile, the same monster that had appeared in the forest was saying that a passage to the world they so ardently desired had appeared. They were born to colonize. The majority had entrusted them with a new task, to subjugate another world. At that moment, the remaining monsters began to roar loudly, determined to conquer this world, shouting and waving their sharp weapons everywhere. Those same bright purple lights emanating from the ground to the sky indicated the arrival of more and more terrifying, enormous goblins who had decided to attack the land. The system reported a random quest. The cruelty level increased, the difficulty level C, the outskirts of Lundavarun. Could it really be that the forces of justice only had 300 men? 300 of them far outnumbered the Imperial army of 2,000. The commander replied that they knew nothing about the strength of their army. They had homunculi at their disposal, which were essentially weapons. The homunculi were controllable creatures and stared emotionlessly ahead. The boy laughed, claiming that these weapons were created by mages, so he shouldn't forget that. The knight asked, then why didn't he use this boiled magic to tell them who had crossed the boundary between worlds here? Had they been able to learn anything? That since the portal opened, several hundred scavengers had come into their possession. Frankly, he himself wondered if the problem was so serious that they even needed to involve the forces of justice. But orders were orders, and they couldn't argue with that. At that moment, the knights shouted that the enemy was advancing. These were scavengers, the same ones that had been attacking ordinary people. The monsters were terrifying in appearance, with huge, long tongues and fangs that began to approach. The knight shouted for the first squad to move forward and extended his hand. All the knights used their spears and attacked the first scavengers that appeared in their path. They began stabbing the creatures with their spears, but the commander sensed something was wrong. Hadn't they said there were hundreds? They looked much smaller, and they looked strange too. At that moment, a knight turned to the commander and asked him to come over. The inspector reported that there were strange wounds on certain parts of these monsters. They weren't from their weapons. He should see for himself. Bed approached and asked what it was. Had immortals intervened in the battle? The knight replied that it seemed the scavengers were fleeing from something. At that moment, they turned to the side and heard loud voices in the distance. Enormous, strange creatures, an incredible number, were fleeing from there. Bed became terrified and shouted to the warriors to prepare for battle and to reform. At that moment, the monsters began to approach them ever closer, determined to kill them all. The commander shouted for the second squad to relieve the first. The homunculi were to build barricades and block their path. He, frightened, shouted at his knights to act faster, but these monsters were already attacking the first knight standing on the flank. One of the knights struck the monster with a spear, but he couldn't understand what was happening. The monster began to emit dark magical powers from its chest and became extremely angry. A moment later, when it screamed loudly, the knights flew off in different directions. This had no effect on the monster, although it was already in its chest and blood was spilling. The mages realized it was a shower of stars. At that moment, numerous rays from the sky began to fall to the ground and explode. After a while, when the dust cleared a little, the monsters rose from their places, and he screamed, "What kind of creatures have come into their world?" The knight, frightened, shouted that there were too many of them. One of the monsters turned sharply and saw the commander. He was dumbfounded and didn't know what to do. At that moment, several more knights from the Watchtower Player Guild burst into their team. They ranked 7th in the official guild rankings, a master warrior. The battle continued, and numerous monsters clashed with the approaching knights. Bed realized it was an immortal, of course, and became angry. Immortals are those who are not afraid to die, so even in the face of mortal danger, immortals rush toward their goal without a hint of a setting. This makes them a great threat to all those forced to earn their status through sweat and blood, trying not to die in battle. This is especially true for mercenaries. However, in the event of a real threat to the Imperial army's defeat, the immortals' intervention was only beneficial, although it hurt the pride of the fighters. People shouted that they were going there, And at that moment, the girl turned to her friend and asked how he was feeling. He replied that he was very scared and shaking with fear. She stroked his head and told him that everything was fine because they had this guy. When this saint gives him her answer, all living beings will gain infinite power and the ability to defeat darkness with light. The knight cast the prayer of repentance, increasing melee attack power by 240%, all abilities by 32 points, movement speed by 33%, and the effect lasts 311 minutes and 48 seconds. Paladin morale. Regeneration rate is 13 points per second, all abilities by 18 points, movement speed is increased by 18%, and the effect lasts 18 minutes and 1 second. The Holy Prayer spell also has alleviation of suffering at level 2, increasing all abilities by 22 points, movement speed by 15%, and the effect lasts 21 minutes and 19 seconds. After some time, the sky darkened with clouds. The knight spoke. Did they emerge from that portal? Their lives could be the key to resolving the conflict, so let them not expect mercy from him or beg him. With these words, he decided to attack them. After some time, the system informed him of a random quest, an important battle of difficulty level S. He saw a reward of 1.5 million and didn't know where they came from or how they came, but these creatures were undoubtedly a threat to this world. It's sad to say, but they will all die at his hands. At that moment, the monsters became enraged and shouted at him for being an insolent unit, like dust under their feet and talking too much. They tried to inflict damage, but the knight fled from his position, and the monster was surprised by his speed. Moments later, the very monster that had tried to pounce on him saw a spear before his eyes. He wielded his weapon with ease, swinging it in all directions. The blood of these creatures splashed, and moments later, the knight stopped in the middle of the clearing. The surrounding monsters who had seen him fight realized that he was strong, at the level of 1,000 seals. Let them report him to the commander. The knight who heard about this asked, 1,000 seals? That's their rank designation. Then, they wouldn't have to go. He'd let them prove their existence themselves. With these words, he swung his sword and the system reported that he'd already earned 362 points. Those around the knight understood that if they continued like this, they would soon receive their share of the quest, right? In that case, it would be better to wait for other guilds to join, rather than start a full-scale war. At that moment, one of the knights screamed, "The Libakan are returning to them again." He asked, "Has the wave volume decreased slightly?" He was already fired up by the idea. At that moment, he shouted for everyone to get ready. They were using the same tactics as before. The priests should support the front line. He suggested stopping this wave and not dying. At that moment, he looked in front of him and was horrified. Shock was written across his face, and he asked, "What is this?" A huge, unknown figure appeared before them, and he asked, "What the hell is this? Is this what a labaka looks like? Anyone with a scouting crystal should show me an image." One of the knights pulled out the orb, and the magic ball began to glow, and everyone wondered what it was. It looked like they were planning to break through to the Lundavaran gates. Only the back wall was lower. Why? Maybe they didn't have enough magic? It was an enchanted wall, after all. His subordinate said that they would therefore return to the castle and wait for them to approach and attack from the rear. These creatures probably devised this strategy to hold the maximum number of troops at the Lundavaran gates and then enter. But in any case, to enter the castle gates, they would have to break out of the barrier. This way, they could form a pincer movement from the sides, targeting the resulting gaps. The knight remarked that, after all, this was a game. There was always a strategy, and they were a horde of mobs. Gilma shouted at the watchtower to take command of the troops on the left side of the gate. They should station an army from each guild to the right of the gate behind the wall, and concentrate archers there in the rear. After a while, the dark mass was bearing down on the knights. The wall was already right next to the fortress, and Bed couldn't understand what kind of magic it was. They were even taller than the walls of their fortress. When the walls opened, they should act and prepare immediately. At that moment, silence fell, and for a while, nothing happened. The boy wondered what was happening and why they weren't coming out. They noticed black smoke coming from the walls and didn't understand what it was. This dark smoke began to spread throughout the area, and from it, the bright eyes of monsters began to appear. The Grey Kings were frightened by what they saw and began shouting, "It's a Lebakan! They're giving in to them right now." Everyone stood stunned, unsure what to do. The monsters shouted that it was time to repeat and rushed from this wall straight into the fortress, jumping with ease. Meanwhile, the protagonist was on his ship. When he looked out the window, it was already dark. Kia picked up the book and thought with tears in her eyes. She heard Elsha ask if she was okay. Maybe she was still grieving? Kia sat in tears and silence, then said that Mose died for her, and at that moment all she could do was run away. Elsha replied that her master, Immortal, would overcome death for her sake and return. She wiped the tears from her face and replied, yes, that was true, so she wasn't so shocked when his comrades died. However, for some reason, she couldn't accept Mose's death as calmly. She looked at her and said that this speaks to how important Mose is to her. Kia turned to her and silently looked down, lowering her gaze, answering, yes, Elsha. She wanted to someday convey to Mose the words written in the last chapter of the Kafir Minstrel. When he returns, she'll definitely tell him about it. With these words, she clutched the book to her chest, then stood up, and heading for the exit, addressed Elsha one last time. She replied, yes, and Kia asked her to turn on the light, as she had somewhere to go. Sometime later, the protagonist was at the hairdresser's, and the barber informed him that everything was ready. He looked at himself, and the barber asked, "Are you okay with this?" He looked in the mirror, embarrassed, and thought about his awkwardness. He answered, "Yes." The barber also advised him to buy this shampoo, and when the protagonist looked at the receipt, he was surprised at how much the haircut cost. It took less than 10 minutes. He hadn't expected to spend money on such a thing, but today he went out to spend it. At that moment, he was wandering around the city with many bags in his hands. His first death in circuit and 3 days in reality. Only when the game was blocked did he enjoy his good fortune. First of all, he moved out of his cramped apartment and signed a lease for a nicer one. He marveled at the frame bed, the wooden closet, the table, the new toilet, and there was no mold. He'd given his parents 10 million won each, and he'd done nothing wrong when they called him asking how he'd gotten so much money. They'd interrogated him in a terrifying voice, and he hadn't even considered things like a penthouse or an expensive car. They were quite surprised. He had enough tokens to buy everything he wanted, but he had his own reasons for spending so much. It had been a while since he'd started playing. The average user level was also quite high. As the average player's stats increased, quest rewards began to decrease, making it harder to earn tokens. The real value of one Ormicon token was close to 180 million. He reflected that he'd exchanged 2 tokens last night, and now had 137. Due to high prices, volume restrictions had also been introduced. He didn't need to spend more than he needed, so he decided to hold on to the remaining tokens for now. To spend money, he needed to know how to spend it. At that moment, he saw a call notification and answered, saying hello and asking what happened. Someone started shouting at him, "Hello sir, Kiho. What house did you move into?" He had to put the phone away because of the loud shouting, and he asked again, "Did you see that on your profile?" His friend replied that he thought it was Circuit, but he had moved to a place like this. Kiho replied that his father's work had been going well lately. His friend was happy that he was earning a living and should throw a housewarming party. Kiho replied that he didn't even have a refrigerator yet and that he would call when he was comfortable. His friend replied that in that case, they would be in touch, and the protagonist said goodbye. He began to think that he had become so engrossed in the world of Circuit that he had forgotten everyone else, and that a sense of reality was slowly returning to him. Perhaps what happened was a bit of a blessing in disguise. He looked ahead with these emotions, and suddenly heard someone's voice announce that they would now discuss the Manchu quest. He turned around and saw that it was the news, with journalists discussing the fact that over 12,000 Labakan had been destroyed. Considering the original Leban population of 1.5 million, their damage could be considered catastrophic. The good news is that very high-level players are still actively participating in the game. The future of this quest looks positive, but the city of Lundavaran is half captured due to superior enemy forces. The protagonist asked if the city had really fallen. Journalists had reported that floating ships were evacuating residents from the city one by one, and now about the latest news. Horus, one of the famous floating ships, attempted to escape with approximately 360 surviving NPCs on board, but was ultimately sunk. Do they remember Mose, one of the most famous users? He also attracted attention because he was the only user with a ship, right? According to eyewitness accounts, a golden ship supposedly belonging to a user named Mose was also apparently destroyed. Mose was stunned by this news and didn't know how to react. Journalists continued to say that he also participated in rescuing survivors in the city, and it was a shame that the only user ship was almost shot down. The protagonist was very upset and didn't know how to react. When he arrived home and put on his gaming glasses, he thought, "This simply can't be right." He tried to open access, and the system reported that less than 7 days had passed since his death, and he couldn't connect. He became angry and started yelling for access several more times, but the system repeated that it wouldn't allow him access. He thought he would find safety in the Celestial Ruler. He asked to be connected to Kea, and begged her to please tell him that everything wasn't as he thought. He thought about her while Kea herself stood next to Elsha, who asked, "What's wrong?" Kea thought she heard Moses' voice. They crossed Mount Langaroo. Was she looking for something there? Kea confirmed this and said she would try to find the man. He was a master of the Espargan sword,